Rikuto watched the students from the rooftop, observing as they talked and laughed among themselves. He sat on the edge of the building, his gaze fixed on the scene below. He wanted nothing more than to put an end to this endless cycle, this cruel joke that life had played on him. Earlier that day, he had been confronted again by a man who had beaten him before. The man was furious, shouting at Rikuto for neglecting his cleaning duties once more. The floor was still a mess, and his anger showed no restraint. When Rikuto lifted his eyes to look at him, the man took it as a challenge. Without hesitation, he struck Rikuto, kicking him to the ground and berating him further. It was his job to clean, the man reminded him, since he had been taken in after his parents had died. A woman stood nearby, watching the scene unfold with an amused expression. She smiled, commenting on how expected this was, considering the kind of parents Rikuto had come from. They had never treated him as part of the family, only as an obligation, a burden they had taken on unwillingly. He was nothing more than a servant to them, constantly reminded of his worthlessness. Later, Rikuto opened the door to another room, where a younger boy sat waiting for him. The boy quickly shifted the blame for the mess onto Rikuto, making it clear that it was all his fault. He deliberately knocked over a can of soda, watching as the liquid spread across the floor, and then mockingly declared that it was now Rikuto's responsibility to clean it up. Approaching Rikuto, the boy smirked at his battered state, finding amusement in his suffering. When Rikuto arrived at school, his misery only deepened. His desk had been defaced, covered in cruel scribbles and mocking words, with a vase of flowers placed on it as a sick joke. Laughter filled the room as the other students whispered behind his back, ridiculing him. The teacher entered the classroom and immediately noticed the vandalized desk. Without even pausing to consider the situation, the teacher scolded Rikuto, blaming him for the state of his own desk as if he had done it himself. As the day progressed, Rikuto found himself cornered in the hallway. A sudden shove sent him crashing into the lockers, his breath knocked out of him. 3 classmates surrounded him, their eyes filled with malice. They demanded money, 2,000 yen, every single day. They had done this before, and Rikuto knew there was no way out. Clenching his fists, he wished he had the strength to fight back, but he knew it was futile. One of the boys kicked him in the stomach, causing him to double over in pain. Another followed up with a strike to his face. The assault continued as they taunted him, calling him pathetic, accusing him of mocking them with his silent defiance. They jeered at him, telling him to ask his parents for money, fully aware that he had none. While the blows rained down on him, Rikuto's mind drifted. He thought about how worthless life was, how everyone around him was nothing but garbage. Yet, despite that, he felt like he was even worse than all of them combined. At some point, his phone slipped from his pocket and fell to the ground. One of the bullies noticed it immediately, and before Rikuto could reach for it, stomped down on it, shattering the screen with an audible crack. A smirk spread across the bully's face as he feigned innocence, claiming it had been an accident. Rikuto lowered his head, accepting the inevitable. Seeing his reaction, the bully lifted his foot again, preparing to strike him next. However, before the kick could land, someone intervened. A hand firmly grasped the bully's shoulder, stopping him mid-motion. It was Nishi, the star of the Western-style archery team and a recent winner of the national tournament. His sudden presence caused a stir among the students, especially the girls, who were quick to admire him even as he came to the aid of someone like Rikuto. Nishi's grip on the bully's shoulder tightened, causing the boy to wince in pain. The bully hesitated, uncertain of how strong Nishi actually was. One of the others, seeing an opportunity, grabbed a baseball bat and moved to strike Nishi from behind. But before the blow could land, Nishi reacted with swift precision, delivering a punch that sent the attacker sprawling to the ground. With the fallen boy groaning in pain, Nishi expressed his disgust. He found the sight of these kinds of people despicable. Without further argument, the bullies backed away, muttering under their breaths as they left. They knew they had lost this round. Once they were gone, Nishi crouched beside Rikuto, who lay bruised and bleeding on the ground. He observed him for a moment, noting how lifeless he seemed. He spoke, but Rikuto gave no response. Eventually, Rikuto found the strength to stand up, turning away without so much as a word. As Nishi watched him go, he was surprised by how steady Rikuto seemed, despite the heavy beating he had taken. For a moment, he wondered if Rikuto had somehow managed to avoid taking the full brunt of the attacks, dodging at the last second. But he quickly dismissed the thought. This wasn't a movie after all. Now, sitting alone on the rooftop, Rikuto stared at his broken phone, his mind weighed down by despair. He looked up at the sky, his voice barely above a whisper. Everything was over. He was tired of living like this. He climbed onto the fence surrounding the rooftop, perching on the edge with his arms outstretched. It was time to put an end to this stupid game. But before he could act, something strange happened. The sky, which had been clear moments before, suddenly darkened. Bolts of lightning crackled across the horizon, forming strange circular patterns. The air itself seemed to shift as an unnatural energy coursed through the atmosphere. From within the swirling circles of light, something began to descend. Bars of binary code, glowing with an eerie intensity, rained down upon the city, striking buildings with devastating force. The impact shattered structures, sending debris flying in all directions. Phones across the city began to emit a piercing, unnatural noise. Panic spread as people screamed, dropping their malfunctioning devices to the ground. Their screens flickered wildly, displaying strange symbols and unreadable text. Rikuto, still on the rooftop, observed the chaos with wide eyes. He had no idea what was happening. Then, a sound caught his attention, a scream of pure terror. He turned his gaze toward the students below, where one of them stood frozen, their face filled with horror. Their phone, still in their hand, displayed an ominous string of binary code. The numbers twisted and pulsed, forming a translucent bubble around the device. The bubble expanded, its surface rippling and distorting before it suddenly burst. What emerged from within was no longer data, but something alive. The creature that took shape was monstrous. Its jagged teeth gleamed as it grinned, its eyes gleaming with an unnatural hunger. The student barely had time to react before it lunged at them, and it wasn't alone. All around, similar creatures began to materialize, emerging from the students' phones. Dragons, goblins, and other unspeakable horrors spilled into reality, their forms fully solid as they turned their attention toward the terrified masses. The world had changed in an instant, and the nightmare was only beginning. Rikuto, who remained safe on the terrace, could hear the desperate cries for help echoing below. He watched as the students were attacked, each one collapsing under the onslaught of creatures he couldn't comprehend. Fear and confusion clouded his thoughts. He had no idea what was happening. All around the world, similar horrors unfolded, as mysterious monsters appeared out of nowhere, tearing apart everything in their path. Society crumbled in an instant, and it was believed that less than a tenth of the global population had survived. No one initially understood the cause of the catastrophe, but eventually, a group of young individuals uncovered the terrifying truth. At first, it seemed like nothing more than an eerie coincidence. The monsters emerged from people's smartphones. That was all. And yet, the consequences were beyond imagination. In the aftermath, survivors would forever remember that day, giving it a name that would haunt them for the rest of their lives: the Day of Judgment. Sitting on the railing of the school terrace, Kurogane observed the chaos beneath him with a distant expression. The thought lingered in his mind: was it truly possible that monsters from fantasy worlds had suddenly begun eradicating humanity? A slow smile spread across his lips as he convinced himself that, in the end, he had managed to put a stop to it. The desperate screams of those below barely registered in his mind as he listened to their pleas for help, their voices filled with fear and despair. It was a scene of merciless destruction, yet all he could think about was how the ones who had once humiliated and mocked him were now at the mercy of these creatures. A cruel sense of satisfaction filled him, justice perhaps, or something even darker. They had scorned him, looked down on him, laughed at him. Now they were paying the price. To him, they deserved it. Every last one of them could perish, trapped in the claws of the monsters they had never believed in. Still smiling, Rikuta found himself perplexed by how real the dream felt. He had seen dreams before, nightmares even, but none as vivid as this. Even those unrelated to him were being chased down, their fate sealed by creatures they had never encountered before. The boy who stood beside him, however, did not share his amusement. As he watched the unfolding nightmare, despair crept into his heart. He could not understand why it felt so endless, why he had not yet woken up from what had to be an illusion. His life had never been kind. His parents had vanished. The people around him had always treated him terribly, even his own brother. In the grand scheme of things, none of it should have mattered. But somehow, in this moment, everything did. Tears welled in his eyes as the weight of the situation sank in. It wasn't fair. No matter how much he tried to rationalize it, nothing about this was right. People shouldn't have to meet such an end, reduced to nothing more than prey for creatures that shouldn't exist. A sudden noise pulled him from his thoughts. The door to the terrace creaked open, the sound sharp and foreboding. His breath caught in his throat as his eyes landed on the figure standing there. A goblin. Its grotesque form was illuminated by the dim light of the burning city below. In one hand, it clutched a severed head. The moment he saw it, realization struck him. This was no dream. It was real, undeniably, horrifyingly real. Terror surged through him as the goblin lunged, its weapon raised to strike. Instinct took over, and he threw himself backward, slipping off the railing and onto the terrace just before the attack could land. Scrambling to his feet, he felt his entire body tremble. His eyes flickered to the severed head once more, his mind screaming at him to run. This was how it ended. The truth was inescapable. But then, another thought surfaced. An unsettling realization that had lingered in the back of his mind for longer than he cared to admit. He had already planned for his life to end. To him, it had always been worthless. The world itself had never meant anything. Whether it ended here, now, or at another time in another place, what difference would it make? Yet, as he stood there, staring into the face of death, something changed. He didn't want it to happen this way. He didn't want it to happen at all. His hands instinctively reached for a weapon, an iron rod discarded near the terrace railing. As the goblin lunged again, he raised it to block the attack. The force of the impact sent him crashing to the ground, pain searing through his body. Death, he realized, was pathetic. It was meaningless. It was insignificant. And he would not allow himself to meet that kind of fate. Driven by sheer desperation, he tightened his grip on the iron rod, defying the goblin's strength with every ounce of willpower he had left. A fire ignited in his chest, one he had never felt before. He screamed, his voice raw and filled with something unfamiliar determination. He refused to die. Not like this. Not now. In the depths of human capability, there existed a state known as the zone. When pushed to their absolute limits, a person's concentration could reach a level so heightened that their body and mind became one, reacting instinctively, perfectly. And in that moment, he entered that state. The world around him sharpened, every movement, every sound, every detail coming into focus. His body responded on its own, as though guided by something beyond conscious thought. He saw the goblin's stance, recognized the gap in its defenses, and moved accordingly. Without hesitation, he struck, driving the iron rod between the creature's legs, sending it toppling to the ground. It was said that those who entered the zone could see the world with perfect clarity, making decisions before they even realized they had done so. He was no different. As the goblin lay on the floor, vulnerable, he swung the iron rod once more, striking again and again until the creature stopped moving. Silence filled the terrace. His breath came in ragged gasps as he stared at the fallen monster. His hands trembled, his mind barely processing what he had done. Then, as the reality of his actions crashed down on him, his stomach lurched. Vomit spilled onto the ground, his body rejecting the horror of the moment. A scream followed, raw and filled with despair. His life had always felt distant, unreal, as though it had never truly belonged to him. But now, more than anything, he understood. He wanted to live. Somewhere nearby, a voice called out. He barely registered it at first, lost in the storm of emotions surging through him. Slowly, he opened his eyes, blinking away the dizziness that threatened to overtake him. A familiar figure stood before him, Nishi. Relief was evident in his expression. Blood dripped from his forehead, warm and wet against his skin. His body ached, but he forced himself to move. As he turned, his gaze fell upon another figure, Mikuri. Recognition flickered in his eyes, his mind piecing together fragments of memory. Pain pulsed through his skull as he pushed himself up, ignoring the weight in his limbs. Nearby, an archer warned him not to push himself too hard. But as he walked toward the railing, his focus shifted beyond the immediate moment. The city was burning. Flames consumed everything, black smoke rising into the sky like a shroud of death. The world he had known was gone. Among the remaining students, some sat in shock, their faces pale, their bodies trembling. Among them were familiar figures Teita, He, and Ar. The very ones who had tormented him for so long now sat in fear, their eyes darting frantically, searching for an escape that did not exist. Others stood frozen, disbelief etched into their features. Sakura whispered to herself, unable to accept the nightmare that had become their reality. Nearby, the PE teacher, Mama, placed a protective arm around her, his expression grim. He spoke words of reassurance, promising safety, protection. But in this new world where monsters roamed freely and death awaited at every turn, promises meant nothing. Here's your paraphrased version of the text. While keeping the plot and character names intact, despite everything, the girl remained anxious as she observed the scene. The other girls nearby muttered among themselves, whispering that someone was watching her in an unsettling way, their voices tinged with pity. Kurogane, standing apart from them, let his gaze fall upon a heap of objects. Nearby, Nishi noticed his interest and explained that it was a barricade, hastily constructed from anything they could find in a desperate attempt to keep the monsters at bay. The school had turned into a place of terror. Those who had managed to escape the mysterious creatures had fled without hesitation, sprinting towards the rooftop where they made their last stand. With whatever strength they had left, they built the barricade, hoping it would be enough to keep the horrors outside. Kurogane, resting a hand on his face, sighed heavily. His thoughts drifted to the ones still trapped inside the school, those who had not made it to the rooftop in time. From the other side of the barricade, desperate voices cried out, pleading to be let in. Terrified students had climbed the stairs, only to find themselves shut out, left to beg for their lives. Wama and another student had made the decision there was no way to remove the barricade without risking the safety of those already inside. When the archer finally arrived, all that could be heard beyond the blockade were agonized screams. The monsters had reached them. Nishi's voice carried guilt as he admitted he regretted not opening the barricade. He knew deep down that it wouldn't have changed the outcome. If they had let those students in, they would have been overrun as well. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had condemned them. Rikuto, standing nearby, reassured him that it wasn't his fault. No one wanted to meet such a fate, and in the end, everyone had only been trying to survive the best they could. The archer's gaze shifted toward the lifeless body of the goblin. His expression was a mixture of shock and disbelief as he turned to Rikuto. Hesitantly, he asked if he had been the one to kill it. Rikuto didn't answer immediately, and the archer, visibly rattled, admitted that he had never once considered fighting back. He wondered aloud if, had he possessed even a fraction of Rikuto's determination, he might have been able to save the students who had perished. Their conversation was cut short by a sudden outburst of screams. Down below, the PE teacher attempted to regain control of the group. He instructed everyone to assess the situation, starting with the mystery of the monsters emerging from phones. Sakura pulled out her own phone, attempting to turn it on. At first it seemed to respond, but within moments, the screen went dark. Another student checked theirs, only to find that it too was completely unresponsive. One by one, the realization settled over the group. None of their phones were working. Rikuto's own device was completely shattered. The teacher's face darkened. Without functioning phones, they had no way to call for help. What had initially seemed like an isolated attack at the school now felt far more ominous. Kavin's mind raced as he tried to piece it all together. If the monsters had emerged from the phones, then there had to be a connection. But what if no creature had emerged from his? He began to wonder if the fact that his phone was broken had something to do with it. Wama interjected, voicing his frustration. They weren't getting anywhere by overanalyzing things. In his mind, the only logical course of action was to wait. The police or the defense forces would surely arrive to rescue them, and the best thing they could do was stay put until then. He asked if everyone understood, as if seeking validation for his plan. Rikuto's expression remained unreadable, but his voice cut through the tense silence. He questioned whether Wama was actually serious. The teacher, momentarily taken aback, asked what he meant. Rikuto explained his reasoning. If the monsters had emerged from phones, then it was highly likely that the entire city was overrun, not just their school. Given how common smartphones were, especially in a country like Japan, it was almost certain that the same catastrophe was unfolding worldwide. The odds of the police or military being in any position to mount a rescue seemed slim at best. The weight of his words sent a ripple of panic through the students. Reality settled in. No one was coming to save them. Nishi, struggling to contain his fear, hesitantly suggested that perhaps they should find a more secure location instead of remaining on the rooftop. Rikuto, who had remained silent up until now, agreed. If they didn't want to meet the same fate as the others, they needed to act. His words were met with immediate hostility. He abruptly stood up, his face twisted in anger. He shouted in frustration, demanding to know why someone as pathetic as Rikuto was giving out orders. His rage boiling over, he strode forward and seized Rikuto by the collar. The tension in the air was suffocating. The others watched, waiting for Rikuto to react, but he did nothing. He simply stared at his gaze unwavering. Something about his expression made the bully falter, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. Kurogane, observing the exchange, wondered what had happened to to make him lash out like this. His outburst made no sense. Sensing an opportunity, the other students sided with hurling insults at Rikuto. Their words were venomous, fueled by fear and desperation. Nishi and Sakura stepped forward, trying to de-escalate the situation before it spiraled out of control. T's expression darkened as he leaned closer to Rikuto. He taunted him, suggesting that he had become so paralyzed with fear that he had lost his voice entirely. But Rikuto wasn't thinking about his words. He was looking at him, really looking at him, and for the first time he realized something. Compared to the monster lying lifeless on the ground, he looked utterly insignificant. The bully, unaware of Rikuto's thoughts, continued to press him. His patience wearing thin, he finally demanded a response. When Rikuto finally spoke, his voice was calm and deliberate. He told to stop bothering him with trivial nonsense. It was irritating. The words stunned the group into silence. His face contorting in rage, spat a curse before swinging a fist toward Rikuto. The archer moved to intervene, but before he could do anything, Rikuto acted. With swift, effortless precision, he caught his arm, twisted it, and drove him to the ground. The force of the impact left everyone momentarily speechless. He groaned in pain, struggling against the pressure keeping him pinned. Shock and disbelief filled the eyes of those who had just been mocking Rikuto moments before. Writhing beneath him, he cursed and demanded to be released. He called the entire situation absurd, his voice laced with humiliation. How had he ever been afraid of someone like this? It didn't make sense. But Rikuto didn't let go. He continued his stream of insults and threats, his anger boiling over. Despite his words, he couldn't free himself. Rikuto pressed him harder against the ground, his grip unyielding. And for the first time, the bully's bravado began to falter. Nishi grabbed Rikuto by the arm, trying to stop him, convinced that he had lost control and would seriously injure Taka if he didn't intervene. Looking at Rikuto, Nishi hesitated for a moment, struggling to believe that this was the same person who had once been a target of constant bullying. The transformation was unsettling. Around them, the other students watched in stunned silence, whispering among themselves, unable to comprehend what they had just witnessed. After pulling himself off the ground, Teita continued his tirade, cursing and hurling threats at Rikuto, unwilling to back down. His fury only grew with every second that passed. The archer, exasperated, finally snapped, yelling at him that this was no time for petty fights. His words carried weight, and Teita begrudgingly fell silent, though his anger did not subside. Turning to Rikuto, Nishi attempted to ease the tension, dismissing the altercation as something that no longer mattered. Rikuto, meeting his gaze, agreed. The conflict was meaningless in the grand scheme of things. What truly mattered was deciding what to do next. Facing the rest of the group, he stated that wasting energy on senseless fights wouldn't help them survive. They needed to focus on the future. Despite his words, Teita continued to spit out insults, unable to let go of his resentment. Before the situation could escalate further, the teacher interjected, redirecting the conversation. He acknowledged the rising tensions but urged everyone to concentrate on the bigger picture. Nishi took a step forward, addressing the group. He summarized their predicament. There was nothing useful on the rooftop, and they had no way of knowing when or even if help would arrive. In the worst-case scenario, no rescue would come at all. They needed a secure location, one that could provide them with the essentials: food, water, and protection. Kurogane, who had been listening, interrupted, adding that in addition to supplies, they would need weapons if they intended to defend themselves. Sakura, hesitant, voiced the question that lingered in everyone's mind: did such a safe place even exist? The archer, without hesitation, admitted that this was the heart of the issue. They had no idea where they could go. Rikuto proposed that before making any decisions, they first needed to determine the conditions inside the school. If movement wasn't possible, there was no point in discussing escape. A student immediately objected, his voice rising in fear. The risk was too great. There could still be monsters lurking in the hallways, and venturing out would mean walking straight into danger. He argued that the safest course of action was to stay put and wait for help. The teacher nodded slightly, acknowledging that the student had a valid point. However, at the very least, they needed to check the hallways before making any further plans. Fear spread through the group at the suggestion. The students recoiled at the idea, protesting. No one wanted to be the one to step outside and face whatever might be waiting for them. The teacher, maintaining his authority, called upon Kurogane and Teita, instructing them to scout the situation inside the building. Teita, stunned, immediately tried to deflect. He argued that the teacher, as an adult, should take the lead and set an example. The teacher, however, calmly stated that his priority was to stay behind and protect the students. Some of the girls chimed in, adding that if the boys were truly men, they should be the ones to go. Annoyed and rattled, Teita lashed out at them, hurling insults. At that moment, Rikuto wordlessly picked up the iron pipe he had used earlier against the monster and walked toward the barricade. Seeing him move forward without hesitation, Teita's face paled. His voice wavered as he questioned if Rikuto was actually serious. Rikuto turned to him and asked a simple question in return. Was he content to sit there and wait for death? The situation would only grow worse the longer they remained on the rooftop. They had two choices: either starve or be devoured by monsters. One way or another, their story would end here unless they took action. That was not the outcome Rikuto wanted. He had already made his decision. Hearing his reasoning, Nishi felt a surge of determination. Without hesitation, he grabbed his equipment, announcing that Rikuto was right. Waiting around would only lead to their demise. If there were other survivors inside the school, they had a responsibility to find them. Wayama, visibly anxious, spoke up. If anything happened to Nishi, it would be on his conscience. The girls, equally terrified, pleaded with him not to go, their voices desperate. Rikuto, unfazed, turned to Wayama and called him a hypocrite. Kurogane, watching the exchange, smirked and expressed his relief that Nishi had decided to go with Rikuto. Meanwhile, Teita, who had been trembling the entire time, remained frozen in fear. Kurogane observed his shaking form, amused by the resemblance, completely like a frightened chihuahua. Teita, his voice unsteady, asked Nishi if he was truly sure about this. He reminded him that the risks were high, and the chance of being attacked was almost inevitable. Nishi, smiling, responded that he wasn't ready to die yet. He had a reason to survive. For a brief moment, an image of a girl in a window flashed through his mind. Recalling his own words, Rikuto acknowledged that Nishi seemed like someone he could rely on. In response, Nishi chuckled and commented that maybe he was just as crazy as Rikuto. Then, in a slightly awkward manner, he admitted that he still didn't even know Rikuto's name. With everything they had been through, introductions had been the last thing on their minds. The two exchanged names, and in a rare moment of levity, they shared a few jokes, using humor as a means to suppress the fear clawing at them. With that, they made their way past the barricade. Inside the building, Kurogane and Nishi walked cautiously down a dimly lit corridor. The once familiar school halls were now lined with lifeless bodies, remnants of the horror that had unfolded. The stench of blood lingered in the air, making every breath heavy. The archer's eyes swept over the carnage, his voice low as he admitted that everything felt like a terrible nightmare. His companion, however, offered no illusions. It wasn't a nightmare, it was reality. Nishi sighed. He understood, but he couldn't help but wonder, where had all the monsters gone? The eerie silence was unsettling. Not that he was complaining, but the lack of threats felt anticlimactic. Rikuto suggested a possibility. The school had been closed at the time of the attack, meaning the number of available prey had been limited. If that were the case, it was logical that the monsters had left in search of more victims elsewhere. The archer agreed that it made sense, but hearing it put into words was disturbing. As they continued down the corridor, a sudden noise interrupted their conversation. Both of them froze. From a distant hallway, the unmistakable sound of a slap echoed through the air. Remaining at the edge of the corridor, Rikuto and Nishi crouched cautiously, their eyes fixed ahead. Nishi peeked around the corner and spotted a lone goblin standing in the middle of the hallway. Exchanging glances, the two quickly assessed the situation. If it was alone, they could handle it. With silent agreement, Nishi readied his bow, preparing his equipment with practiced precision. Maintaining his distance, he took a slow, deep breath, allowing his focus to sharpen. He carefully lined up his shot, then released the arrow. The projectile flew with precision, striking the goblin from behind and piercing straight through its chest. However, the monster's natural resilience allowed it to remain standing. The goblin let out a shrill, enraged screech, twisting its body to locate its attacker. Its glowing eyes locked onto the archer, and without hesitation, it charged forward with startling speed. Nishi tensed, realizing he didn't have time to ready another arrow. Before he could react, Kurogan moved swiftly, intercepting the goblin's advance. With a powerful swing, he struck the creature's head with the iron pipe, sending it tumbling backward. The goblin, nearly incapacitated, attempted to recover, struggling to find its footing. But before it could regain its strength, Rikuto appeared in front of it, delivering a series of brutal strikes. Ensuring that it would not get back up, Nishi approached the motionless body, his eyes flickering with something between admiration and wariness. He commented on his friend's ferocity, unsurprised but nonetheless impressed. Then, scanning the surroundings, he asked if there were any signs of more monsters nearby. The archer confirmed that the area seemed clear for now, and that everything had gone according to plan. Rikuto, however, remained deep in thought. He knew there were creatures against which humans had no chance of survival. His mind wandered back to the earlier sighting of the dragons being so powerful that no ordinary person could hope to defeat them. Nishi, puzzled by his expression, asked what he meant by monsters that humans couldn't stand a chance against. He remarked that, from what they had seen so far, all these creatures seemed like typical enemies from a video game. The goblin they had just fought, for instance, strongly resembled the ones often seen in fantasy worlds. Cavan, standing nearby, spoke up. He had a nagging feeling that he had seen these creatures somewhere before. As the realization crept in, his body tensed, and nervousness took hold. His companion, sensing his unease, clenched his fist, forcing himself to remain composed. The weight of reality pressed down on him. If that goblin had managed to land a hit, he would have been dead. No respawns, no second chances. This wasn't a game. They were truly putting their lives on the line. Rikuto agreed. Unlike in a game, there were no levels to increase their strength, no hidden cheats, no magic to aid them. They were simply human. The archer, still observing Rikuto's movements, made an offhand remark. He noted that Rikuto was far from a novice. His technique, precision, and calm demeanor suggested experience. He asked if Rikuto had received training or had a mentor. At that, Rikuto's mind drifted to the past. Memories of his brother surfaced, the one he had defeated in a one-on-one battle. His expression remained unreadable as he finally responded. He had never received any formal training. Nishi, intrigued, questioned why someone with such skill had allowed himself to be bullied for so long. If he had always been capable of defending himself, why had he tolerated their torment? Rikuto remained silent for a moment, then admitted that he didn't know the answer. Pushing forward, the two continued their cautious exploration. Their path led them to a room engulfed in flames, the scent of burning wood and flesh thick in the air. Bodies lay scattered across the floor, victims of the unfolding nightmare. Neither of them hesitated, they pressed on. The archer commented on the eerie silence that had settled over the building. Aside from the lone goblin they had just defeated, the sixth floor appeared to be empty. Rakuto, analyzing the situation, explained that most of the rooms on this level had been used for training purposes, meaning there weren't many people present when the attack began. If there had been few victims, then there had been little for the monsters to hunt. He speculated that they had likely moved downward in search of more prey. The archer reluctantly agreed. It made sense, but hearing it spoken aloud only made the situation feel more grim. They reached the staircase, ready to descend to the next floor. Before stepping forward, Rakuto spoke up. He wanted to make sure their objectives were clear. Kurogane stated the primary goal to assess the situation inside the school. Nishi added that they needed to determine how many survivors remained and whether there were any viable escape routes. The archer emphasized that gathering information was crucial. They couldn't afford to make uninformed decisions. His companion, nodding, stated that above all else, returning alive with even the smallest amount of information was their top priority. If they encountered a dangerous situation, they had to be prepared to leave others behind if it meant ensuring their own survival. Trying to lighten the mood, Rakuto joked about the necessity of such harsh decisions. They were in an emergency, and no one should hold grudges over choices made for survival. He teased his companion, noting that he was acting tough. Before he could finish his sentence, a piercing cry echoed from the floor below. Rakuto froze for only a second before breaking into a sprint, rushing down the stairs without hesitation. His companion sighed, watching him go. He already knew what kind of person Rakuto was, someone who would never abandon others, no matter how dire the circumstances. On the lower floor, a monstrous figure loomed. Larger than the goblins they had encountered before, this one wielded an iron club. Its thick, muscular frame bore sharp, jagged horns protruding from its skull. Tachibana Kotone crouched inside a cabinet, doing her best to remain unseen. Through a small gap in the door, she watched in silent horror. Her classmates were at the mercy of the goblins. The creatures had stripped them down, their cries of protest ringing through the hallway. Tachi's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to help them, she needed to do something. But she knew the truth. She was powerless. One of her classmates sobbed, pleading for the goblins to stop. The lead goblin let out a guttural growl, its body trembling with manic energy. Then, with no warning, it entered a violent frenzy. Its iron club swung through the air. A sickening sound followed. Blood splattered across the walls. Tachibana squeezed her eyes shut, pressing her hands over her ears in a desperate attempt to block out the horrifying reality unfolding before her. Panic seized her entire body as she shuddered, overwhelmed by the gruesome sight. She mumbled apologies, whispering regrets for always running away, for always doing nothing when it mattered. Her memories pulled her backward, into a time she had tried so hard to forget. She saw herself in a crowded hallway, watching as Rakuto was beaten. The class bullies surrounded him, their laughter cruel, their blows relentless. She had known it was wrong, had known she should do something, anything to stop them. Her body had trembled as she forced herself to speak, but before she could find her voice, the blonde-haired bully drove his foot into Rakuto's face. The impact made her flinch, and once again, she found herself apologizing. A gentle hand rested on her shoulder. She turned to see Sake, his voice calm yet firm as he called her name. He asked what was wrong, reminding her that class was about to start. She barely reacted, too frozen in her guilt and hesitation. Without waiting for her response, Sake gently pulled her away, urging her to leave. Behind them, Rakuto remained on the ground. The memory shattered, and Tachibana awoke with a sharp gasp. The suffocating darkness of the cabinet surrounded her once more. She had fainted from the sheer stress of what she had witnessed. Her breathing was uneven, her hands shaking as she tried to make sense of her surroundings. How much time had passed? What had happened to the others? Were they still alive? Dozens of questions rushed through her mind, but panic left her unable to think clearly. Her fingers fumbled as she reached for her phone in her pocket, but in her haste, it slipped from her grasp. The device clattered against the floor, the noise echoing louder than she had anticipated. She froze. For a few agonizing moments, the sounds outside the cabinet shifted. The distant commotion momentarily intensified, then fell into an eerie silence. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears as she strained to listen. Had they heard her? Before she could answer that question, the cabinet doors were yanked open. Terror locked her muscles as she stared up at the goblins looming before her. As the doors fully swung open, her gaze darted across the room. The scattered bodies, the stench of death, her eyes widened when she recognized one of them. Nisaki was there too. A goblin sneered as it reached down, its bony fingers tangling in her hair before yanking her forward. A sharp cry of pain left her lips as she was dragged out into the open. She struggled, kicking wildly, but the monster was far stronger. Then, without hesitation, the goblin began tearing at her clothes. She screamed. Another goblin stepped closer, leering, but before it could act, a sudden force struck with brutal efficiency. A new monster entered the fray. With a single devastating blow, it sent the goblin flying, crushing its body upon impact. Tachibana barely had time to process what had happened before she realized the other goblins had taken notice. They turned, surrounding the new creature in an attempt to attack. It didn't matter. The monstrous figure retaliated with a single sweep of its claws, effortlessly dismantling them all. Tachibana, frozen in shock, could no longer contain her fear. Her entire body trembled as she screamed for help, her voice raw and desperate. Farther down the hallway, two figures sprinted toward the source of the sound. The monster paid no attention to them. It seized her with one hand, gripping her tightly, while using its other to drag the lifeless bodies of the goblins behind it. The rough movement sent jolts of pain through her limbs, but her mind was too consumed by terror to register it properly. She gasped, struggling, sobbing, pleading. She begged it to let her go. Her voice only seemed to enrage it. Without warning, it slammed her against the nearest wall. Her vision blurred, pain exploded through her skull, and before she could say another word, darkness overtook her. From a distance, Rikuto and Nishi watched the monstrous figure move. The archer swallowed hard, fear gripping him as he analyzed the creature. Doubt filled his mind. Could his arrows even harm something like that? Rikuto remained steady, his expression unreadable. He confirmed that Nishi's instincts were correct. This was different. Nishi, barely able to tear his eyes away from the monstrous being, asked what it was. Rikuto didn't answer immediately. Instead, he posed his own question. Had Nishi not found it strange how few monsters had been on the previous floor? The archer hesitated, but the realization dawned on him. The answer had been in front of them the whole time. The reason they hadn't encountered many goblins was because of this creature. The goblins weren't the top of the food chain. They were prey. This was their predator. A stronger, more territorial monster had already begun eliminating the weaker ones. Rikuto admitted the harsh truth: they had no chance against this creature. Not alone. The weight of those words settled heavily between them. Lost in thought, the archer's attention drifted back to the unconscious girl. His mind raced. Could they save her? Did they have any chance at all? His train of thought was abruptly cut off when he noticed movement beside him. Rikuto was getting up. Alarm shot through Nishi as he reached out, trying to stop him. If they made any sudden movements, they would be seen. His voice came in a sharp whisper, demanding to know what Rikuto was thinking. Without hesitation, Rikuto answered. He was going to save her. She was still alive. Nishi's frustration flared. Did he want to die? Did he even comprehend the danger they were in? Even if they both went in, they wouldn't stand a chance. His voice wavered with frustration and disbelief. Was Rikuto really willing to risk his life over a reckless sense of self-satisfaction? Was he doing this for justice? Did he even understand how absurd his actions were? Rikuto remained unmoved. He admitted something he hadn't before. During their earlier conversation, when the archer had asked him if he felt alive, the answer had seemed unclear. But now, after everything they had faced, after looking death in the eyes, he knew the truth. He wanted to live, and because he wanted to live, he wouldn't allow himself to fall to despair again. He would save her. Not for justice, not for guilt, not for redemption. He would save her because he wanted to, and being able to make that decision, that was proof that he was truly alive. Nishi exhaled sharply, calling him insane. If running headfirst into death was what Rikuto considered living, then he was beyond reasoning. Rikuto didn't argue. He simply stated that it wasn't Nishi's problem. He could stay behind if he wanted. For a brief moment, an old memory resurfaced in his mind. His brother. Serrano's cold voice echoed in his thoughts, calling him incompetent, telling him he had no money, no family, no one by his side, that he was already dead, that he should accept it. But Rikuto shook off the words, stealing his resolve. He would never let himself be someone who was already dead. Even if it destroyed him, he would never live like that again. Before he could move forward, Nishi grabbed his shoulder. For the first time, he revealed something personal. He had a sister. Not by blood, but a sister nonetheless. She was studying at another school. Here is the paraphrased version of your text. While keeping the plot and characters intact, Rikuto stared at Nishi, confused by his sudden admission. He asked why he was bringing that up out of nowhere. The archer, his expression unusually serious, responded that he didn't want to die in this place either, because if he did, his sister would be left alone. Nishi continued, his voice steady. Leaving the girl behind to be slaughtered while they ran away would be shameful. If his sister were ever in such a situation, he wouldn't be able to ignore it. He wasn't sure if he could fight for her, if he had the strength to truly protect her. But the thought of running away and making excuses haunted him. He knew it would torment him forever. That was why he had made his decision. He was going to help Kurigan defeat the monster. Together, they would save the girl. Kurigan smirked, noting that the two of them were about to do something incredibly reckless, all for their own, selfish reasons. He asked Nishi if he was really okay with that. Rikuto let out a small laugh, Nishi, embarrassed but unwavering, stated that a man needed to have his pride. With their resolve set, they turned their attention to formulating a plan. Charging in blindly would be a death sentence, so Nishi asked how Rikuto intended to handle it. His friend assured him that if he was willing to fight, then he already had an idea. While they worked out the details, the girl awoke. Tachibana's eyes fluttered open, only to widen in horror. She was tied to a wooden plank, her body immobilized. Surrounding her were goblins, their lifeless bodies skewered over an open fire. The monstrous creature, the one that had taken her, was roasting them like food, feasting on their charred remains. Her stomach twisted in terror, and before she could stop herself, a scream tore from her throat. The moment her cry rang through the room, Rikuto and Nishi sprang into action. As they rushed forward, Nishi muttered under his breath that after hearing Rikuto's plan in full, he was now completely certain the young man was out of his mind. Meanwhile, Tachibana's thoughts spiraled into despair. She was going to die here. She would be burned alive and devoured like the others. The overwhelming fear was suffocating, and tears streamed down her face as she whimpered. She didn't want to die. The monster noticed her movements. Its gaze snapped to her as it lumbered forward, its heavy steps shaking the floor. Without hesitation, it reached down, gripping the wooden plank she was tied to. She let out a panicked cry as it lifted her off the ground. The closer she got to the fire, the more she struggled. But it was useless. The monster's grip was like iron. Just as she was about to be thrown into the flames, she saw him. Standing in the doorway, Kurogane appeared. His voice cut through the air, telling her to close her eyes. The monster hesitated, turning toward the unexpected intruder. Growling, it dropped the plank and reached for its iron club. As it advanced, Kurogane revealed the object in his hands, a fire extinguisher. Without warning, he pressed the trigger. A thick cloud of white spray erupted, engulfing the monster's face. Temporarily blinded, the creature roared in frustration, thrashing wildly as it tried to clear its vision. Seizing the moment, Rikuto dashed forward, reaching Tachibana. As he worked to untie her bindings, she looked at him, her voice shaking as she called his name. He responded bluntly, saying he didn't know her, he was just here to help. Inwardly, she told herself that it was obvious. Of course he wouldn't remember her, why would he? Realizing that his knife wasn't cutting through the thick ropes fast enough, Kurogane switched to plan B. Gripping a metal pipe, he slammed it against the ground, creating a sharp, metallic clang. That was the signal. Nishi, standing at a distance, heard it and stiffened. His eyes widened in disbelief. So this was really happening, they were actually going through with this insane plan. Approaching Rikuto, Nishi muttered that he wasn't confident about this, but he would do his best. He only asked that he not be blamed if things went wrong. As the monster regained its senses, its fury reached a peak. It let out a deafening roar, loud enough to shatter the surrounding windows. Rikuto, gripping his pipe, remained steady as the monster locked onto him. With its rage fully unleashed, the beast lifted its iron club, ready to crush him. Rikuto knew that one wrong move would mean the end. He watched carefully, analyzing its attack pattern. Then, in the instant before impact, he acted. Using a technique known as Kuri-yotushi, he deflected the incoming strike, redirecting the force to the side instead of meeting it head-on. The parry worked, and relief flooded through him. His instincts were still sharp. It had been a long time since he had used this technique, but his muscle memory had not failed him. For a moment he stood still, holding a metal bar against a monstrous opponent. The demon-like creature, unfazed, immediately launched another attack. It was relentless. Rikuto adjusted. Instead of blocking the brute force directly, he subtly altered the vector of its strikes, lessening the impact and redirecting the momentum elsewhere. Their battle raged on. Rikuto strategized carefully, ensuring that his movements conserved energy while minimizing damage. His counterattacks were calculated. He targeted the monster's feet, disrupting its balance. It was a technique rooted in modern kendo. As he fought, his thoughts drifted back to his father. He had never forgotten the lessons taught to him as a child. The discipline, the precision, the patience, it all came back to him now. Inwardly, he sent a silent thanks to his father. On the sidelines, Tachibana watched in awe. She had never seen anyone fight like this. The way he moved, the way he countered it was almost unbelievable. But Rikuto reminded himself of one simple truth. These were just monsters. They had no proper technique. And because of that, he could win. Fury radiated from the demon as it prepared for another attack. Without hesitation, it swung its massive club toward Rikuto with devastating force. The boy braced himself, defending with every ounce of skill he possessed. The sheer power behind each blow threatened to overwhelm him, but he persisted, countering with precision. The monster, intent on crushing him, continued its relentless assault. Rikuto analyzed its movements, recognizing a pattern. It relied solely on brute strength, with no real strategy. Taking advantage of this flaw, He landed a sharp strike on the creature's wrist, causing it to momentarily recoil. The battle raged on, both combatants growing more enraged with each exchange. The demon lifted its spiked club once more, swinging with wild aggression. To Rakuto, the attacks felt broad and predictable. Using his refined technique, he managed to strike the monster's head, momentarily staggering it. Despite the effectiveness of his counterattacks, Rakuto knew that fighting a human would have been far easier. The monster, though wounded, was still standing. It let out an ear-piercing roar, shaking the walls around them. Observing from a distance, the girl could hardly believe her eyes. The fact that Rakuto was holding his ground against such a beast left her in awe. He was incredible. But even as he fought, Rakuto felt the toll on his body. The impacts of each blocked strike were wearing him down. His breathing grew heavier, his muscles strained. He knew he couldn't keep this up much longer. His endurance was fading. As the monster recovered its composure, he realized with growing certainty that his attacks weren't enough. The battle wasn't going in his favor. Switching strategies, Rakuto began to evade rather than engage, dodging each incoming strike while observing his opponent. A direct confrontation was impossible. He needed another approach. Then, an idea took shape. Moving swiftly, he positioned himself at a distance and called out to the demon, taunting it to keep its focus on him. The monster's body tensed. Smoke poured from its ears, a clear sign that its rage had reached its peak. It turned its gaze away from Rakuto, glancing instead at the girl still bound to the wooden plank. A chilling realization struck Rakuto. The demon grasped the plank, lifting it effortlessly, a new weapon. With a monstrous growl, it swung the wooden log like a club, using the helpless girl as an extension of its attack. The sight froze Rakuto in place. He was in serious trouble. Outside the building, the sounds of destruction echoed through the air. Windows shattered, debris scattered, and the battle raged on. The monster swung wildly, smashing through anything in its path. Rakuto ran, narrowly avoiding the devastating blows, but each attack left a trail of destruction. The monstrous roars filled the air, shaking the walls. Amidst the chaos, the girl remained bound, her heart pounding. A bitter sensation swelled inside her abandonment. Rakuto had run. Her mind drifted to a distant memory, a playground. Two boys stood over her, jeering, shoving her into a corner. She had curled up, tears streaming down her face, unable to stop them. Then, someone stepped forward. Rakuto. He had appeared, placing himself between her and the bullies. His voice had been steady as he questioned them. Why were they tormenting her? The memory faded, replaced by the grim present. Rakuto was still the same. He always risked everything for someone else. Tears welled in her eyes as she remained helplessly tied to the wooden log, unable to do anything. Outside, a figure observed the battle from a safe distance. The newcomer clenched his fists. Rakuto was fighting, struggling, but the battle was taking its toll. He was reaching his limit. The boy's expression hardened. He took a step forward, then another. He called out, telling Rakuto to hold on. If he could lure the demon just 10 more meters, he would handle the rest. His pace quickened. He was going to end this story. The fight continued. Rakuto, exhausted but determined, kept running, baiting the monster to follow him. He turned back briefly, mustering all of his remaining strength. With a final burst of energy, he swung his iron bar with all his might. But this time, his grip faltered. The demon's counterattack struck him with full force. Rakuto was sent flying, his body crashing hard against the ground. Pain exploded through him as he lay motionless, unable to move. The girl, still tied, let out a horrified scream. Nearby, the boy who had rushed in to help witness the brutal scene unfold. Everyone called out Rakuto's name, but he remained unmoving. Nishi stood still, analyzing the battlefield. The situation was dire. A memory resurfaced Rakuto's words of advice. He had only one chance, one perfect shot. He couldn't afford to miss. If he failed, Rakuto would die. His mind calculated the 3 essential conditions: the angle, the distance, the exact moment of release. But none of them were ideal. The archer hesitated. If he waited too long, he would lose his chance. If he took the shot too early, he might miss. And if he failed, the doubt lingered in his mind. Nishi's mind raced as he calculated the shot, trying to determine the perfect angle, the right distance, the single moment in which he could strike without missing. But before he could release the arrow, his thoughts were interrupted. Rakuto, despite being battered and injured on the ground, shouted for him to stop. Confused, Nishi hesitated. Why was Rakuto telling him not to shoot? The uncertainty gnawed at him, but before he could question it, his friend's voice rang out again, urgently calling for him to wait. Rakuto struggled to rise, pushing himself up from the dirt, his body screaming in protest. He gasped for air, his strength nearly gone, but he refused to stay down. He needed to move a few meters closer. Only then would Nishi's shot have the greatest chance of success. The hidden observer, the boy watching from nearby, stared in disbelief as Rikuto once again stood face to face with the demon. Tied to the wooden log, the girl sobbed as she called out for Rikuto. The monster advanced again, undeterred by its injuries. Rikuto coughed violently, exhaustion threatening to consume him. His vision blurred for a moment, and his legs wavered beneath him. Then, without warning, he dropped to his knees. Seeing this, the demon roared in triumph. Believing the battle was over, a surge of crackling energy surrounded it, and in the next instant bolts of lightning shot from its eyes. Rikuto clenched his teeth, forcing himself to his feet again. With what little energy he had left, he raised the iron bar in front of him, using it as a makeshift shield. The moment the attack struck, his body trembled under the force. His legs felt weak. He questioned if he could endure much longer. But he had no choice. The demon growled, its rage escalating, and launched itself forward once more. Nishi flinched as the sheer intensity of the monster's roar sent shockwaves through the air. Tied helplessly, the girl desperately pleaded for Rikuto to run. She screamed that the monster would kill him. But Rikuto didn't budge. His expression remained firm, his determined gaze locked onto the demon. Despairing, the girl broke down. She didn't deserve to be saved. She had abandoned him. All this time, she had done nothing. She had let him suffer alone. She was a coward. A memory surfaced a school building years ago. Rikuto, outnumbered, was being beaten by a group of boys while she stood at a distance, watching. For a fleeting moment, she had gathered the courage to help him. She had convinced herself that she could do something, that she had to stop them. Without thinking, she had rushed toward the group, her voice shaking as she demanded they leave Rikuto alone. But then, a hand rested on her shoulder. She turned and saw Steo standing behind her. His voice was soft, almost persuasive, as he called her by name. He told her that she shouldn't get involved, that she might get hurt. His words carried weight, dripping with manipulation. He told her that she was a good person, and all she had to do was listen to him. And so she had listened. She had turned her back, and Rikuto had been left to suffer. The memory shattered. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered the painful truth. She had always been a coward. She had never been able to help him. But she was tired of standing by. She was tired of doing nothing. The demon roared, its fury escalating. It prepared another devastating attack, its movements becoming wilder and more unpredictable. Rikuto remained focused. He noticed a shift in the monster's grip. Its massive club was beginning to lose momentum. This was his chance. With sharp precision, he moved in, ready to exploit the opening. But before he could land the decisive blow, the demon countered. The spiked club slammed into Rikuto with monstrous force. His body was sent hurtling through the air before crashing into the ground. At the same moment, Kotone, still tied to the wooden plank, was thrown aside as the demon swung its makeshift weapon. She hit the floor hard, pain shooting through her entire body as she cried out in agony. The red-skinned demon wasted no time. Seeing Rikuto motionless on the ground, it charged toward him with ruthless intent. The girl, struggling against her restraints, screamed for him to move. But he didn't. He lay on the cold ground, his body refusing to respond. He had reached his limit. Towering over him, the monster raised its club high, prepared to strike the final blow. And then, in a low voice, Rikuto signaled to Nishi. The target was in position. Before the words even left his lips, Nishi was ready. His bow was drawn, his breathing steady. He reassessed the distance, recalculated the angle. This was an easy shot. The demon, sensing something, snapped its head toward the archer, but it was too late. Nishi released the arrow. The projectile sliced through the air, striking the monster directly in the eye. A moment of silence followed. A flashback revealed what had happened just 10 minutes before. Inside the building, Rikuto had handed a small siren to Nishi, instructing him to use it at the right moment. Curious, Nishi had asked if it was the same one that Sakura had given them before they entered the building. Rikuto had confirmed it. He explained that it wasn't just any liquid, it was undiluted ethanol meant for chemistry experiments. Essentially, 100% pure alcohol. Nishi had recalled the moment Sakura had handed them the bottle, her voice confident as she had assured them it would be useful. At the time, he had wondered why she had been carrying something so dangerous. The flashback returned to the present. Inside the battle-scarred building, Rikuto had instructed Nishi to coat the arrow in the alcohol before firing. Nishi had hesitated, questioning if it would truly work. But Rikuto had been certain. Alcohol was a deadly poison to many organisms, and right now, it was their best weapon against the demon. Even a few milliliters of ethanol injected directly into the bloodstream would be enough to render the monster unable to stand. With the amount contained in the siren, it should be sufficient to completely destroy the demon. Nishi found the logic sound but doubted the practicality. Even a child would know that a simple arrow wouldn't be able to penetrate the monster's thick skin. Rikuto, however, had already considered this. He explained that Nishi should aim for a specific weak point, the demon's eye. The vulnerability of the eye would allow the arrow to pierce through, delivering the lethal dose directly into its system. Nishi, still skeptical, questioned how Rikuto was so sure that the eye was a valid target. At that moment, Rikuto picked up a fire extinguisher. He explained that he would confirm his theory by using the device. If the monster instinctively tried to protect its eyes from the spray, it would prove that they were just as sensitive as a human's. The plan was simple. Rikuto would create the opening, and Nishi would land the finishing blow. Determined, Rikuto made it clear he was counting on his friend to make the plan work. The scene returned to the present. The demon let out a monstrous roar, writhing in agony, the arrow lodged deep into its eye. The archer, thrilled by the success of their plan, let out a celebratory remark. The fire extinguisher test had confirmed their suspicions. The monster's eyes were its weakest point. As straightforward as the strategy had been, it had worked. With a lighthearted grin, he joked that he deserved full marks for landing a perfect shot at the center of the target. The demon, however, wasn't finished. With a furious snarl, it clawed at its face, desperately trying to pull the arrow free. Still on the ground, Rikuto smirked, glancing toward his friend. He asked what he thought of the plan now. Nearby, Kokonia remained frozen in place, completely overwhelmed by everything that had just transpired. The monster, now blinded in one eye, finally managed to rip out the arrow. Enraged beyond reason, it turned its attention back toward the boys. But as it attempted to charge, its legs wobbled, it staggered. Rikuto realized that the alcohol was taking effect. A loud, guttural roar erupted from the beast as it summoned every last ounce of its strength, raising its weapon for one final strike. Rikuto barely had time to react before the massive club came swinging down at him. The impact disoriented him momentarily, but he managed to avoid a direct hit. Nishi panicked, calling out to his friend. He quickly analyzed the situation. The ethanol was acting as a poison, but it wasn't killing the monster immediately. They needed to end this before the creature recovered. The monster roared again, its fury still unchecked. From outside the building, the scene of destruction was clearly visible. The shattered glass, the crumbling walls, the sheer devastation. It was a battlefield. Through the gaping hole in the structure, Rikuto noticed something. The demon was heading straight toward the opening. Seizing the opportunity, he made a split-second decision. When the monster lunged forward, instead of retreating, Rikuto rushed in. Bracing himself, he grabbed the demon by the waist. Using all of his remaining strength, he pushed, forcing the creature toward the edge. His intent was clear: throw it off the building. But the demon was massive, heavier than he had anticipated. His arms burned from the strain, his legs trembled beneath him. Just as he feared he wouldn't be able to do it alone, something caught his attention. Above him, the monster was preparing another attack. Nishi saw it too. Without hesitation, he sprinted toward his friend. He grabbed the demon's waist as well, adding his strength to Rikuto's. With their combined effort, they forced the monster over the edge. The creature let out a final, deafening roar as it plummeted from the building. Rikuto, still clinging to it, fell as well. For a brief, heart-stopping moment, there was no sound. Then, the monster's body crashed into the ground below. Dust and debris filled the air. There was no sign of Rikuto. Kokone's heart pounded as she watched in horror. She scanned the wreckage, praying that he had somehow survived. Then movement. A figure emerged. Rikuto was suspended in midair. Nishi, acting at the last second, had managed to grab him just in time, preventing him from plummeting to his death. Below them, the demon's body lay broken, its massive frame having shattered the ground beneath it. Its horns were fractured, its monstrous form now lifeless. Relief flooded Kokone as she exhaled shakily. She had been holding her breath. Seeing both of them alive, she whispered a quiet thank you to whatever higher power had been watching over them. Rikuto, regaining his breath, called out to his friend. Nishi, still holding on to him, asked what was wrong. Still catching his breath, Rikuto chuckled. "That was insane," he muttered. "Are you an idiot?" Nishi, satisfied with saving his friend's life, grinned. "The first-place finisher of the national tournament wouldn't fail at something like this," he said confidently. Nishi blinked in confusion. "What tournament?" Laughing, Rikuto shook his head. "You're still completely out of touch with reality." Meanwhile, Kokone, still bound, hesitated before finally speaking. She asked if someone could untie her. Using a sharp rock, the boys worked quickly to free her from the ropes. Nishi turned to her, his tone gentle, as he asked if she was okay. She was visibly shaken, her body trembling from everything she had been through. He was about to offer her support when, without a word, she walked past him, straight to Rikuto. Without hesitation, she threw her arms around him, holding him tightly. Overwhelmed with emotion, she whispered her gratitude. "Thank you for saving me." Nishi, watching the scene unfold, raised an eyebrow. Something clicked in his mind, a realization. Turning to Rikuto, he smirked and asked casually, "So, All of this was just to save your girlfriend, huh? Silence. Kokone stiffened in shock. Rikuto froze, caught completely off guard. The two exchanged flustered glances, neither able to find the words to respond. Nishi continued playfully teasing Rikuto, amused by the situation. He found it surprising that someone dating such a beautiful girl could remain so composed. However, before he could push the joke further, Kotone quickly interrupted, flustered, and insisted that they were not a couple. Rikuto, still trying to process everything, found himself more confused than ever. A question lingered in his mind, one that he couldn't ignore. He finally decided to ask it, who was this girl? His tone was serious and his expression unreadable, leaving the others momentarily stunned. At first, they thought he was joking. The idea that he truly didn't recognize her seemed absurd. One of the boys scoffed, saying it was too much to pretend not to remember someone who had just risked her life in front of him. But Rikuto wasn't playing around. He insisted he genuinely had no idea who she was. Kotone took a moment to absorb his words. Then, nodding slowly, she admitted that the question made sense. It had been a long time, after all. If he had forgotten, it wasn't unexpected. She introduced herself as Taban Kotone and explained that she had attended the same school as him. Trying to jog his memory, she reminded him that they had once been close. They had even called each other by childhood nicknames Riku-chan and Koto-chan. At the mention of the nickname, something in Rikuto shifted. His eyes widened slightly as distant memories resurfaced. Recognition dawned on his face, but with it came an unsettling realization. This was a girl he could never forgive. A flashback rushed into his mind. Kotone had once been someone he wanted to protect. She had been a battle he couldn't afford to lose. In one memory, he saw himself pushing a boy who had been hurting her, standing up for her when no one else did. That moment had been the beginning of everything, the catalyst that led to his downfall. Another scene played before his eyes. A discussion about a traffic accident, a pair of failed brakes. The memory shifted again, and suddenly, he was standing in the pouring rain. His younger self knelt on the ground, his body trembling as he sobbed over two lifeless figures. The pain from that day still burned inside him, as raw as ever. A part of him had been lost in that moment. Nearby, another boy, one who had been with Kotone, held onto a piece of wreckage that might have belonged to the vehicle. His mind spiraled further into the past. A voice echoed, cold and detached. Someone had once called him childish, someone who possessed a cruel cunning and an unforgiving nature. The flashback shifted again, this time showing a more familiar scene. He was on the ground, his head pressed under the weight of someone's foot as laughter surrounded him. The others had stolen everything from him. His dignity, his peace, everything. Somewhere along the way, he had died inside. The past dissolved, pulling him back into the present. His entire body trembled. A wave of nausea crashed over him, making him feel lightheaded. His breath came in uneven gasps, and for a brief moment, everything around him blurred. Kotone's eyes widened in panic as she saw his sudden change in demeanor. Fear crept into her voice as she asked what was wrong. Rikuto tried to steady himself, forcing a deep breath. He quickly reassured her that it was nothing, that he was fine now. But Nishi wasn't convinced. He stepped closer, his expression serious. It was obvious that Rikuto was not okay. Still reeling from the flood of memories, Rikuto admitted that he now remembered who Kotone was. However, he hadn't realized they had gone to the same school. Kotone lowered her gaze, her voice filled with regret. She apologized, saying she wished she had spoken to him sooner. Maybe things would have been different. But Rikuto dismissed the idea. He told her she had made the right choice. Nothing good would have come from getting involved in his suffering back then. His words left her disheartened. Nishi, sensing the tension, reminded them that the sun was setting. They couldn't afford to waste any more time. He turned to Kotone and asked if she would be joining them. She nodded. Despite everything she had been through, she understood what had to be done. The group began moving through the school once more. At one point, Kotone knelt down and whispered a quiet prayer for a deceased boy they had come across. Nishi, ever vigilant, caught sight of a small creature, a lizard, spitting small bursts of fire from its mouth. The realization soon dawned on them. The building was eerily silent. There were no signs of monsters anymore. Rikuto, analyzing the situation, reached a conclusion. Now that they had killed the demon, the boss of the area, the smaller creatures might start appearing. The balance had shifted. Taking precautions, the team secured the fire doors and checked the routes leading to the second floor. It was a temporary measure, but it would hold. Their next priority was heading to the rooftop, where the others were waiting. Upon reaching their destination, they were greeted with relief and joy. 4 survivors had been waiting there, and seeing the group return safely brought hope to their eyes. Excited voices called out, referring to them as Nishi's patrol. One of the boys rushed to the archer, his face filled with unshaken belief. He had never doubted that Nishi would return. Another boy called for Kotone, rushing toward her before pulling her into a tight embrace. The name Ske was spoken. He was Kotone's boyfriend. She called out Rikuto's name. Nishi, watching the interaction closely, noted something peculiar. He turned to Kotone, asking if she knew this boy. The young man confidently introduced himself Sushinu, Kotone's boyfriend. Sakura, intrigued, listened closely as the story unfolded. Kotone, now visibly embarrassed, lowered her head. But her boyfriend only smiled, reassuring her that she had no reason to feel that way. Their relationship was already accepted by both their families. Grateful that everyone had made it back alive, he expressed his thanks to Nishi for protecting her. The archer, however, quickly corrected him. The person who deserved gratitude was not him, it was Rikuto. The realization settled over the group. It had been Rikuto who had risked everything to save Kotone. Su, surprised, turned to confirm the story. The discussion carried on among the survivors. Someone brought up a past event, mentioning that Nishi had claimed Rikuto had defeated Teba effortlessly earlier. Skepticism lingered in the air. Could it really be the same person? Rikuto, seemingly unfazed, simply remarked that perhaps he should be called Kurigan. A flashback emerged, a memory of the past, the protagonist being grabbed by his collar, lifted off the ground as his bullies mocked him. Kotone's boyfriend, observing Rikuto, spoke once more. Though grateful for what had happened, he made it clear Kotone had caused him a lot of problems. Rikuto, unfazed by the comment, simply responded that it wasn't an issue. Su, satisfied, assured him that everything would be fine. He would protect her from now on. Su turned to Rikuto, asking him to leave Kotone in his care. Taking her aside, he spoke gently, telling her she should rest since she was visibly exhausted. However, she refused, her expression unwavering. There was something she needed to say to Rikuto. Nearby, the protagonist and Nishi exchanged glances, confused by the sudden seriousness in her demeanor. Sakura, still in awe of what had transpired, took the moment to express her gratitude. She turned to Kotone, thanking her for providing the alcohol, explaining that it had ultimately saved their lives. Sakura then delved into the details, discussing the monster's bodily composition, the role of oxygen molecules, its circulatory system, and the precise way the alcohol had worked to weaken it. Her explanation was thorough, almost clinical. Nishi, still curious, asked why she had been carrying ethanol in the first place. The question seemed to catch her off guard. She hesitated, as if searching for the right words, but before she could respond, Uyama-sensei interrupted. The teacher's focus was on Rikuto. He wanted a full explanation of everything that had happened. Once Rikuto finished recounting the events, the group reached an unsettling conclusion. The situation was worse than they had hoped. Their chances of survival remained slim. The archer added that apart from Kotone, they had found no other survivors during their search, which was an ominous sign. A heavy silence fell over the group as the remaining students absorbed the news. The reality of their circumstances became clearer, and with it, a sense of growing despair. Despite this, it was established that the lower floors of the building were now safe. The fire doors had been sealed, offering a reasonable level of security. At the very least, they now had places to sleep without immediate fear of attack. Nishi took this as a small victory. Under these conditions, they could endure a little longer. Uyama-sensei took charge, issuing orders to gather supplies and establish a more secure base. He assured them that he would take responsibility for the situation moving forward. Two of the boys scoffed at the idea, mocking the teacher and calling him an idiot. Regardless of their complaints, the group moved forward with organizing their space, each person contributing however they could. The students began establishing a new base, working together to create a safe shelter within the school. Amid the activity, Rikuto was seen taking on one of the more grim tasks, carrying the bodies of the deceased. Alone, he moved the corpses, clearing the space before decomposition set in. Kotone, observing this, frowned. She found it awful that Uyama had left such a burden solely on Rikuto's shoulders. Rikuto, however, remained indifferent. Someone had to do it. The bodies needed to be removed before they became a health risk. Kotone, still uneasy, asked what he planned to do with them once he had gathered them all. He admitted that burying them would be difficult. His solution was simple: he would take them to the rooftop. From there, perhaps they could find another way to dispose of them properly. Frustrated but understanding his reasoning, Kotone agreed with his plan. As Rikuto continued carrying the bodies, the weight of the situation pressed on him. Among the corpses, he recognized the face of a boy who had once bullied him in class. For a fleeting moment, a dark thought crossed his mind. All the bullies, the neglectful teachers, every single one of them deserved this fate. If they were all dead, he might finally be able to laugh. But before the thought could fully form, Kotone interrupted him. Her presence shattered his moment of introspection, forcing him to acknowledge the unsettling truth: he wouldn't be able to laugh. And that, perhaps, was the worst part of all. Still lost in thought, Rikuto admitted that he hadn't been able to laugh ever since everything happened to him. Maybe this was divine punishment. Kotone, however, disagreed. To her, Rikuto had always been a hero both now and in the past. The word caught him off guard. A hero. For a brief moment he felt as if he didn't recognize the title, as if it didn't belong to him. Kotone, undeterred by his silence, insisted on helping him with the bodies. Rikuto hesitated. It wasn't a sight meant for someone like her. The scene was gruesome, something most people would struggle to stomach. He asked if she was sure. Kotone, unwavering, said it was something she couldn't ignore. Seeing her resolve, Rikuto nodded. If that was her decision, then she was welcome to help. The two continued their grim work together. Before long, however, their task was interrupted. Someone called out to Rikuto. Turning around, he barely had time to react before an attack came his way. The next moment, chaos erupted. Rikuto found himself engaged in a sudden physical fight, the force of the confrontation startling Kotone. His attacker was none other than her boyfriend, Sue, whose expression was twisted with fury. Demanding answers, Sue accused Rikuto of getting too close to Kotone. His rage was palpable as he grabbed the girl roughly by the arm, insisting that she had no reason to be involved in something so disgusting. Rikuto, now on the ground, tried to make sense of the situation. Sue glared down at him, mocking him. He accused him of manipulating Kotone, trying to get her to do his dirty work. Kotone, shocked by his words, immediately stepped in to defend Rikuto. She insisted that it had been her choice, that no one had forced her into anything. But Sue wasn't convinced. His anger only deepened. He claimed to understand what was going on now. He had no doubt in his mind that Kotone had only helped because she felt obligated after being rescued. Kotone, growing more frustrated, demanded to know what he was talking about. Ignoring her, Sue declared that he would tell everyone what had just happened. Rikuto, still on the ground, remained silent, unsure how to respond. Kotone, desperate to de-escalate the situation, pleaded with her boyfriend, asking why he was acting this way toward Rikuto. But Sue didn't care. He coldly told her to shut up. Rikuto, unfazed, made it clear that he didn't care either. If Sue wanted to make a scene, he was free to do so. Seeing that his insults and accusations weren't affecting Rikuto, Sue let out a nervous laugh. He mocked him again, saying that Rikuto was good at bluffing, pretending to be unfazed even though he was probably on the verge of snapping. But Rikuto showed no reaction. Finally losing patience, Sue roughly pulled Kotone away by the arm. She had no business being here. Rikuto continued his grim task, carrying the bodies one by one. As he moved, he glanced back just in time to see Kotone break free from Sue's grip. Her sudden defiance left everyone momentarily stunned. Her voice wavered, but her resolve was unshaken. She had endured enough. Desperation filled Sue's eyes as he demanded to know what she was doing. But Kotone was beyond reason now. With raw emotion, she poured her heart out. She admitted that their relationship had never been built on love, only on social expectations. Their parents' status, their reputations, it had all dictated the way she treated him. But she couldn't take it anymore. Sue's face twisted in confusion. He had always believed they would be together forever. Tears spilled down Kotone's cheeks as she shook her head, unable to hold back any longer. Her breakdown only sent Sue deeper into panic. Meanwhile, Rikuto, growing impatient with their drama, coldly interjected. Their argument was disrupting his work. He told them to take it elsewhere. Sue snapped, barking at him to stay out of it. Unfazed, Rikuto repeated himself. He wasn't asking for much, just for Kotone to stop making a scene. But Sue was unwilling to let things go. He kept repeating that no one would be able to protect her. The words struck Kotone as absurd. Her expression darkened as she turned to him, her voice trembling with restrained anger. He spoke of protection, yet he had used her as a sacrifice to save himself. Realization dawned in Sue's eyes. He had been found out. Desperate, he tried to dismiss her accusations, calling her clueless. But Kotone wasn't backing down. She knew exactly what had happened. A flashback surfaced the moment the monsters first attacked. The two of them had been running through one of the school hallways, desperately searching for safety. Kotone had been the one to suggest the rooftop. It seemed like the safest place to go. But as they neared the stairs, Sue had made a decision. Without hesitation, he tripped her. Kotone had fallen hard to the ground, stunned and in pain. Panic gripped her as she realized she had been left behind. She called out to him, begged him to wait, but he never once turned back. The monsters had been closing in, their grotesque forms drawing closer. Terrified, she had scrambled to her feet, her heart hammering in her chest. With no other choice, she had found a nearby locker and thrown herself inside, hiding as the creatures swarmed past. That was the truth. Returning to the present, she stood firm. Sue's expression twisted in rage as he vehemently denied her words, calling them lies. But Kotone knew better. There was no way she was wrong about what had happened that day. Her voice was cold as she declared that she no longer trusted the person she had once called her boyfriend. She had always known deep down that they should never have been together, and now she was done. Fury overtook her. With finality, she demanded that Sue forget about her. She never wanted to see him again. Not now, not ever. The impact of her words left him momentarily stunned. Then, as if latching onto some last hope, Sue turned to her with a smirk and asked if she had feelings for Rikuto. His sudden shift left Kotone momentarily speechless. Then he laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that unsettled her. She could feel something shift in his tone. He was unpredictable now. The unease only grew when he turned to her, irritation clear in his eyes. Without warning, he told her to shut up. Then he raised his fist, ready to strike. Before the punch could land, Rikuto stepped in. His hand shot out, catching Sue's wrist in a firm grip. With eerie calm, Rikuto once again asked both of them to leave him to his work. Releasing Sue's hand, he remained impassive. For a moment, Sue simply stared at him. Then, his lips curled into a smirk. He remarked that Rikuto had always had a different aura, even when he was surrounded by hooligans, dressed like death itself. Finally, he asked a pointed question. Why was it that everyone who had ever bullied Rikuto ended up dead? The words sent a ripple of tension through the air. Tabana immediately stepped in, warning Sue that he was going too far, but Sue only scoffed. Rikuto, still unbothered, spoke up. He had a question of his own. What exactly was Sue trying to achieve by slandering him? Did he think it would make him more important? Sue bristled at the words, his smirk vanishing. His expression darkened as he called Rikuto dark in return, sneering at the way he dared to lecture someone like him, a model student. Losing patience, he lunged. Kotone tried to step in, but both Rikuto and Sue stopped her, telling her to stay out of it. Sue was out of control now, rage fully consuming him. He shouted that Rikuto had no place here, that he should just disappear for everyone's sake. But Rikuto remained completely unfazed. Sue, desperate to prove himself, launched a series of karate strikes. His movements were controlled, his skill undeniable, his ranking was clearly high. But Rikuto had been trained far longer. With quiet appreciation, he thanked Sue for his technique. Then, calmly, he stated that he wouldn't fight him. He simply stated that, whether he liked it or not, he was Kotone's friend, and because of that, he wouldn't hurt him. That was the final push. Sue lost all restraint. His fury completely overtook him. Yelling in frustration, he swung at Rikuto once more. But Rikuto had faced far worse. After fighting a monster, there was nothing left that could faze him. With effortless precision, he dodged the first strike. The second kick missed as well. Sue felt the shift. Something about Rikuto was different now. He realized in that instant that the battle against the monster had changed him. Rikuto's mental strength had become untouchable. Sue, unwilling to admit defeat, tried again. Rikuto sidestepped once more, and this time, Sue lost his balance. He stumbled backward, falling hard onto the pile of bodies that Rikuto had been carrying. For the first time, he looked down. He saw the lifeless faces staring back at him. Shock gripped him. Mocking him, Rikuto smirked and asked if he was willing to help carry the bodies now. Sue's hands clenched into fists, his face twisted with pure rage. Grabbing the nearest piece of wood, he prepared to strike. A sudden noise cut through the tension. Everyone turned. Standing nearby, Nishi had been watching the entire ordeal. His gaze was sharp, his presence undeniable. He finally spoke, his tone questioning. Rikuto brushed it off, stating that it was nothing, but Nishi disagreed. The tension between the boys remained thick in the air. Nishi, watching closely, had already pieced together what was happening and grew increasingly suspicious. Turning to Kotone, he asked if she was truly okay with everything that had just unfolded. Sue, irritated, finally relented. He scoffed, muttering that everything was fine, before turning on his heel and leaving the area. As he walked past the archer, Nishi silently observed him, noting the sharp contrast in his personality. Sue excelled in academics and sports, yet there was something unsettling about his obsessive nature when it came to Kotone. Nishi hoped for everyone's sake that he wouldn't escalate things further over her. Meanwhile, Rikuto, brushing off the confrontation, turned to his friend and asked what had brought him there. Nishi explained that his previous task had settled down, so he had come to help. He then apologized for leaving all the work to Rikuto. Rikuto, unbothered, simply dismissed it as nothing. The two exchanged a fist bump. Tabana, observing them, felt a flicker of happiness at the sight of their growing friendship. With no time to waste, they resumed their work. The bodies needed to be transported to the rooftop, and once that was done, they could return and plan their next steps. Nightfall, as time passed, the sky darkened, and the survivors gathered inside the shelter. The atmosphere was tense, but the sense of momentary security allowed everyone to take a breath. Uyama-sensei surveyed the group, his sharp eyes assessing each student. A box of supplies was distributed among them, enough to last for a short while but not indefinitely. Despite the necessity of rations, most of the students found Oyama irritating. His presence alone seemed to dampen their spirits. Nishi, barely touching his portion, admitted that he wasn't hungry. Meanwhile, Rikuto helped himself to the available food, unfazed by the circumstances. He warned his friends that if they refused to eat, they would weaken and die before anything else got to them. The archer understood the logic, but admitted that, at that moment, he simply couldn't bring himself to eat. Before anyone could respond, a sudden scream echoed through the shelter. The noise jolted everyone. Turning toward the source, they saw Sakura staring at her phone, her face filled with confusion. Nishi quickly approached her, asking what had happened. Holding up her phone, she explained that it wasn't working. As he got closer, he noticed that she also had a phone charger in her hands. She revealed that she had found it and had hoped to charge her phone, but nothing happened. Nishi pondered the situation, considering the possibilities. Perhaps someone had already used the charger? Sakura quickly refuted the idea. The packaging had been completely sealed, it had never been used before. A realization dawned on them. The phones. The ones that the monsters had emerged from. They needed to be collected. Sakura's excitement waned, disappointment evident in her voice. She had hoped to access the internet, to find information about what was happening. The crushing realization that it wouldn't be that simple left her visibly upset. She sighed, mumbling that she really wished she had internet right now. Kotona, watching her, raised a question. Would the internet even work, considering that the power was out? Sakura, regaining some composure, nodded. This city was a model for advanced development. Unlike traditional infrastructure, it didn't require external electricity to function. Nishi admitted that he didn't fully understand any of that, but he found it fascinating and wanted to learn more. Sakura continued thinking aloud. If she had a functioning phone, she could have tested it. But then a voice interrupted her thoughts. Someone stepped forward holding out a device. It was Kurogain. He held up his smartphone and asked if they were looking for one that didn't produce monsters. He explained that his phone had already been broken before the incident, which was likely why nothing had emerged from it. Nishi considered the possibility. The phone could be defective. Kotone, stepping in, examined it closely. She noted that the model was the same as hers. Another student observed the device and remarked that it was an old model, one they had all once used. As the conversation continued, Sakura's mind raced. If they could repair the phone, would it be functional again? For the first time in a while, she felt a glimmer of hope. Still inside the school, Nishi brought everyone's focus back to reality. Their current pace was unsustainable. If nothing changed, things would only get worse. The food they had found would last 3 days at most. Rikuto added that their weapons were also lacking. The steel pipe he carried was still the most reliable option they had, but that wasn't saying much. The boy with brown hair summarized their predicament. They were in serious trouble. However, despite the dire situation, he emphasized that not all hope was lost. According to Ku, it was possible to fix Kurogaine's phone using the right tools and parts from Tasha's phone. The blonde girl, uncertain, forced a hesitant smile. She stammered that she probably could repair it, but the worried glances from the other students didn't go unnoticed. The protagonist, ever blunt, sarcastically thanked her for breaking his phone earlier. Irritated, one of the bullies lashed out, yelling that fixing the phone wouldn't change anything. Tuya quickly countered. With the repair, they could potentially access the internet, which could lead to critical information. They could check for emergency shelters and even connect with other survivors. As he spoke, a shift occurred among the students. For the first time, their expressions softened. A spark of hope began to spread among them. Kotone, still analyzing the situation, turned to Sakura and asked about the computers. Sakura shook her head. Like the phones, all the computers had been fried. The rescued girl found that strange. It didn't make sense that they had been affected while powered off. Ku, however, explained. The connection terminals had been destroyed. That meant that even though the computers were off at the time of the attack, they were still affected. Sakura groaned in frustration, grabbing her blonde hair. This phenomenon was beyond comprehension. It was starting to give her a headache. Nishi, though concerned, forced himself to stay focused. There was one fact they couldn't ignore. Only the phone that had already been broken before the attack had a chance of connecting to the internet. Nishi stressed that their top priority should be contacting other survivors, those who had been as fortunate as Rikuto to make it through the initial chaos. Rikuto agreed. The first step was finding the right tools to repair the phone. Turning to Sakura, he asked if the general discount store was really the best place to look. Though she hesitated for a moment, she eventually admitted that it seemed like a good idea. Two frightened girls, who had been silently listening, suddenly spoke up. They urged everyone to head to the store immediately, not just for phone parts but also for weapons and food. Before anyone else could agree, Sensei Oyama shouted for them to stop. He was completely against the idea. It was far too dangerous. Kuravin countered his argument. If they didn't go, they would sooner or later succumb to starvation or the next wave of monsters. The teacher, clearly frustrated, insisted that rescue was still a possibility. They needed to wait before taking such extreme risks. Tension filled the room as an argument began. Uyama warned them that monsters were everywhere. But Rikuto, remaining firm, pointed out that the store wasn't that far from their location. He emphasized that if they used a car, the plan should be safer and more efficient. Then he turned to the teacher, begging him to drive them. Uyama's face twisted in terror at the very suggestion. Tuya quickly interjected, saying that this was the only viable option. Traveling on foot would be far more dangerous. The teacher, shaken, was desperate to shut down the idea. He pleaded with them to reconsider. He yelled, saying that going outside was out of the question. His duty was to protect the students, and this plan was too reckless. Nishi, watching closely, reflected on the situation. The teacher's stubbornness was becoming a major problem. Then, to everyone's shock, Koton stood up. Her voice was decisive. She would drive. Nishi turned to her in disbelief. He asked how she knew how to drive without a license. Koton explained that, growing up, her grandfather had often let her drive his truck around his farm. She had experience, even if it wasn't official. Her boyfriend, enraged, immediately tried to stop her. But Kotone shut him down before he could say more. One of the students asked if she was truly sure about this. The world outside was deadly, and even inside a car they wouldn't necessarily be safe. A flicker of anxiety crossed her face, but she stood firm. She didn't want to die. But if they stayed trapped here, waiting for something to happen, she wouldn't even know what was going on. She refused to meet her end like that. If there was even the slightest chance of surviving, they had to take it. Rikuto, watching her, felt a deep admiration for her resolve. He simply nodded, saying that he understood and that he was counting on her. That was when her boyfriend lost control. Before he could react, Uyama snapped. Furious, the teacher punched the chalkboard, sending a loud crack through the classroom. The students flinched. His anger exploded. He demanded to know why they were making decisions without him. He was the teacher. It was his responsibility to protect the students. He wouldn't allow them to do whatever they wanted. Nishi tried to reason with him. Something needed to be done. But Uyama, completely filled with rage, cut him off. Shouting at the archer to shut up, he turned back to the students. With wild intensity, he belittled them. He called Tuya just a brat, insisting that they should only listen to him. Then he made his final argument. If they rationed their food, it could last a week. They should just wait for rescue. Couldn't they see that his plan made the most sense? The students remained silent. Then Theude spoke up. He challenged the teacher, stating that his plan was flawed and wouldn't work. Uyama, furious at being questioned, scolded him for speaking out. But Theude stood his ground. He asked the one question no one could answer. Where is actually safe? Had the teacher even seen the monsters firsthand? As the argument escalated, something dripped from the ceiling. Thick, blue slime. It landed directly onto Tanny. His screams pierced the air as the substance engulfed his body. A new kind of terror took hold of the students. The slime moved unnaturally, absorbing Tanny's skin as he writhed in pain. Everything descended into chaos. Without hesitation, Kurogen charged forward. Gripping his steel pipe, he struck the slime, yelling that common sense didn't apply to these creatures. There was no safe place, and waiting around would only make things worse. The students, horrified, tried to make sense of what they were witnessing. Someone shouted, demanding to know what this thing even was. Meanwhile, Tanny continued pleading for help. Rikuto, assessing the situation, quickly formulated a plan. Shouting for him to hold on, he grabbed a large blanket. His voice rang out through the chaos. Nishi! The archer immediately responded. The students watched in shock as Rikuto and Nishi worked together. They realized something. The slime was dissolving human flesh, but not synthetic fibers or clothing. That was their chance. Moving in perfect coordination, they counted down 1, 2, 3. The blanket was thrown over the slime, covering it completely, as Nishi pulled Tanny free. Keiju, horrified, asked if they had really managed to remove the creature. Still gripping his steel pipe, Rikuto realized something chilling. His fear had come true. Rikuto quickly realized the monster had taken no damage. His mind raced, recalling a common rule in video games. Slimes were typically resistant to physical attacks and only vulnerable to magic. He needed fire. But Tuya, standing beside him, admitted he had no idea how to make that happen. Before they could think of another solution, Sakura appeared. Without hesitation, she held up a flammable liquid, pouring it over the slime's writhing form. Then, she lit a match. The flame dropped, and the moment it touched the creature, a massive explosion erupted. The impact sent a burst of heat through the air, making everyone shield their faces. As the fire dissipated, Sakura checked the scene. The slime was gone. It had evaporated completely. Rikuto, seeing the result, confirmed the theory. Fire was its weakness. Turning to Sakura, he thanked her for her quick thinking. Then, he remembered Tanny. But before he could ask, Nishi delivered the news. They had been too late. Teita, still on his knees, called his friend's name in despair. Sensei Uyama, watching the whole event unfold, stood frozen in confusion. His mind struggled to process what had just happened. Rikuto turned to him, his voice filled with anger. Did he finally understand the gravity of the situation? If they had been any slower, everyone could have ended up like Tanny. Fury boiled in his words as he demanded to know, were they really just going to sit here and wait for a rescue that might never come? Uyama's legs gave out. He collapsed to the ground, his resolve shattered. He muttered to himself, saying he didn't understand anymore. Then, his shoulders slumped in defeat. The students could do whatever they wanted. Leaving the school without wasting another second, Tuya, Kurogane, Kuju, and Tabana made their way through the infested hallways. They eliminated any monster in their path. Realizing they had no time to waste, they rushed forward before any new threats could appear. They found Uyama's car. Handing the keys to Kotone, they prepared to leave. She studied the vehicle. Noticing it was an automatic transmission, she muttered that she was more familiar with manual cars. Nishi, amused, laughed in relief and praised her. But before the moment could settle, Sakura interrupted. She hesitated before asking, did she really have to go? The archer didn't hesitate. It was obvious that she had to. She was the only one who knew exactly which parts and tools were needed to fix the phone. Sakura, sweating nervously, forced an awkward smile. She sighed, lamenting her short life as she hesitantly climbed into the car. Tuya, watching, asked where she was keeping her backpack. Before she could answer, Su suddenly appeared. Declaring his intent to come along, he insisted that it was his job to protect Tabana. Nishi, suspicious, warned him not to start any problems. Su dismissed the warning. He confidently said there was nothing to worry about. He wasn't stupid. Settling into the car, he added that, like everyone else, he didn't want to die. He would do whatever it took to ensure that didn't happen. From the back seat, Nishi noticed Su's expression. His jealousy was evident as he glared at Rikuto and Kotone. The archer hoped he wouldn't do anything reckless. Sitting in the driver's seat, Kotone turned to the group. Her voice was steady. Was everyone ready? Tuya, grinning, enthusiastically confirmed. They were all counting on her. Sakura nodded, though deep inside, she still wished she didn't have to go. Rikuto, in the passenger seat, reassured her everything was set. With that, they left. From the rooftop, the remaining students watched them disappear into the distance. One of them spoke up, suggesting they should hurry and start burning the bodies, following Kurogane's recommendation. Sensei Uyama, still gripping a sword, suddenly snapped. Slamming the blade into the ground, he furiously shouted at her to shut up. His voice was full of anger as he raged against Rikuto's name. He didn't want to hear about that boy anymore. The corpses? He would handle them when Rikuto returned. He was the one in charge, and everyone should only do what he said. On the road, meanwhile, the team of warriors drove through monster-infested streets. As soon as they heard the engine roar, creatures immediately tried to attack them. Tabana, panicking, accidentally ran over one of them. Rikuto praised her, comforting her with calm reassurance. Nishi, standing through the sunroof, surveyed their surroundings. So far, driving had been the right choice. The smaller monsters couldn't reach them. But then, his expression changed. He spotted something bigger. A massive creature loomed ahead. His voice sharpened. He told Kotone to change course. Sakura, holding the map, quickly directed them. They needed to return to the last four-way intersection and turn right. From the passenger seat, Rikuto reminded Kotone everyone was counting on her. From the back seat, Su watched angrily. Through the sunroof, the archer scanned the sky. Enormous flying monsters loomed above. On the streets below, wolf-like creatures devoured helpless survivors. The horrific scene overwhelmed him. It felt as if the world had already ended. Kurogane, keeping his focus, asked if there were any signs of survivors. The archer responded grimly. None. Sakura, despite the bleak answer, remained hopeful. She suspected that others might be alive somewhere, hiding. If anything, they were the ones acting abnormally, venturing outside. Then, Su suddenly spoke. He ordered Kotone to stop the car. She complied, quickly hitting the brakes. Confused, Tuya asked what was wrong. Su, eyes fixed ahead, pointed into the distance. About 50 meters away, he said, there was a convenience store. There, they might find food. Su pressed the issue, questioning whether they should check out the convenience store while they had the chance. Ku agreed. From the front seat, Rikuto pointed out that they would likely find food at their original destination as well. But Su snapped back. No one had asked for his opinion. Shindu, also irritated, challenged Rikuto further. Was he going to argue that it was too dangerous? Rikuto, unfazed, countered with a simple question: did his opinion not count? Tension in the car thickened. Su, clearly frustrated, accused Rikuto of acting like a leader just because he had taken the initiative to fight monsters. Before the argument could escalate further, Nishi intervened. He calmly pointed out that Kagame was merely expressing his thoughts. Sakura quickly agreed. Everyone needed to get along. Even Tabana scolded her boyfriend, who begrudgingly grumbled under his breath. Meanwhile, Nishi weighed the pros and cons. There was no guarantee they would find food at their intended destination. If monsters had already overtaken it, their chances of getting supplies could be slim. Before he could reach a conclusion, Rikuto spoke up. He admitted that there was no perfect answer. No matter how much they debated, they couldn't be certain what the right choice was. Even leaving the school had been a gamble. But now that they had rolled the dice, he was committed to following through with everything. Above all else, he trusted his friend's judgment. Whatever happened next, he wouldn't complain. His words settled the debate. Taking charge, Tuya declared that food was essential. They needed to take every opportunity to gather supplies. With that, he asked for everyone's agreement. Arriving at the store 5 minutes later, they pulled into the parking lot of Honolulu Coffee. Tuya turned to Shinju, confirming that this was the place. Shinju nodded. Sakura reminded everyone to be careful. Nishi added that if anything seemed off, they would leave immediately. With their plan set, they cautiously entered the store. The shelves were almost entirely empty. Despite the lack of supplies, Rikuto noticed something positive. There weren't any monsters. Nishi reflected on this. If no food remained, it likely meant survivors or creatures had already looted the place. But Kurogane soon spotted something. A few canned goods that seemed untouched. Encouraged, they began gathering whatever they could find. An ominous discovery 15 minutes later, they had filled several bags with usable supplies. Feeling somewhat satisfied, they prepared to leave. Then, a noise came from behind a closed door. The group froze. They slowly approached, opening it cautiously. But there was no one inside. Instead, their eyes landed on a cardboard box sitting in the center of the room. They stared at it, intrigued. Approaching first, Shinderu confirmed that the box contained bread. Excited by their discovery, he reached out for it. But Rikuto, his instincts kicking in, stopped him. Shinderu, annoyed, turned back. What was the problem? He was the one who found it. Rikuto remained wary. Something felt off. He pointed to the bloodstains around the box. Didn't it seem strange? Shinderu, growing more irritated, dismissed his concerns. What could have possibly happened? Rikuto admitted he didn't know. But something written on the floor caught his attention. A bad feeling crept over him. He warned everyone it was best to stay away from the box. Shinderu scoffed, mocking him. He accused Rikuto of acting paranoid, of secretly planning to come back later to steal the credit for finding it. Nishi, seeing the tension escalate, tried to defuse the situation, but Shinderu, gripping the box, snapped. It was his. Then, a large red eye appeared. It stared directly at him. Shinderu's face drained of color. His body froze, and then he screamed. The attack begins outside. Inside the car, the girls heard the scream. Fear gripped them. Something was happening. Before they could react, Sakura shouted. She told Kotone to duck down now. Then, they saw them. Monsters. Massive reptilian creatures. They carried spears, the severed heads of humans impaled on the tips. Their guttural growls filled the air. The girls, terrified, huddled inside the car. Meanwhile, inside the store, the nightmare escalated. A monstrous being emerged, 1 eye, 9 tentacles, its form twisting unnaturally. Without hesitation, Rikuto attacked. He swung his steel pipe, striking it squarely with all his might. Shinderu, standing back, watched with an irritated expression. Panting, Rikuto glanced at the box. A mimic. He had only seen creatures like this in games. This wasn't just a monster, it was a trap. Before anyone could react, Nishi shouted. Something was happening outside. The hidden boys peeked carefully through a gap in the store's front window. Their eyes widened. A lizard-like humanoid stood motionless, scanning the area. Kurogane, watching closely, recognized its behavior. It had come to investigate something. His friend knew what that meant. This was bad, because there weren't just 1 or 2 of them. There were many. Their best bet was to stay hidden and wait. If they were spotted, they had no chance against that many. Meanwhile, Tuya whispered anxiously, "Were the girls okay?" Before anyone could answer, one of the lizard men took a step forward. It approached the car. Then, without warning, it smashed the window with its spear. Khan's scream pierced the air, sending a jolt of fear through everyone. The boys inside the store froze. The girls had been discovered. The group had no choice. They had to move now. But one of them, terrified, couldn't bring himself to move. The others made a quick decision they would go without him. Outside, Kuju was being pulled from the car. Desperately, she shouted at the monster, trying to convince it she wasn't appetizing. It didn't work. The creatures surrounded them. Their fate seemed sealed. Then a sudden impact. One of the lizard men collapsed. A steel pipe smashed down onto another. It was Rikuto. He charged forward, fearlessly taking on the monsters. Shouting to Tabana, he ordered her to take care of Sakura. If things went south, she was to leave him behind and escape with Nishi. The lizard men quickly regrouped. 3 of them cornered Rikuto. He had no way out. Just as one of the creatures lunged, a whistling sound cut through the air. An arrow struck the monster. It collapsed. Tuya, hidden nearby, clenched his jaw. If he was discovered, he would lose his advantage. And then he would be outnumbered. But Rikuto was still fighting. He refused to fall. Above them, on the roof of the store, a boy suddenly appeared. He hurled a rock, hitting one of the creatures squarely in the head. Rikuto stared in surprise. The boy continued pelting the monsters with everything he could find. Meanwhile, Nishi fired another arrow. Then, another figure emerged. A boy with platinum hair leaped into battle. Brass knuckles gleamed on his fists as he took down another lizard man in a single, powerful strike. Rikuto, still catching his breath, seized the opportunity. He finished off the remaining monsters before they could recover. The battlefield fell silent. The last of the creatures lay defeated. Rikuto, exhaling deeply, turned to one of the unknown boys. He thanked him for saving his life. The girls, finally safe, ran toward them, relief evident on their faces. Meanwhile, Tuya took note of something. The new boys wore the same school uniforms. They were from their school. Despite the dangerous surroundings, Tuya knew they had to leave quickly. One of the new boys, a green-eyed student, stepped forward. He offered to take them to a safe place. He turned to his companion, referring to him as Sene, and asked if he had any objections. Sene's expression darkened. He clearly didn't like the idea. Nishi let out a sigh of relief. For a moment, he had thought they wouldn't make it. Rikuto, nodding, remarked that as long as you never give up, luck would find a way to knock on your door. Tabana quickly took charge. She ordered everyone into the car. The boy from the rooftop looked stunned. You can drive? A new shelter. 10 minutes passed as they drove through the abandoned city. The red-haired boy finally introduced himself. His name was Ta. His friend, the platinum-haired fighter, was called Yamaka Takashi. Sene, still clearly annoyed, pointed ahead. That's our hideout. The group's eyes widened. Before them stood a massive hotel. The sign above the entrance read, Hotel Love. As they stepped out of the car, the group stared in disbelief. Could this place really be real? Ta, looking pleased, explained that it was the perfect refuge. Not many people had likely been staying here when the monsters appeared. That meant fewer phones and fewer monsters. Tuya's expression remained unreadable. The green-eyed boy noticed his reaction. Stepping forward, he reassured him. He and Takashi were not strangers. Tuya shook his head. That wasn't what he had been thinking about. Instead, he suggested they exchange information. Sue, irritated, told them to do whatever they wanted. The 2 new boys seemed bothered by his attitude. But Nishi, ever observant, told them not to mind him. He's just nervous. Ta, shrugging, finally explained his story. He had been returning from school when the monsters attacked. Relying on his speed, he had managed to outrun them. However, he had eventually been surrounded. That's when Takashi had appeared and saved him. Ta turned to his friend, grinning. Without Takashi, he admitted, he wouldn't still be breathing. Hearing this, Nishi's eyes narrowed. He had heard that name before. A dangerous reputation now. Things clicked into place. Takashi wasn't just any student. He was infamous. Rumors said he was a hardcore delinquent. Compared to him, Teita and his gang were nothing. His name was linked to violent crimes. He had alleged connections to the Yakuza. There were even whispers of murder. But as Nishi studied him now, something about the rumors didn't add up. Takashi seemed genuinely close to Ta. Their bond felt real. Could the stories have been exaggerated? Exchanging information, returning to the conversation, the green-eyed boy recounted what he knew so far. The monsters were everywhere. They had left the hotel to search for food and ended up encountering Rikuto's group at the store. That's when Rikuto asked something important. Had it been them who left the warning message near the cardboard box in the store? But Ta and Takashi looked genuinely confused. They had no idea what he was talking about. Rikuto, embarrassed, quickly told them to forget it. Ta shrugged, stating that was all they knew. Then, he turned to Nishi. Do you guys know anything else? As they headed inside the hotel, the group finally had a moment to share their side of the story. From the beginning of the outbreak, they explained everything. By the end of the retelling, the green-eyed boy let out a relieved breath. At last, he understood. Hope lingered in the air as one of the boys expressed his relief that survivors still remained at the school. If they managed to fix Kuren's phone, perhaps they could call for help. However, Tuya, ever the realist, admitted the chances of that happening were slim. Before the discussion could continue, Rikuto took control of the conversation. He turned to the 2 new boys and questioned what their next move would be, making it clear that they had the choice to either join the group or go their own way. Sakura, sounding disappointed, admitted that she hadn't wanted to come along in the first place. Her words hung in the air, leaving the others slightly puzzled. Unexpectedly, Yamala stepped forward, announcing his decision to go with them. His friend Ta was visibly shocked by the sudden declaration. The boy continued, insisting that he wouldn't slow them down. If needed, he could serve as a meat shield. Nishi, recognizing the value in having another strong fighter, welcomed the idea. Takashi then turned to Ta, leaving the decision in his hands. He told his friend that if he wanted to return to the school, it was fine, but Ta refused. If Takashi was going, then so was he. There was no room for hesitation anymore. He had to do something. Rikuto, pleased by their decision, turned to the archer, stating that stopping at the convenience store had been the right call. The archer agreed. However, Yoka was less optimistic. He pointed out the flaws in their plan, emphasizing that their approach had been reckless. With so many people in the area, the number of monsters would also be much higher. An entry plan was necessary, one that accounted for safe paths, dangerous zones, and escape routes. They couldn't afford to rush in blindly. Then, he turned to Kuju, stating that she was the most important person in their plan. Her protection had to be the top priority. Kuju was taken aback by the statement. The two heroes of the group acknowledged their mistake. They had acted hastily before and needed to be more careful this time. The platinum-haired fighter then spoke up, making it clear that he wouldn't be involved in the planning. He was a soldier, nothing more. He would follow whatever orders he was given. Finalizing the plan, with the plan needing refinement, a brainstorming session began. Everyone contributed their insights, working together to construct a solid strategy. Su, however, was completely excluded. He stood in the corner, silently watching. After the meeting, the group returned to the car. For several days, they focused solely on finding a safe route. Each trip was filled with danger, but through teamwork and careful maneuvering, they managed to overcome the challenges. Finally, after days of effort, they reached their final destination. Back at the school, as they approached, Rikuto took a moment to reflect. Had they rushed, they would have ended up as monster food. The girls exhaled in relief. The sight of the school felt strangely distant, as if it had been centuries since they were last there. Yamala noticed Ta's trembling legs. His friend insisted that it was just the excitement of battle. Kurogane quickly brought everyone back to focus. They needed to stay alert. Nishi added that from now on, they would have to face every challenge as it came. Inside the school, the scene was dire. Flying monsters ruled the skies. On the ground, shadowy creatures lurked, waiting. The remaining survivors were starving. Some sat on the floor, picking apart scraps of old bread. In one corner, a boy clutched his head, trembling. He was on the verge of breaking down. Across the room, two brothers whispered to each other. Neither of them had heard from SEK since the others left. Meanwhile, Inamoto, desperate for food, approached Sensei Uyama. The teacher sat alone, hoarding an entire loaf of bread. With pleading eyes, she asked if he could spare some. Everyone was hungry. Uyama's expression darkened. He slammed his weapon into the ground. His voice was filled with anger as he ordered her to forget it. Furious, he stood up and shouted at her. They didn't understand. Food was too precious. And he was in charge. The teacher's corruption, Teita, watching from nearby, muttered bitterly. While they starved, Uyama was stuffing himself. Still trying to reason with him, Enomoto insisted that they needed to ration better. If they didn't, they wouldn't last until the others returned. Uyama's face twisted into something cruel. A dark laugh escaped him. Then, he mocked her. Them? They're already dead. Enomoto's face paled in horror. Those students had risked everything to save them. Yet, Uyama mocked their efforts. Before she could react, Uyama grabbed her by the waist. His fingers dug into her skin. Then, he whispered if she did something for him, he might make an exception. Enomoto's eyes widened in terror. She struggled to break free. Her scream echoed through the room. Uyama laughed. He claimed he was just joking. Breaking point, the bullies who once ruled the school had seen enough. For the first time, they were disgusted. The survivors had reached their limit. On the rooftop, a pile of bodies lay in decay. Monsters feasted on the corpses. At that very moment, something far worse was coming. Rikuto's group nears the school. Meanwhile, Rikuto and the others walked cautiously. The area was eerily quiet. No monsters, no threats, only silence. It was unnatural. His grip tightened on his steel pipe. Something was off. A presence loomed nearby. Then realization struck. There was a much larger creature waiting for them. Rikuto reflected on the various types of monsters they had encountered so far. In areas where a powerful aberration was present, the number of smaller creatures seemed significantly lower. He reasoned that such creatures functioned like bosses in a video game. Their presence repelled lesser monsters. The archer, still confused, struggled to understand why the creatures they were facing were identical to those found in video games. However, he noted that this made it easier to name them. Kurogane agreed with his assessment. Someone, somewhere, had to know the names of these monsters. There had to be some sort of governing rule behind it all. Yoka, refocusing on the mission, stated that achieving their goal was the priority for now. Arriving at the electronics section. After some time, the group reached a floor filled with electronic devices, tools, and chemical products. Kuju, upon seeing the shelves lined with components, ran toward them, overwhelmed with joy. Her excitement bordered on delirium as she declared that she was going to live there. Tabana, watching her reaction, laughed. Rikuto, regaining focus, began dividing tasks. He assigned Aizu and Kotone to assist with the technology preparations. Both of them agreed without hesitation. Meanwhile, Su and Nishi were tasked with protecting the three working on the devices. Rikuto and the platinum-haired fighter were assigned to patrol the area, strategizing for the repairs. Sakura, already engrossed in her work, started strategizing how to modify the devices. Her friend, curious, asked what she was doing. She explained that she had found a CPU that could replace the broken one from Kuren's phone. The smell of solder filled the air, sparking an almost childlike excitement in her. She turned to Tabana, eager to share the moment, asking if she could feel the excitement too. Ta, standing nearby, was embarrassed by her behavior. A mysterious warning on patrol, Kurogane moved through the eerily silent corridors. Something about the emptiness unsettled him. That was when he noticed a note stuck to one of the shelves. Its message was cryptic. They eliminate intruders. The handwriting was familiar. It matched the warning written on the floor of the first store. Before he could ponder its meaning further, heavy footsteps echoed from the far end of the hall. An enormous creature emerged. It appeared to be made of stone, its massive form radiating heat from a glowing core where its neck should have been. The creature spoke in a mechanical tone. A heat source had been detected. Kurogane's muscles tensed as he took a closer look. A golem. Battle against the golem's voice shifted. It identified Kurogane as an intruder. Elimination was required. Without warning, it charged forward. Rikuto reacted instantly, swinging his steel pipe to counter. But the golem moved with unnatural speed. It dodged the strike effortlessly. Surprise flashed across Rikuto's face. He struck again this time. The blow landed solidly against the creature's body. However, the impact did nothing. The golem remained unfazed. Just as Kurogane braced for a counterattack, Takashi appeared. A powerful punch collided with the golem's body. The stone giant staggered but quickly recovered. Frustration flickered in Yoka's eyes. He had assumed that hitting the core would be enough to defeat it. Rikuto quickly suggested that they take a more cautious approach, searching for a true weak point. Taking control of the fight, Takashi instructed Rikuto to follow his commands. Rikuto agreed without hesitation. A hand-to-hand battle ensued. Takashi dodged the golem's massive swings, countering with powerful strikes. Kurogane, watching, marveled at his raw strength. Even among professional fighters, such speed and precision were rare. But as the fight continued, his admiration turned to concern. The golem was resilient. Every attack landed, yet none of them seemed to cause significant damage. Then, the golem struck. Its massive stone fist slammed into Takashi's head. A deep gash opened, blood trickling down his face. Kurogane's eyes widened. They were losing the advantage. A sudden realization, a memory resurfaced in Kurogane's mind. The note, the warning about eliminating intruders. Everything suddenly made sense. A surge of adrenaline kicked in as Kurogane shouted for Takashi to retreat. Gathering all his strength, he swung his steel pipe with full force. The weapon crashed against the golem's head. A crack formed, then the monster shattered completely. Aftermath, Yoka, still processing the battle, stared at the pile of rubble. Confusion crossed his face. He questioned what had happened. How had they won so suddenly? Hearing the commotion, the rest of the group rushed over. Nishi, surveying the remains, asked what had just happened. Kurogane confirmed it had been a golem. The archer, shocked, immediately asked if Rikuto had actually defeated it. Rikuto confirmed it. Recalling a similar scenario in a game, he had remembered that the answer was in the monster's head. Tuya, thrilled by the revelation, declared that their adventure was becoming even more incredible. Su, dismissive, attempted to downplay the victory. He scoffed, questioning if the creature had really been that big of a threat. Takashi, however, quickly shut him down. He praised Rikuto's instincts, recognizing his ability to analyze movements and identify the letters on the monster's head. With his kinetic vision, Takashi confirmed that Rikuto had read the battle perfectly. For the first time, Takashi expressed genuine trust in Rikuto. He was someone worth fighting alongside. Rikuto, appreciating the acknowledgement, thanked him. Aizu appeared and praised Rikuto for his victory, expressing his own desire for Yoka to place his trust in him as well. However, Shinu's irritation was obvious. The archer, eager to move forward, declared that with the enemy defeated, they could all return to work. Yet, something about Kurogane's expression remained uneasy. When asked what was wrong, he admitted that the creature seemed too weak to be the true boss. Before anyone could respond, a deep, ominous noise echoed through the store. Sakura, sensing something approaching fast, questioned if anyone else heard it. The sound grew louder. A massive purple sphere suddenly appeared above the escalator. It rushed toward them with incredible speed, catching everyone completely off guard. Nishi, eyes wide, mistook it for another boulder, but Sakura, confused, pointed out the flaw in that assumption. They were inside a store. How could there be a boulder here? Before Tabana could react, Rikuto lunged forward, pulling her to safety. The sphere slammed into the ground, revealing its true form. As it rose, a blinding purple glow emanated from its center. A single, massive eye stared back at them. The orb shifted, its shape morphing, stretching. It transformed into a towering humanoid, its single glowing eye embedded in the center of its chest. Rikuto, breathless, recognized it instantly. This was the true boss. Beside him, Tuya stammered, sweat dripping from his forehead. This was bad news. Then, it spoke. Repeating the same mechanical command as the smaller golem, the creature declared that it would eliminate the intruders. The battle begins. The massive golem moved first. Raising its colossal arm, it attempted to crush them all in a single strike. The impact missed but left a massive crater in the ground, shaking the entire floor. Rikuto, assessing the situation, noted that the letters engraved on its head were nearly unreachable. If they wanted to defeat it, they had to find another way. Tuya, determined to help, stepped forward. He aimed his arrows carefully, targeting the engraving on the golem's head. However, his shots barely left a scratch. The realization hit hard. Their weapons were completely ineffective. Kuju, terror-stricken, questioned whether it was even fair to fight something like this. Then, the creature roared. A thick, dark energy began gathering in its chest. A purple glow pulsed from its massive eye. Sakura, immediately recognizing the threat, shouted a warning. Tuya, horrified, realized what was happening. It was about to fire a beam of energy. Panic spread through the group as Rikuto gave the only order that made sense: run. They all scattered, sprinting in every direction. The monster unleashed its attack. A searing purple beam tore through the ground. The sheer force of it obliterated everything in its path, leaving behind a burning chasm where the floor had once been. By sheer luck, 4 of them managed to hide behind a nearby wall. Panting, terrified, they assessed the damage. Rikuto, shaken, grasped the enormity of the monster's power. Tabana, regaining her breath, checked on Nishi. The attack had left him badly injured. Holding his friend, another survivor confirmed the worst. Nishi was in critical condition. Tabana, heart pounding, worried about the others. Rikuto, though equally concerned, knew that they had to focus on surviving first. For now, they needed to get to the underground parking lot. If the others were alive, they could regroup there. Su's interference. Su, still trembling with fear, rejected the idea. His fear turned to anger. He shouted that they'd never make it to the stairs without the monster spotting them. Rikuto, however, remained firm. He agreed getting there undetected was impossible, but he wouldn't abandon his friend. The golem's heavy steps reverberated through the building as it continued its relentless pursuit. With little time left, Rikuto made his decision. He left the hiding spot. Charging forward, he faced the monster head-on. The plan was simple. While he distracted the golem, the others would run toward the stairs. As he ran, his mind raced. The creature responded to heat and aggression. If they wanted a chance to escape, they needed a distraction. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out the emergency flare. If he could throw it at the right moment, the monster would focus on the light instead of his friends. But if the monster saw them before they reached the stairs, it would all be over. A ruined plan, Kotone readied herself. With Rikuto's signal, she prepared to throw the flare. But before she could, Su interfered. Knocking her arm aside, the flare tumbled down the stairs. The entire plan unraveled. A wave of panic hit Tabana. She turned to Su, demanding an explanation. Su, justifying his actions, claimed he had to do it. If Kotone had thrown the flare, the monster might have turned on them instead. Before anyone could process the situation, the golem attacked again. Its colossal fist slammed into the wall. The shockwave blasted outward. Su was sent flying. His scream rang through the store. He crashed against the hard floor, his body racked with pain. The group watched in shock. The plan had failed. And now, they were out of time. As Su lay on the ground, groaning in pain, his friend called out in panic. Still clutching his injuries, he ordered her to stay where she was. His voice, weak yet determined, urged them to escape. They needed to focus on getting Nishi out safely. Turning to Kotone's boyfriend, he warned that he better take care of her. Shinju, scowling, muttered bitterly. Cynically, he shrugged it off and suggested that they leave while they still could. If they hesitated, it would be too late for Rikuto. Kotone's expression hardened. Without hesitation, she struck him. Her fist connected with his face, sending him crashing to the ground. Everyone stood shocked. Ignoring them, she rushed toward Rikuto. The golem loomed ahead, its massive core glowing brighter. It was charging its power. Panting, Rikuto stared down what seemed to be his end. His body ached. His mind replayed his past. He had given everything he had since that fateful day. Yet, in the end, he still couldn't do enough. His brother's words echoed in his mind. Perhaps his brother had been right all along. But before he could resign himself to fate, Kotone appeared. With remarkable agility, she grabbed him and pulled him out of the path of the blast. The next second, the golem's energy beam seared through the air, missing him by inches. They hit the ground hard, their bodies tangled in the chaotic escape. Still dazed, Rikuto tried to understand what had just happened. She had just risked everything for him. Turning to her, he scolded her actions. That had been irresponsible. Instead of listening, she grabbed him by the collar. Fury burned in her eyes. How could he just give up like that? She continued, insisting that this wasn't like him. The accusation stung. He asked how she could possibly know that. Then a flash of memory. The past flooded back. He had saved her once before. As a child, he had stood against a group of bullies who had tormented her. No matter what, he had kept fighting. Even when he had no strength left, he had stood his ground. That was the person he had been. That was the person he needed to be again. Steadying himself, Rikuto stood. Gripping his steel pipe, he faced the monster once more. Because in the end, they were still alive. The counterattack began suddenly and arrows struck the golem. It recoiled, looking back. There, standing together, was the reunited group. Among them Nishi, injured but standing. Seeing him, Kurogane and Tabana felt a rush of relief. Nishi, smiling weakly, admitted that he had been worried about the others after they left him downstairs. Takashi, arriving just in time, apologized for the delay. Now, they were all together, and they were ready for a fight. Rikuto and Tabana took point, standing in front of the colossal monster. The steel pipe clashed against its stone skin. The first hit landed, but it wasn't enough. Nishi, joined by another fighter, watched from a distance. One of the students, gripping his sword, hesitated. Should they retreat? Before he could decide, a loud noise echoed through the building. Something was knocking at the door. It took only a second to realize the smaller golems were coming. They were swarming from the lower floors. The pounding intensified, shaking the entire store. Sakura stiffened in fear. This was becoming desperate. Nishi, voice urgent, turned to Rikuto. If this continued, they were finished. Quickly, Rikuto gave the only order that made sense. Nishi had to keep shooting. If he kept hitting the same target, he would eventually break through. The archer didn't hesitate. Pulling back his bowstring, he called the monster an idiot. It wasn't going to last much longer. Rikuto gritted his teeth. He had to win, because he was still alive. The students watched in fear. Then a single word caught Sakura's attention. Alive. She turned to Kurogane and Nishi, her voice trembling. She had an idea. It was risky. But if they gave her enough time, she could defeat the monster. The group hesitated, but Rikuto's response was immediate. He believed in her, and because of that, he would buy her time. Tears welled in Sakura's eyes. Hearing those words, he trusted her, gave her strength. Rikuto called Nishi closer. The boy obeyed without question. A blonde-haired student, still skeptical, questioned if Sakura could truly do what she was thinking. She confirmed that she could, because Rikuto believed in her, and because of that, she couldn't fail. Yamala stepped in, rallying the others. He instructed Aizu to assist the girls while he helped the boys. The monster prepared its next attack. Sakura crouched down, her hands shaking as she began preparing a chemical mixture. Kotone, standing beside her, noticed her trembling. Concerned, she asked if she was okay. Without looking up, Sakura told her to stay quiet. The monster moved. It launched another devastating attack at Kurogane. He dodged just in time. Nishi urged Kuju to hurry. She insisted she was almost done. While she worked, she explained the science behind her experiment. But doubt crept into her mind. Could she really pull this off? Then she remembered Rikuto's words. He trusted her. That was enough. She added the final ingredient. The potion was ready. A surge of relief washed over her. The plan could work. However, one final problem remained. The next step was to throw the potion at the monster's head. Tabana, watching the massive creature towering over them, froze. How were they supposed to hit its head? The realization hit Kuju like a wave of dread. Even with the potion ready, how would they make the shot? As the realization hit, the young girl called herself an idiot. She had been so focused on the potion itself that she hadn't considered how they would actually deliver it. But before despair could settle in, Aizu grabbed the vial. Without hesitation, he took off running. With the container in hand, he confidently declared that throwing it wouldn't be a problem. After all, he was on the baseball team. He would hit the target. Sakura, still tense, warned him to be careful. The chemical mixture was highly volatile. Every second counted. The massive opponent loomed closer. Nishi, trying to keep up his attacks, grew frustrated. The monster wasn't slowing down. Then an explosion erupted. The force of it rocked the battlefield, sending shockwaves through the air. One of the sword-wielding boys froze in place. Had they reached the end of the road? Then Aizu burst onto the scene, carrying the deadly mixture. He apologized for the delay but grinned confidently. It was a special delivery straight from Kuju. In one swift, practiced motion, he launched the vial toward the monster's head. Kotone, watching with concern, asked what exactly her friend had added to the formula. Kuju, still focused on the explosion, explained that it had been a combination of basic chemical reactions. Then, hesitantly, she admitted she had added maggot, sulfuric acid, and glycerin. The result, mag-glycerin. Before she could finish explaining, the reaction detonated. A violent explosion tore through the battlefield. Everyone was flung back by the blast. Aizu, eyes wide, stared in amazement. Smoke billowed upward, covering the monster's massive frame. The entire group watched. Tense. Had it worked? Through the lingering smoke, the monster still stood. Aizu, frustrated, turned to Kuju. What kind of explosion was that? She explained in rapid speech, detailing how the mixture worked. The explosion had been created with nitroglycerin, which had properties similar to dynamite. Everyone stared at her in disbelief, half panicked, half frustrated. No one had known she was essentially crafting explosives. She should have mentioned that beforehand. Before the argument could escalate, a shout rang through the air. All eyes turned toward the wreckage. Rikuto, analyzing the destruction, concluded that the explosion had completely charred the battlefield. Nishi confirmed that the monster was defeated. Still, he warned that Kuju's recklessness could have ended badly. Kuju, sweating nervously, promised to be more careful next time. Aftermath and a sudden betrayal. As the dust settled, Rikuto headed toward the door. His bow-wielding friend followed cautiously, warning him to stay alert. Upon opening the door, Rikuto found all the smaller golems reduced to dust. The banging sounds had ceased. Nishi, observing the phenomenon, speculated. Perhaps the lesser monsters had been tied to their leader. With the boss defeated, they had perished as well. Rikuto agreed, though it still didn't fully make sense. He turned to Sakura, asking if she had secured the necessary phone parts. She confirmed that she had managed to grab the bare minimum. Rikuto, appreciative, thanked her. Because of her, everyone had survived. The words touched her deeply. Before the group could discuss their next steps, an unexpected scene unfolded. Upon re-entering the room, Rikuto's gaze landed on Sue and Kotone. In a shocking display, Sue had attempted to kiss her. A sharp slap echoed through the space. Kotone, eyes burning with fury, glared at him. Sue, caught off guard, tried to explain himself. He insisted he had no choice. But Kotone was beyond reasoning. She didn't care. She demanded that he stay away from her. Nishi, sensing the tension, approached and asked what had happened. Sue, unable to handle the humiliation, stormed out. Walking past his friends, his body trembled with rage. Unable to process what had just happened, he let out a furious scream and ran up the stairs. A reckless decision. Nishi, realizing the danger of moving alone, called out. Sue ignored him. Still running, his mind spiraled. All he could think about was Kotone. She belonged to him. Everything that had happened was Rikuto's fault. That traitor. He deserved to die. In his blind anger, Sue kicked several stacked boxes. As the clutter scattered across the floor, his eyes landed on something hidden beneath them. A coffin. Embedded in its center was a silver blade. A note was attached to the object. It carried a stern warning. Sealed. Do not touch. Sue, still reeling from his emotions, stared at the inscription. Why was this here? His anger momentarily subdued, he examined the scene. The coffin, the blade, the warning. Curiosity got the better of him. In a reckless act, he grasped the sword. He pulled. The moment the blade was removed, a deep, ominous sound resonated through the room. Sue, suddenly overwhelmed by dread, stepped back. A low growl rumbled from inside the coffin. His breath hitched. Then movement. A skeletal hand emerged, reaching toward him. Its eyes glowed with red lightning. Sue stood paralyzed in fear. What had he just unleashed? The warning arrives too late. Nishi, now outside the room, felt uneasy. Something was wrong. Calling out for Sue, he began searching the building. A figure approached. Nishi halted, gripping his bow tightly. Something or someone was coming. The two boys turned toward the figure approaching them. It was the person they had been searching for. They immediately questioned if he had been there the entire time. The archer, frustrated by the situation, scolded him. If he was going to disappear like that, the least he could do was answer when called. After the scolding, the boy simply brushed it off and suggested they return to base now that their mission was complete. Something felt off. Nishi noticed that the boy seemed to be in an unusually good mood. That was strange. The white-haired man accompanying them also felt uneasy. Had he simply imagined things, or had the boy really been following behind them without them noticing the entire time? Regardless, they had no choice but to move forward. Back at the base upon returning, Sura stretched her arms and sighed. She had spent so much time in this place that it already felt like home. Elsewhere, in a quiet corner of the base, someone was seated in front of a computer. A moment of silence, then a sudden outburst of celebration. Kuju had done it. She had successfully accessed the phone. After countless hours of work, integrating the device with the computer, she had finally connected to the network. The entire group gathered around, their excitement palpable. It was incredible. For the first time since the monsters appeared, they had a chance to find information. Rikuto, regaining focus, instructed her to search for updates, any news of emergency broadcasts, surviving groups, or safe zones. Kuju navigated through social media, but there was nothing. Since the day the monsters appeared, the world had gone silent. Then something caught her attention. A single post. Someone in the city of Oshima had asked for help a few days ago. A possible sign of survivors. The room fell silent. Rikuto, after a moment of thought, acknowledged that Oshima was far but not impossible to reach. Kotone, eyes filled with a newfound hope, agreed. After all the dark, violent days they had endured, this was the first true glimmer of hope. A shadow lurks near the group. Su overheard everything. Standing slightly apart, his expression darkened. He felt uneasy. A shadow flickered beside him. The conversation continued, unaware of his growing distress. Nishi made the final decision they would inform the survivors at the school tomorrow. The plan was set. Tomorrow they would head to Oshima. Meanwhile, the school's descent into madness at that very moment, strange noises echoed through the school building. The sounds came from one of the laboratories. They grew louder. Inside, a horrifying scene unfolded. A girl lay on the floor, struggling. Above her, Uyama loomed. The teacher's shadow stretched across the walls, distorted. A knife gleamed in his hand. The girl's voice trembled as she pleaded for him to let her go. Uyama, his tone chillingly calm, told her it didn't matter. No matter what she did, nothing good would come of it. His expression twisted into something unnatural. With a sickening smile, he marveled at the scene. To him, it was a beautiful sight. A paradise. He called it heaven on earth. Flashback: the school's collapse. Days earlier, the screeching of monstrous birds filled the air. The creatures descended upon the rooftop, feasting on the corpses left behind. Inside, a new kind of chaos erupted. The students, exhausted and starving, grew restless. The question they had been whispering among themselves finally erupted into outright confrontation. Where was Uyama? Two boys, angry and desperate, approached him directly. The situation boiled over. They accused him of starving them. The other students, watching tensely, wondered what they should do. One of the boys, voice rising in frustration, shouted at the teacher. He had asked for food. Uyama's response was calm. There wasn't any. A lie. The students saw through it immediately. He was hiding supplies. The tension snapped. Takeda, gripping a baseball bat, spoke darkly. If things continued like this, there was no telling what might happen. Uyama, unwilling to entertain further discussion, told the boys to forget about it. His voice hardened. He wouldn't allow them to act out. He was the teacher, and his decisions were absolute. They had no choice but to obey. But the students had had enough. One of them punched him. The force of the blow knocked Uyama to the ground. The argument grew more heated. The demands for food grew louder. For the first time, the teacher fell silent. The boy who had hit him continued ranting, but then a sickening sound, a wet, sharp stab. The student froze. Then he screamed. A knife protruded from his abdomen. Blood dripped onto the floor. His body trembled. The students stared in horror. Rikuto, watching from across the room, felt his breath leave him. His voice, desperate, shouted out. Uyama pulled the knife free. The boy collapsed. Taita, trembling in fear, stumbled backward, but Uyama wasn't finished. Expression unreadable, he moved toward the blonde student. Step by slow step. His voice, eerily calm, stated that bad people like them needed proper discipline. Education required control. With no hesitation, he raised the knife again. A second blood-curdling scream filled the school. Present Uyama's madness continues. Uyama, expression still eerily calm, carried the lifeless girl over his shoulder. He walked through a dimly lit hallway. Inside a darkened room, students huddled together in fear. Some were still alive, others not. Arriving at the center of the room, Uyama mockingly announced his return. His voice echoed off the walls. The remaining students cowered in the corner. He sneered at their fear. Then, without hesitation, he tossed the girl to the floor. She landed harshly, unmoving. Still holding the blood-stained knife, he observed her. His voice, almost reverent, muttered his final judgment. She was exceptionally beautiful. Uyama's cold gaze locked onto Kasahara. With an air of unsettling amusement, he declared that she would be next. Terror-stricken, Kasahara panicked. Desperate to save herself, she threw her friend under the bus. Instead of taking her, she offered up RR's eyes widened in shock. Betrayal seared through her. Kasahara's expression remained hardened. She justified herself. R was just another orphan. Uyama, momentarily irritated, lifted his knife and stabbed it into the ground, the sharp sound reverberating through the tense air. Both girls flinched. The teacher's voice softened almost mockingly. He praised them. They were good girls for listening to him. A boy, Hayashi, stepped forward hesitantly. His entire body trembled. His hands shook at his sides. Uyama's dark eyes shifted toward him. What was he doing? The boy stammered, insisting it was nothing. Uyama didn't believe him. His voice dropped, dangerous. Don't try anything. He gestured toward the corpses on the floor. That would be his fate if he disobeyed. Hayashi quickly shook his head. He had never even thought about resisting. Uyama smiled. A good, obedient child. Without hesitation, the teacher seized Kasahara by the arm. Then, grabbing Kasamoto as well, he yanked them both forward. The girls screamed, begging, pleading. Someone, anyone save them. Kasamoto, voice raw, questioned the world. How had everything turned into this nightmare? Uyama ignored them. Dragging Kasahara down the corridor, her curses rang through the empty halls. Furious, she screamed at him. The sharp sound of a slap echoed. Her head snapped to the side. Call me sensei, he ordered. Fisting a hand in her hair, he forced her forward. Mocking her earlier despair, he laughed cruelly. This wasn't hell, he told her. This was paradise. The girl, blood dripping from her lip, choked out a defiant reply. To her, this world was garbage. It might as well end. Dragged like a lifeless doll, her mind raced. Why had she never realized this sooner? Then Uyama stopped. Something outside the window caught his attention. His grip on her hair loosened. His breathing quickened. Below, his car had just pulled into the parking lot. His expression darkened. He knew exactly what that meant. Rikuto's group had returned. The survivors return outside the school gates, the group called out. They had made it back. The school's remaining survivors were safe. Nishi, looking up at the darkened windows, felt something wasn't right. One of the young girls spotted Kurogane from the distance. Tears of relief filled her eyes. They were going to survive. They were going to escape. Uyama's growing desperation from the shadows of the school, Uyama's face turned pale. This was impossible. The group should not have survived. For a moment, he didn't know what to do. Then he steadied himself. It didn't matter. He would eliminate them. Rikuto didn't belong in the kingdom he was building. A silent school, the group stood outside, knocking. No one answered. Nishi frowned. Something was wrong. They started banging on the doors. Up above, Uyama watched from the window. His mind raced. He had to act fast. If they discovered the truth, if they learned what he had done, it would be the end of him. A calculated plan, he returned to the room filled with survivors. Their faces were twisted with fear. Someone, voice barely above a whisper, called for Kurogane. Uyama ignored them. Instead, he calculated. The group didn't know anything yet. Only two of them were real problems, Nishi and Kurogane. If he took care of them first, then the rest would be easy. Kuju and Tabana? They could be brought under his control. A malicious smirk crossed his lips. He turned to the frightened girls. His tone grew cold. If they valued their lives, they would stay quiet. Breaking the silence outside, Nishi stood still. Everything was too quiet. Something was happening inside. He turned to Rikuto. What should they do? The answer came instantly. They had to break in. A risky plan, the idea was insane. They would ram the car into the barrier, forcing their way inside. Nishi, stunned, called it reckless. Before they could act, the doors opened. Uyama stood there, smiling, welcoming them. The students, relieved, greeted him joyfully. They were glad he was alive, but something was off. His friendliness felt unnatural. Feigning interest, Uyama asked about the outside world. Unaware of the danger before them, Nishi shared everything. They had found survivors. They had recovered Sei's phone. Then Aizu stepped forward. It had been a long time since he last saw the teacher. Uyama stiffened. His mind raced. Aizu would be another problem. There were now 3 obstacles. Nishi, Kurogane, Aizu. He had to act carefully. The trap is set, forcing a smile. Uyama expressed his happiness at seeing Aizu alive. His true thoughts were darker. He needed to eliminate Kurogane and Nishi first. Then, he could control the others. With practiced ease, he spoke. He needed to speak with them privately. Would they follow him? Nishi, instantly wary, hesitated. Something was wrong. Instead of agreeing, he suggested the entire group go. Uyama's smile twitched. That wouldn't work. Quickly, he adjusted his approach. It was fine, he assured them, but he really needed to speak to just the two of them first. Nishi exchanged glances with Rikuto. A moment of hesitation. Then, Nishi nodded. Calling Rikuto forward, they agreed to follow him. As they walked, Uyama apologized to the others. They would be back soon. Rikuto and Nishi stepped into the unknown. As the group began bringing supplies into the school, Kotone suddenly paused. A thought struck her. Sue was missing. She asked if he might have entered the building without them. The realization hung heavy in the air. A trap unfolds meanwhile. Inside the school, Uyama led Rikuto and Nishi deeper into the halls. Nishi, growing increasingly uneasy, questioned why they were going so far. Feigning ignorance, Uyama responded casually. It was just around the corner, he assured them. Internally, however, he knew that if he could take Nishi's bow, victory would be his. They continued walking until they reached a classroom. Something felt off. Nishi, sensing the odd atmosphere, asked the teacher to start the conversation. Uyama, standing near a fire extinguisher, seemed preoccupied. Before the boys could process what was happening, he suddenly sprayed them in the face. Thick white foam blinded them instantly. Their shouts of pain filled the air. Uyama laughed. With their vision impaired, he took his chance. He lunged at them with a knife. A desperate fight, Rikuto, reacting on instinct, blocked the attack with his bat. The fight turned into a violent hand-to-hand struggle. The two clashed, exchanging blows. Rikuto, voice calm yet firm, declared that his suspicions had been correct all along. Uyama, taken aback, demanded to know how Rikuto had figured it out. Still defending himself, Rikuto explained. He had noticed blood on Uyama's shirt. The last time they had spoken, it hadn't been there. Whatever had happened in their absence, the teacher had crossed a line. Hearing this, Uyama stuttered. For the first time, true fear flickered across his face. Rikuto, now gripping Uyama's collar, warned that one day he would be judged for everything he had done. Angered by the words, Uyama retaliated. He threw a punch. Rikuto dodged it effortlessly and sent the teacher flying across the room. A dark ritual unfolds. Meanwhile, on the rooftop, monstrous birds continued feasting on the remains of the dead. Below, Sue entered the location. His eyes scanned the carnage. The scene of corpses being devoured didn't disturb him. Instead, he smiled. This was exactly what he needed. Without hesitation, he gave the command. The final stage of his plan was about to begin. The rescue mission elsewhere in the school, Tabana and Sakura discovered a room full of bound students. Rushing forward, they began untying them. The girls, once trapped in horror, now felt the first taste of freedom. Relief washed over them. Kotone, scanning the room, hesitated. She asked if these were the only survivors. Kuju's expression darkened. Seeing the trauma on their faces, she felt her heart sink. Though they were freed, the students whispered of the nightmare they had endured. Tabana, overcome with emotion, began to cry. Her voice shook as she lamented the cruelty of it all. She looked at the lifeless bodies scattered across the room and felt nauseous. It was too much. Confronting a monster outside, Rikuto and Nishi threw the bound teacher to the floor. They demanded answers. How could he do something so heinous? Nishi, his voice filled with rage, declared that Uyama should have helped the students. Instead, he had become the very thing they feared most. But Uyama only laughed. A deep, mocking chuckle. His voice was filled with contempt. Did they really think they would be saved? Did they still believe in hope? Face reality, he taunted. The world wasn't the same anymore. Hope was a lie. Sooner or later, they would all die devoured by monsters. His laughter grew twisted. That was why he did what he did. Before the end, he simply wanted to have fun. Since there were no consequences, why not? With a sickening grin, he suggested that the boys do the same. He even offered an idea to take Kotone and Kuju for themselves. A line as crossed. The girls, horrified, felt their stomachs churn. Nishi, eyes blazing with fury, lost control. His fist connected with the teacher's face. A sharp crack echoed as the blow sent Uyama sprawling. As he prepared to strike again, Rikuto stepped forward. His voice, calm yet firm, cut through the room. Don't waste your energy. Nishi, still breathing heavily, hesitated. Rikuto's words rang true. Uyama wasn't worth their time. What mattered was moving forward. He made one final decision. They wouldn't be taking Uyama with them. The final plea, a quiet voice spoke from the group. One of the rescued girls, trembling, asked what they meant by that. Nishi, realizing he had forgotten to mention something, explained. They had found another survivor signal. Thanks to the phone they recovered, they now had a chance. The remaining students felt a spark of hope, their ray of light. Uyama's entire body tensed. His eyes darted wildly. This couldn't be happening. Panic gripped his chest. If they escaped, if they left him behind, he was finished. His entire body shook. Desperation crept into his voice. He begged, he pleaded. He swore he regretted everything, no redemption. Kotone, voice icy, called him bold for believing he deserved to be saved. Rikuto, unmoved, declared they had more pressing matters. For now, they would leave the teacher's fate undecided. Nishi nodded in agreement. Before anything more could be said, a sudden blue light burst outside the building. Everyone turned sharply. A new threat had arrived. The boys stared in shock. They didn't understand what was happening. Outside the window, beams of brilliant blue light erupted across the landscape. Dozens of birds filled the sky, their silhouettes cutting through the glowing beams. On the ground, monsters emerged from the light's creatures, with the faces of lizards, goats, and other beasts. Nishi's voice wavered. What were they? Were the monsters appearing from the beams? Rikuto, eyes dark with realization, confirmed it was the same phenomenon as before. But how? Sakura, her mind racing, struggled to comprehend. There shouldn't be another summoning. No one else had a cell phone. Panic and attack, Rikuto pushed aside the questions. They didn't have time to figure it out. They needed to move. Get ready, he ordered. Nishi's fear escalated as he noticed the growing number of monsters. Kotone, gripping her weapon, asked what she should do. Then, the birds swooped down. Shattering the school's windows, they poured inside. The survivors screamed. Chaos erupted. Desperation set in as they tried to fight back. They had to get the others out. Aizu, voice frantic, was urged to move fast. Rikuto gritted his teeth. He wasn't going to die here. Swinging his bat with all his strength, he struck a monstrous bird, sending it crashing into the ground. The battle spreads. Outside, more monsters swarmed the school's entrance. Inside, Takushi and the others fought fiercely, clearing a path. A man, panting, demanded to know where the others were. Alone and separated from his group, he could only apologize. Before he could finish his words, a goblin lunged at him from the window. But Nishi was quicker. His arrow flew, piercing the creature midair. Focus on surviving, he commanded. The monster's selective attack. A monstrous beast lunged at the girls. It charged straight past Tabana, ignoring her completely. Instead, it went straight for Sakura. She froze. Terror gripped her. Just as it lunged, Rikuto intervened. With a powerful strike, he knocked the beast away. He turned to Sakura, searching her face. Was she okay? She nodded shakily. But the moment lingered. From the top of the staircase, another girl watched. Why had the monster ignored Tabana? A new escape plan, Nishi, gripping his bow, turned to Rikuto. The ground floor was overrun. They were trapped. Looking down, he saw creatures climbing. At this rate, they wouldn't make it. If they couldn't go down, they had to go up. Rikuto shouted for everyone to run to the rooftop. Nishi, exasperated, muttered that they were right back where they started. As they raced up the stairs, Kurogane warned them not to split up. They would survive together. A false awakening. Elsewhere, Hashi ran. A giant spider pursued him. Terror flooded his senses. He didn't want to die. This couldn't be the end. Then a screen appeared before him. A message. His role was a hero. Would he accept the adventure? 2 options, yes or no. A voice whispered in his mind. He couldn't understand a hero. Another message flashed. An evil slaying sword was being generated. As the spider lunged, he grabbed the sword. A single swing. The blade cut through the beast, slicing it clean in half. The girls arrived, their expressions shifting to awe. Sakura, ecstatic, cheered behind him. The others showered him with praise. His face burned with embarrassment. Still, he smiled. He could protect them now, or so he thought. In reality, it was all an illusion. Hashi's lifeless body hung in the air. The spider's fangs sank deep into his flesh. Blood dripped to the floor as his delusions played in his mind. The words he spoke with pride, he repeated them even as he was devoured. A world without morality. On another floor, a girl was seized by a monster. She screamed for help. Her friend watched. Then, coldly, she turned away. They weren't friends, she said. She wished for her to die. A second creature appeared. Its claws ripped through her before she could react. The girl who had just condemned her stood frozen. Her mind reeled. What kind of world was this? Justice comes for Uyama inside the bathroom, Uyama muttered desperately. He had to survive. He had to live. To build his paradise. Bound, yet somehow still alive, he gasped for air. Then the stall door creaked open. A shadow loomed over him. A familiar voice. A Nono had found him. Uyama's eyes widened in horror. Even tied up, he had managed to crawl here, and yet it wasn't enough. A mocking smile spread across Anano's face. She compared him to a cockroach. No matter how hard he tried, he just wouldn't die. Then she asked, did he have a dream? Uyama, confused, didn't answer. She continued. Her dream had been simple. To find a true friend. To get married. To build a happy family. Her voice lowered. She had wanted to include him in that dream, but he had taken everything away. He had corrupted her world. The blade gleamed in her hands. Uyama's panic erupted. He pleaded for his life. He begged for forgiveness. He swore he would take responsibility. The blade slashed through his chest. Blood spattered the floor. Anano smiled. Yes, he would take responsibility, not just for her, for everyone. As ghostly figures surrounded him, their faces twisted in rage, Uyama collapsed. His desperate cries filled the air. And then another strike. Blood pooled. Tears ran down Anano's cheeks. And Uyama, at last, was no more. Anano stood over Uyama's lifeless body, her expression unreadable. She whispered that with this, he had paid the price, at least a little. But in the end, nothing mattered anymore. Her shoulders relaxed, the weight of vengeance pressing down on her. Yet, in her numb exhaustion, she didn't notice the monster lurking behind her. The rooftop escape, meanwhile, Rikuto spotted the rooftop door. Urgency gripped his voice as he alerted the others. They raced toward it. Nishi, panting, asked the question on everyone's mind. What would they do once they got up there? Rikuto, without hesitation, replied. They would figure it out when they got there. Pushing the door open, they were met with an unexpected sight. Sue was already there. A familiar face, a sinister truth. He stood calmly, waiting, as if he had been expecting them. Relief flooded the group. Seeing him safe, the archer called out first. Was he okay? Sue smiled. He said that all the actors had finally gathered, that he had been waiting for Kurogane. Rikuto, still catching his breath, thanked everyone for reaching the rooftop. Nishi, confused, furrowed his brows. Escort Kotone? What was he talking about? Had he hit his head? But Sue's smile only widened. Something was wrong. His voice dripped with amusement. They had been so cold. Then, stepping forward, a monster loomed behind him. His tone darkened. He was on their side. Betrayal on the rooftop. Sakura let out a scream. She pointed, horrified. Rikuto's eyes locked onto the creature. It was a lich, a terrifying undead sorcerer. Nishi, wide-eyed, gripped his bow. Why was it with Sue? Before anyone could process it, Sue calmly explained. The monster was his ally. In exchange for using his body, the lich had granted him power. A world with no rules. He laughed. This world had flaws. A summoning system existed. That wasn't all. Lifting his hands, the sky above them cracked. A massive stream of binary code descended. More monsters emerged from the sky, swarming the rooftop. They surrounded the group, cutting off escape. Panic spread like wildfire. Kurogane's breath hitched. This was just like before. The same unnatural event. The birth of a monster. Sue, his eyes glowing with something inhuman, asked if they could see his power. He had obtained the technique to control monsters. At first, only small ones. But soon he would command the strongest of them all. As long as he existed, they had nothing to fear. He turned to Kotone. She flinched. His voice was unnervingly gentle. She had worried about him, hadn't she? But now, everything was fine. She didn't need Kurogane anymore. He would protect her himself. Kotone's body trembled. She was even more terrified. Extending his arms, his voice dripped with devotion. He wanted her to live with him, in this new world. She refused. Sue's expression flickered. He had not expected that. Tabana's voice broke through the tension. She hesitated, unable to believe it. Was this truly his power? Had he been the one who summoned the monsters attacking them? His answer was simple. Yes, his own classmates. Their lives had meant nothing to him. He shrugged. He didn't need them anymore. Just her. The final collapse. Kotone's breath hitched. She struggled with her words. But finally, she spoke the truth. He wasn't human anymore. Her voice cracked. They had faced monsters of all kinds. But he was the worst of them all. The other students stepped forward. They stood behind her. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Sue's laughter abruptly stopped. His hands twitched. His voice faltered. Wrong. She was wrong. He repeated it again and again, voice rising to a frenzied pitch. His body trembled violently. Then, with a deafening scream, his form twisted. A violent vortex of wind erupted. The force threw everyone back. When the storm died down, Sue was gone. In his place, the lich had fully taken over. His body contorted, his head and arms replaced by the skeletal being's own. His voice, now an inhuman shriek, echoed through the rooftop. You should be mine. Then, in a sudden turn, his fury exploded. I don't need you anymore. With that, he commanded the monsters to attack. A desperate stand, Rikuto gripped his steel pipe. Stay back, he ordered Kuju and Tabana. The first attack came. He barely blocked it. The force dented his weapon. Another creature lunged for Kotone. She didn't see it. Sakura screamed. The Oni's claws came down. Rikuto threw himself forward. Steel met flesh. He stopped the attack. But the monster wasn't done. A second strike sent him flying. His back slammed against the wall. Pain exploded through his body. Kotone's voice tore through the chaos. Rikuto! A world fading Nishi, mid-battle, turned. His friend lay motionless, his breath caught in his throat. The girls ran to him. Tabana, kneeling beside him, touched his face. Something was wrong. He wasn't breathing. A strange awakening. A voice, calling his name. Rikuto blinked. He was in his room. Confusion washed over him. Hadn't he just been at school? Another voice, mocking. He turned. Standing in the doorway, Sato. The figure smirked. It's been a long time, Rikuto. A world without him back at the school. Kotone clung to him. She sobbed. Her voice shook with desperation. Please, Rikuto, listen to me. Her arms tightened around him. The other students stood in stunned silence. Nishi, still fighting the monsters, felt his vision blur. He prayed it wasn't real, that this was just another nightmare. But reality didn't stop. A monster lunged for him. Before he could react, Takeshi intervened. Takeshi stepped forward. With a swift motion, he threw a powerful punch using his brass knuckles, knocking the monster away. Still locked in battle, he called out to Rikuto. There was no response. Without turning toward him, Takeshi's voice remained steady. Don't give up. He declared that Rikuto was a leader, that no matter how dire the situation, they had to keep fighting until the end. Because that was the kind of man Kurogan was. A leader worth fighting for. The words hung in the air. Everyone felt the weight of them. Astonishment and emotion rippled through the group. Nishi, still firing arrows at the monsters, murmured in agreement. Takeshi was right. Rikuto had always been like that. No matter how hopeless the odds, he had never surrendered. And if he were to give up now, Nishi knew he wouldn't be able to face him. With this in mind, he pressed on, his arrows finding their targets. Nearby, Todd joined the onslaught, launching attacks against the encroaching monsters. Suu's cold declaration, meanwhile, Suu, now fully under the Lich's control, sneered. He ordered them to accept reality. Kurogan was gone. His heart had stopped beating. His body was lifeless. He turned to Kotone. She should know better than anyone. She had once wanted to be a doctor. His words struck deep, but she refused to listen. Dropping to her knees, she adjusted Rikuto's body. She wasn't giving up. If the impact had stopped his heart, there was still a chance. Without hesitation, she began performing mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. She pushed against his chest. Over and over. She willed him to return. Desperation breeds innovation. Sakura, watching everything unfold, felt powerless. Everyone was doing their part. She had to do something too. But unlike her battle with the golem, she couldn't create dynamite this time. What could she possibly do? Her gaze fell on the bent steel pipe. A thought formed. The Lich, what kind of monster was it? Could she use science against it? She wasn't certain. She had no scientific proof. But at this point she had no choice. Gripping the pipe tightly, she murmured, "There's nothing left but to try." Jealousy turns to wrath. Suu, watching the group fight for Rikuto, clenched his fists. His voice trembled. Why? What was so special about him? He wasn't anything. Why did they care so much? An arrow struck him, cutting through his thoughts. Nishi, bow still raised, answered coldly. Because they liked him. They valued him. Ta, smirking, added that jealousy wasn't a good look. Suu's eyes darkened. The Lich's presence inside him surged. Fine. Then he would send them all to join Rikuto. With a snarl, he commanded the monsters to charge. A mind under siege inside his mind, Rikuto felt pressure against his skull. A foot pressed hard against his head. A mocking voice sneered, "Serves you right." Slowly, Rikuto lifted his gaze. His brother, Sato, loomed over him. The pressure increased. "Don't look at me like that," Sato hissed. "You're already dead." His voice dripped with disgust. "You always were." The ghost of his past memories flooded back. Lessons. Since they were kids, Sato had drilled the same words into him, that his existence meant nothing, that he couldn't do anything. And now, as Sato's fist connected with his face, Rikuto didn't resist. No one wants you. Blow. No one loves you. Another strike. You're trash. Pain. A worthless failure. He should just stay down and die. The words were familiar. He had heard them all before. Rikuto's mind grew heavy. Maybe his brother was right. He had no meaning, no value. Even if he stood up and fought, it wouldn't matter. A hand from reality, just as the darkness swallowed him, a voice called his name. Soft but firm. He blinked. Again his name echoed. And then, a hand grabbed his arm. Tabana. Her tear-filled eyes searched his face. "Don't go back to being alone," she pleaded. "Everyone is waiting for you." Rikuto's breath hitched. Behind her, their friends stood. They were smiling, laughing in casual clothes. Not in blood-stained battle gear. For a moment, it felt like everything was normal. But reality bled through. Tabana's grip tightened. "Come back, Rikuto." Her voice trembled. Her eyes glistened with tears. and for the first time in what felt like forever, Rikuto felt the smallest flicker of warmth.
Rikuto heard faint voices beyond darkness, urging him back. His clenched fists trembled, resisting the overwhelming void. He gasped awake violently, eyes widening. Tachibana caught his collapsing body, concern and relief blending on her face. Coughing painfully, Rikuto collapsed again. His weak breath struggled while Tachibana knelt beside him, shouting his name desperately loud. Rikuto slowly opened his eyes, meeting Tachibana's tearful gaze. Exhausted, he managed a faint, reassuring smile back. Standing with difficulty, Rikuto faced her. "Tachibana. Thanks to you, I'm alive," he whispered, voice barely holding strength. Rikuto stood between shadows and light, realizing Tachibana's voice alone pulled him back from certain death. He gathered his courage, stepped forward, and sincerely thanked her. His words surprised Tachibana, cheeks flushing instantly bright. Flustered, Tachibana stammered a response. Though confused, Rikuto's genuine smile made everything feel undeniably worthwhile to her. Before emotions settled, loud footsteps approached. Kujo rushed forward urgently, eyes sharp, yelling for them to prepare quickly. Without hesitation, Kujo tossed a weapon toward Rikuto, shouting clearly, "There's no time! Use this immediately!" Rikuto caught the weapon midair. Examining it carefully, confusion flickered across his face. "This is my steel pipe," Kujo confidently explained. "These monsters react like fantasy creatures. Simple weapons fail unless associated with magical item tropes." She continued, "This pipe survived previous battles. That alone makes its special monsters recognize symbolic strength behind it." Rikuto stared at the familiar weapon, doubts fading. His grip tightened. "No, it'll work. I'll definitely fight." Without hesitation, Rikuto dashed forward, determination restored. Tachibana and Kujo watched silently, knowing hope now rested with him. Kujo and Tachibana watched anxiously as Rikuto advanced. Kujo smiled confidently, while Tachibana barely whispered, "Be careful." Cheers erupted nearby. Nishi and Yamaoka spotted Rikuto, relief flooding their faces. "I knew he's still alive." They gathered quickly. Confidence returned seeing Rikuto alive. Kurogan-senpai always makes an entrance right when needed most. Monstrous figure appeared suddenly. Its terrifying presence darkened the battlefield. Everyone froze momentarily, shocked by the deadly threat. Rikuto tightened his grip, eyes unwavering. "We'll talk later. Time to survive this. Back me up immediately," he commanded. Rikuto charged ahead without hesitation. Nishi realized instantly this was their moment to support Rikuto's risky advance directly. Grabbing his bow, Nishi aimed steadily. "So that's what you meant, Rikuto. All right, we're backing you completely." Without delay, arrows flew, forcing the enemy back. Rikuto advanced through the chaos, enemies scattering before his charge. He paused briefly, analyzing movement. Timing was critical. His eyes locked onto the enemy leader's vulnerable, exposed position. With precise calculation, Rikuto launched rubble towards the enemy, disrupting their balance. The final confrontation had just begun. A monstrous shadow lunged forward. Rikuto prepared, but someone intercepted the attack before it could reach him. Yamaoka smashed a rock into the creature's face. "I won't let you touch Korgani-senpai's head!" Rikuto turned slightly, eyes filled with gratitude. A simple word escaped his lips. Quietly but sincerely, "Thank you." Without hesitation, Rikuto dashed forward again. His steel pipe struck true, breaking through the advancing monster's defenses. From the shadows, a skeletal monster emerged. Its glowing red eyes locked onto Rikuto. "Kurogain!" It growled. Rikuto spotted the monster's exposed flank. Without hesitation, he charged forward, gripping his steel pipe tightly prepared. The monster reacted too late. Rikuto's strike connected, landing a decisive blow directly against its vulnerable side. "Sorry, man," Rikuto whispered, swinging the pipe upward again, determined to end the monster's rampage immediately. With unstoppable momentum, he struck down fiercely. Blood splattered as the monster's body collapsed, shrieking in agony. Rikuto stood firm amidst chaos, his weapon dripping. The battlefield fell silent, everyone stunned by his victory. Tachibana stood silently, eyes locked on the grotesque corpse. A heavy realization weighed on her chest. A dark, corrupted shadow dispersed. The monstrous vines shriveled away, leaving behind only regret and broken memories. Tachibana trembled, forcing a tearful goodbye. "Satu-kun!" Her heart ached, but she stood her ground, resolute again. She exhaled sharply, whispering, "I'm truly sorry." Her determined steps carried her away from the painful scene. Nearby, others noticed the fading corruption. The monster's Satu was controlling. "They're all disappearing at once." The two boys relaxed at last, exchanging a glance. "Probably," one muttered. "Oh, I get it now." Rikuto collapsed onto the grass, arms spread wide. A long sigh escaped him, relief washing over completely. After endless panic, loss, and fear, he finally understood. The silence and sunlight made everything feel strangely real. The others gathered, smiling and chatting. No words were needed. They all knew what they had survived. Looking up at the bright sky, Rikuto whispered truthfully, "Yeah, it's wonderful to be alive." The day arrived, Backpacks loaded, supplies packed carefully. They stood quietly, knowing it was finally time. They double-checked everything. Water, check. Food, check. Okay, we're all set, someone confirmed, closing the car's trunk. Rikuto took one last look. So, we're finally leaving this place, huh? His voice carried unspoken weight. Silence lingered. Tachibana looked up, eyes distant. It's kind of a lonely feeling, she admitted softly, heart heavy. Memories surfaced, regrets and lost chances. Rikuto's mind echoed, yeah, a lot happened here. Things we couldn't change. Everyone stood quietly, gathering final thoughts. Nothing more needed to be said. Their decision was already made. Nishi raised his voice, cheerful. Yeah, you said it. Tachibana smiled faintly, wind brushing through her hair. Kuragane Rikuto? Someone called softly. Rikuto simply nodded, smiling gently. I'm gonna do my best, he promised. Then let's go, Rikuto declared. Together, they stepped forward toward the city ahead, toward a future unknown, unafraid. Their vehicle drove off under bright skies. Though uncertain, their hearts held hope strong for tomorrow's possibilities. Rikuto rushed forward as sirens blared and screams echoed, the world collapsing into chaos behind him. Buildings cracked open, streets twisted, and mutated creatures surged. His only option was forward, toward unknown danger. A girl, disfigured and growling, crawled toward him with lifeless eyes and blood trailing behind her. He stepped past her corpse, numb but alert, surrounded by twitching monsters still clinging to last breath. Pinned to a pole, a knife held a warning, don't look them in the eyes. He stood still, scanning the quiet road, sensing a shift in the air. Something was coming. The sky burned orange as a massive figure approached, stronger than anything he had faced before. Their convoy moved steadily toward Awashima, engines humming, unaware of the looming dangers hidden beyond sight. Two unicorns trotted calmly beside the road, uninterested in the vehicles or the mission they protected. Inside the van, students sat silently. Some watched the passing scenery, others stayed focused on their maps. Rikuto glanced over the large paper, unsure which path they were supposed to take from here. He asked quietly, Are we going the right way? Masaki responded, pointing, It should be this route. The van picked up speed. Road signs blurred past as they followed the path marked for Awashima. Rikuto studied the map again, tracing the route the trucks used, trying to understand their movements. He mumbled about his past, how their family broke apart, memories still heavy in his chest. Others listened quietly. Silence grew, their destination neared, but emotions inside the van remained tense and uncertain. Finally, Masaki pointed to the map, voice steady. That's it, Awashima, we're almost at the edge. Ahead, a grotesque creature writhed on the asphalt, its body twisted unnaturally from a recent struggle. Inside the van, silence grew heavier. One student muttered, It's best not to get hopeful. Rikuto turned toward Masaki, noticing his clenched fists. He wanted to ask, but hesitated and paused. Masaki quietly said, It's all right, I'm sure she's fine. But doubt lingered in his expression. Rikuto stared forward, voice low. How could you know that? Masaki had no answer, only silence. Masaki leaned forward, voice low. You didn't survive this far without reason. Trust your strength, Rikuto. Images of chaos filled Rikuto's mind, knights crouched in ruins, hunted, watching friends fall to monsters. Masaki added, You're alive because you're capable. Don't waste energy doubting what's already been proven. The others watched quietly. Tension softened, but Rikuto still stared at the floor, silent and conflicted inside, and he finally answered, You're the last person I want to hear that from. Not now. Masaki laughed awkwardly. We'll deal with everything after we reach Awashima, right? He said, half joking. Rikuto nodded slowly, replying, Yeah, that's how it is. Everyone else gave silent, tired nods in agreement. Suddenly, the van swerved. The driver yelled, Talk later, you goofs, an enemy's locked onto us. The group turned in panic. Tension exploded inside the van. Someone shouted, eyes wide with fear. Above, a winged beast dived from the sky, sharp eyes fixed on the van like a predator. The dragon plummeted toward the van with terrifying speed, wings slicing through the air like blades. It roared as it neared, claws ready to crush the vehicle. The streets shook with impact. Inside, students screamed, What is that thing? One yelled. Panic spread faster than the creature's shadow. It's a huge dragon! Someone shouted. It's coming after us! Tachibana, can you lose it? Tachibana slammed her foot on the pedal, eyes locked forward. Okay! She shouted, heart racing fast. Tachibana gripped the wheel tightly, forcing herself to stay calm despite the growing screams behind her. The dragon's claws narrowly missed the van, scraping asphalt as it crashed hard onto the road. She swerved sharply, dodging debris. Tires screeched, hearts pounded, the van barely holding against the dragon's pursuit. Rikuto shouted, Faster! As the creature lifted again, preparing to strike, the sky darkened with its shadow. Wings outstretched, the dragon ascended, eyes locked on them. Its next attack would be faster and direct. A student peeked outside in panic. "It's coming closer," he shouted, gripping the seat tightly. The dragon swooped with rage, its shriek echoing over the highway, casting terror across everyone inside. "We're done for!" One student yelled, clutching his friend, eyes wide as the shadow loomed again. Masaki pointed ahead. "Tachibana! Over there! Take the next exit! We might lose it temporarily!" Tachibana nodded, swerving toward the off-ramp, pushing the van harder as the road curved sharply left. Tachibana turned the wheel fast, every muscle focused. Sweat slid down her face as tires screeched. Behind them, the dragon hovered midair, scanning the roads below, tracking their every twist and motion. The van took a sharp turn, disappearing behind barriers. Someone shouted, "All right, we shook it off!" They all held their breath until the dragon's wings flared again, redirecting sharply toward their new route. With a deafening roar, the dragon accelerated downward, tail whipping, eyes fixed on the fleeing van. Masaki leaned forward. "What do we do, Rikuto?" Everyone looked at him, waiting for direction. "There's no way we take it head on. We have to lose it somehow," Rikuto replied firmly. Masaki frowned. "Too right! We can't go down there after coming this far already." The dragon closed in again, its claws ready. Their window of escape was rapidly shrinking. Meanwhile, someone watched from a distance, binoculars in hand, observing the van and monster from a rooftop. Through binoculars, he spotted the van below. A monster trailed it closely. Danger was moments away. "That's..." he muttered, stepping closer to the edge. His expression sharpened as recognition struck him instantly. Wind rushed past as he watched, eyes locked onto the dragon's movements and the van's speed. He exhaled slowly, calm but serious. "Time to act," he whispered, gripping the edge with purpose. Without hesitation, he mounted his motorbike, its engine revving with force. His rescue mission had begun. He launched forward, gripping tight as the motorcycle accelerated, tires burning across the highway toward the danger. The engine roared louder with each second. He leaned forward, racing to intercept the monster ahead. The monster crashed through the ceiling, roaring as its claws reached for the boy's trembling, outstretched hand. Barely dodging the blow, he tumbled into the classroom where his friends shouted and scrambled for cover. Panic filled the room. One girl screamed, "It's coming!" as the beast landed just behind them. He turned swiftly, grabbed a metal pole, and slammed it into the monster's jaw with desperate force. The beast reeled, crashing back through broken glass, blood streaking the floor as silence returned, if briefly. Inside the van, panic spread. The older student clenched his fists, knowing escape was their only option. The driver swerved hard, but too late. The barricade appeared suddenly, and someone screamed, "Mother, look out!" She gasped and spun the wheel, eyes locked on the wall, desperately trying to regain control. The monster dropped down, slamming the hood as the van jerked sideways, skidding toward the barricade's base. Everyone braced for impact, eyes wide and body shaking as the vehicle was rocked by the blow. The creature was thrown off, tumbling across the pavement as the van sped away unharmed for now. Inside, the students sighed in relief, joking briefly, unaware of the strange tension building in the engine. One girl noticed the sound first, an odd clicking beneath them, and looked toward the driver in confusion. The van suddenly slowed on its own, steering shaky. The driver panicked, pressing the pedal repeatedly, no response. A chill ran down his spine as he realized something unknown was interfering with the vehicle's control. Smoke poured from the engine as the creature reappeared, soaring down with piercing cries and violent force. It dived fast toward the stalled vehicle. Eyes locked, wings cutting air like blades over broken ground. Inside the van, they heard the roar. Someone shouted, "It's coming!" as panic seized their chests. Without hesitation, the leader yelled, "Everyone out of the car!" and yanked the door handle open wide. The creature smashed down just as students scattered, its claws denting metal where they had just sat. The dragon towered above them. The students screamed as one tripped and fell, trying to escape. She rolled across the pavement, heart pounding, unable to move as the monster's shadow swallowed her completely. Just before it struck, another student lunged and tackled her away, seconds from the monster's claws. Holding her tightly, he asked if she was hurt. She nodded quickly, tears threatening to fall. He stood to shield her, glaring as the creature roared again and swooped directly toward them both. The dragon struck downward. He barely dodged, pulling the girl behind him and readying himself to fight. Another student rushed forward with a steel rod, shouting the attacker's name and preparing to coordinate timing. They moved fast. One distracted the beast, while the other measured distance, watching for a clean opening. With a shout, he flung the rod toward its eye, yelling for the others to get ready. The monster reared back, shrieking in pain, as the two boys regrouped quickly to press their advantage. Breathing heavily, they regrouped behind cover, unsure what to do next as the dragon circled overhead again. Suddenly, one of them froze, eyes widening. He pointed ahead and shouted, "Wait! What is that?" The group turned, following his gaze, startled by the strange markings that had appeared on the ground. Above them, the dragon twisted midair, wings spreading unnaturally wide as if reacting to a greater force. The beast roared and crashed down near the school entrance, while students scattered to avoid falling debris. The two boys froze as a heavy gust announced the dragon's return. It landed right behind them. Snarling, the beast stepped forward, claws scraping concrete as they slowly backed away, trying not to provoke it. With a sudden flap, the monster surged forward again. One shouted, "It caught up already! Keep moving!" The group scattered, hearts racing, as the dragon roared fiercely and charged through the courtyard toward them all. One student raised a sledgehammer, teeth clenched, while another stood beside him ready to fight if needed. The sledgehammer flew through the air, striking the dragon's wing and sending shattered scales into the sky. The dragon recoiled, rising upward with a screech as smoke trailed from its wounded, twitching left wing. A blinding light erupted from its body mid-flight, stunning the students and halting them in place. Everyone shielded their eyes as the beast shrieked, and the blast forced them backward across the courtyard. From the smoke, the creature growled low, its eyes glowing brighter wounded, but more enraged than ever. The dragons flapped away all at once, retreating into the sky as the students watched in confusion. One boy stepped forward, narrowing his eyes, sensing something strange in the sudden silence that followed. More students gathered behind him, staring upward. The glowing light had vanished without explanation or warning. A motorcycle screeched to a halt nearby, its rider hopping off and glancing around with practiced awareness. The group froze, whispering to each other. None recognized the newcomer, who now faced them calmly and silently. The stranger studied his scanner, noting nearby interference, then calmly ordered the group to follow him quickly. He led them into an alleyway, confident and focused, while blue signals pulsed faintly across nearby walls. A girl hesitated, asking who he was, uncertain whether to trust someone appearing out of nowhere. Impatient, he snapped at her to hurry, warning they'd die if they kept standing around doubting him. Rikuto stayed calm, reminding the others their choices were gone and trusting the stranger might be their only chance. The rider looked back once, expression unreadable, then revved the engine and prepared to lead them onward. With he command, the entire group followed at full speed, leaving the chaos behind for now. A student sprinted across the walkway, yelling for Rikuto, as panic echoed from behind the gate. A dragon swooped down, jaws wide, nearly catching one girl before she dove through the open fence. She screamed, ducking under the metal bars as the creature's snout smashed violently into the ground nearby. The group pulled her to safety, shaken but alive, as another student muttered in disbelief at the danger. Watching silently, the rider adjusted his gloves and said coldly, "This was only the beginning." They arrived at a sheltered corridor, catching their breath as the rider parked and stepped off calmly. One student mumbled about luck, surprised they'd made it. The rider sat back down with a smirk. Another student replied defensively, saying they had no choice, there was no need for sarcasm right now. Rikuto stepped forward, politely thanking him despite everything, recognizing they might not have survived without his help. The rider turned his head slightly, grunted in reply, and remained silent, eyes focused somewhere ahead. The group hesitated at the steps as the rider moved ahead, telling them to follow or not. Rikuto stepped forward decisively, voice steady, and signaled the others, "Let's go." Trusting instinct over hesitation, they descended together, quiet and focused, the motorcycle engine humming faintly beside them like a ticking clock. The rider explained the route ahead, warning that monsters still lurked beyond the cleared perimeter zone. Rikuto asked carefully, "All of it?" Unsure if the rider was being honest or hiding something again. One of the students asked about shelter. The rider confirmed there was a large group ahead. He explained larger groups were safer now, more eyes, more strength, and fewer chances to be caught alone. As the team followed closely, a few quietly reassured each other that they'd finally found safety. One girl smiled softly, saying things might finally improve, and thanked everyone for helping her through the fear. But Rikuto stared ahead, tense. Sensing something off, he couldn't shake the feeling danger still lingered nearby. As they moved cautiously, one boy reassured the group they were close just beyond the next path. They spotted distant light in the darkness, and someone whispered hopefully, "If there's light, people must be there." A loud voice echoed ahead, followed by movement. Soon they reached a small, guarded shelter around a fire. One girl gasped with joy, realizing they'd reached a functioning underground refuge, filled with survivors and warmth. Rikuto entered last, glancing around at the quiet, tired faces, relieved, but not ready to relax yet. One boy paused as a strange tension settled in. Something about the shelter suddenly felt off. They noticed a silent figure under a hood, still, unapproachable, and seemingly disconnected from the other survivors. The rider narrowed his eyes at the figure, muttering to himself, "What's with that hooded guy?" A loud voice suddenly called out from the shadows, shocking everyone. Someone recognized and shouted at the rider. A hostile group emerged from the dark, one man glaring at him, fists clenched, voice filled with rage. The hostile man stepped in close, shoving the rider with a smirk and venom in his voice. He shouted furiously, accusing the rider of breaking rules and acting like nothing had ever happened between them. He grabbed the rider's collar. He reminded him who controlled the shelter and the punishments for disobedience. He tightened his grip, mocking the rider's silence, demanding to know if he wanted to be punished. Raising a pipe, he roared with anger, daring the rider to speak or suffer the consequences in silence. The attacker raised his arm, ready to strike, until a sudden hand caught it mid-swing with force. Rikuto stepped forward, calm but firm, his voice sharp as he commanded, "Stop! That's enough already!" The thug hesitated, confused by Rikuto's intervention, his grip loosening as uncertainty crept into his expression. Suddenly, a presence behind him grew darker. Heavier, his body shivered as something unseen clutched his shoulder. Everyone in the room froze, eyes widening as a new, shadowed figure silently stepped into the light. Tension mounted as survivors gathered around the confrontation, whispering nervously while watching the scene unfold in silence. One student commented coldly, noting the thug's arrogance. It was clear he'd ruled here far too long. Sneering, the thug mocked the new arrivals, calling them rule breakers who thought they were above his authority. He raised his weapon, shouting for his group to attack, ready to teach a brutal lesson publicly. Suddenly, a commanding voice rang out from above, "Desist at once!" freezing the crowd in stunned silence. A red-haired man stepped forward with authority, silencing everyone as he questioned their understanding of the rules. The thug froze, startled by his presence, quickly blaming the newcomers and trying to justify his actions. With a calm but chilling glare, the man dismissed the excuse, clearly unimpressed by the thug's panic. Another man nervously stepped in, apologizing on the thug's behalf and claiming he was just overexcited. Rikuto narrowed his eyes, catching the word hunt, confused and concerned about what that actually meant here. The red-haired man asked if they were heading to Anashima City, confirming his suspicions with a nod. He smiled politely, offering assistance for the journey ahead, presenting it as a mutually beneficial partnership. Turning toward the others, he extended an open invitation to join their underground community and travel together. He addressed the growing crowd, declaring Anashima City was everyone's last hope, and they must unite now! Rikuto and his companion exchanged glances, still unsure if they should trust the offer or question it further. The students arrived at the meeting room, unaware of the strict authority waiting behind those doors. A digital voice welcomed them coldly, signaling the beginning of something far beyond a routine assembly. The host stepped forward confidently, declaring leadership over the group as others watched him with uncertainty. Introducing himself as Hizaki, he radiated forced enthusiasm, clearly hiding the seriousness of what was ahead. One student hesitantly questioned their situation, sensing this was not just a school orientation, it was survival. Hizaki calmly revealed the event's origins, speaking as if the tragedy were nothing more than history. He described the day humanity fell. Monsters appeared everywhere, and chaos swallowed cities without warning or mercy. As buildings burned, terrifying beasts emerged from glowing screens, instantly overwhelming every human in their sight. With no warning or preparation, society crumbled. Soldiers fought back, but were crushed without inflicting real damage. In mere hours, every system failed. Civilization vanished beneath wings, fangs, and the monster's unstoppable force. Giant winged beasts tore through cities, destroying buildings with ease under a sky turned red by disaster. In every region, monstrous creatures attacked, leaving trails of destruction across continents without slowing for resistance. During the chaos, bizarre portals opened, summoning even greater horrors that military forces failed to contain. Back in the present, Hizaki's words disturbed the students, each trying to process the terrifying truth. One student quietly thought the timing was strange. Why were they gathered now, instead of being warned earlier? The student recalled strange memories, monsters obeying him, something unnatural that others seemed unaware of entirely. He had gained a unique ability and interface allowing monster control, something called the Myth Summon System. This system, unlike anything else, wasn't a gift. The monsters he faced had recognized it immediately. He realized there was purpose behind the chaos, like someone had engineered everything from the beginning. As he glanced at Hizaki, a question chilled his mind: was this man part of it? The group listened closely as Hizaki explained their situation. Others had also survived the great global collapse. Many survivors gathered, trading knowledge and resources, slowly reconnecting in hopes of resisting the monster invasion together. Some cities endured the calamity. Anashima City stood among the few strongholds left on the map. Hope returned to their faces. Reaching Anashima might offer protection, stability, and answers to their questions. But reaching it wasn't easy. Hizaki warned the path overland was blocked. Monsters controlled every known route. The student recalled the flying beasts he'd encountered, monsters with wings, sharp eyes, and deadly coordination. Hizaki confirmed it. The wyverns ruled the skies, making any approach to Anashima nearly impossible. That entire region was a dragon's territory, and the airspace swarmed with hostile flying creatures constantly patrolling. Attempting resistance meant certain death. Their formations were too strong, and their ambushes always came from above. Even the underground wasn't safe. A massive worm-like beast lurked below, claiming the lives of new recruits. The underground facility provided safety. Unlike the surface, it remained untouched by flying or burrowing monsters. Still, the students grew uneasy. With every exit sealed, they worried there might be no escape. Tension rose. Hizaki calmly reassured everyone, revealing that they already had a specific plan in motion. Surprised, the group leaned forward. Was there truly a way out of this impossible situation? Hizaki explained they had been gathering data, tracking monster routes, and preparing escape logistics from the beginning. Hizaki stepped forward with confidence, assigning roles while keeping pressure subtle yet undeniably heavy on them. Rikuto's friend turned to him, uncertain. The group instinctively looked to Rakuto for direction and reassurance. Rakuto spoke honestly. They had no alternatives. Survival required working together, whether they liked it or not. The group agreed with him. They understood that splitting apart now would only make them more vulnerable. Hizaki smiled, pleased. He declared their mission: hunting. Their survival depended on eliminating threats beyond the barrier. Hizaki turned to his associate, hinting they lacked manpower and needed new recruits for immediate deployment. The subordinate nodded, suggesting the students should be assigned to the hunting team without delay or discussion. Rakuto stayed silent, realizing the task was unfair but knew someone had to carry the responsibility. Without much room to refuse, the boys were assigned to the hunting group, visibly shocked by it. Then came the next concern. How would they assign roles to the girls? Avoiding frontline danger, Hizaki clapped his hands, announcing they'd assign the girls a less dangerous role than combat. Cooking was already covered. Another task was needed, something physically demanding but considered secondary to direct battle. One leader suggested digging. Though laborious, it was away from monsters and wouldn't put lives at risk. The girls were assigned to the digging team, tasked with expanding shelter and gathering buried supplies. Quietly, they complained. Cooking seemed preferable, but they understood refusing orders would only cause more trouble. The older boy approached calmly, prompting the new recruits to introduce themselves before taking further action. He gave his name Fuyus Ginkgo, a seasoned hunter who spoke bluntly without showing much expression. He asked what their orders were, but quickly answered himself they would be going out hunting. Due to their delay, the previous team had failed. Now these new members would replace them. Before Rakuto could respond, a classmate hesitantly called out to him, worried by the sudden pressure. Rakuto exchanged a brief look with the girl, silently acknowledging the weight of what lay ahead. She quietly wished him well. It was a small gesture, but one filled with quiet concern. The hunter cut them off, signaling it was time. Their hesitation wouldn't delay the mission further. Rakuto took the lead. The others followed, nerves tense as they stepped into the unknown together. Above ground, wyverns continued circling the skies, keeping Anashima sealed and cutting off aerial travel completely. The party advanced through a large tunnel, once public infrastructure, now a vital but dangerous travel route. Tension grew with every step. One member asked to slow down, clearly nervous in the silence. Their flashlight revealed movement. A woman stood eerily still, holding a child, her expression frozen unnaturally. Suddenly, the woman's body twisted grotesquely, revealing a monster mimicking humans. A deadly trap was already sprung. After escaping danger, the group temporarily secured the train station, unsure of what to do next. One member recalled Hizaki's idea, reviving an old transportation method to fight back or escape the tunnels. He explained it clearly. Not magic, not strategy, just raw power from the station's remaining train. Their target was the giant earthworm monster. The train's force might be enough to kill it. Luckily, a train was still parked deep in the station, damaged, but possibly ready to be restarted. Elsewhere, the digging team continued working with makeshift tools, hoping their effort would support everyone's survival plan. Watching them from a distance, one boy wondered aloud if the girls could handle their assignment. Silence hung in the tunnel. Everyone understood the weight of the task ahead for both sides. Repairing the train would take time. The hunters were expected to protect and supply during the wait. Understanding dawned. Hunting now meant more than fighting. It was about retrieving everything necessary to keep people alive. The team walked cautiously through the tunnel, nerves high, each step echoing with uncertain anticipation and pressure. One of the older boys joked about useless trash being reused, trying to lighten the grim tension. The joke caught Bruno off guard. Nervous, he admitted he wasn't confident about handling such danger. Despite the situation, Rakuto acknowledged the reality they were already part of this world and its risks. Now accepted by the shelter, they had responsibilities to fulfill, and rules they were expected to follow. The group advanced deeper into the tunnel, maintaining focus while exchanging small talk to ease tension. Rakuto noticed something odd. Everyone's mood was strangely upbeat despite the danger they were walking into. He questioned the unusually high morale. Shouldn't fear and anxiety be stronger than their relaxed expressions? Above them, wyverns still soared. At any moment, the situation could turn deadly without warning. Rakuto wondered why they smiled. Did they really accept this, or just push the fear away? Bruno recalled Hizaki's leadership. His organized plans had helped many survive through chaos when everything first collapsed. He admitted Hizaki's charisma was real. Something about him kept people hopeful, even when odds worsened. But Rakuto had doubts. Something felt off, especially about the worm blocking the path to Anashima. If it was such a major threat, why hadn't it moved or attacked more aggressively yet? Before he could finish thinking, a senior member called them out, snapping them back to focus. The team reached a wide platform, silently preparing themselves for what was waiting above ground. Nervous energy filled the air. No one spoke, but everyone understood the risk they were taking. Their leader moved without hesitation. One by one, they followed, footsteps heavy but steady with resolve. The group approached the final stairwell. This path led them back to the surface and to danger. At the base of the stairs, they paused. Their leader pointed upward. "That's the exit above." The man explained the tactic. Hunters use flares to distract wyverns and extract needed surface supplies. He demonstrated with a flare gun pulling monsters' focus while others quickly moved through their blind spots. Flares were limited. Each one used had to count, meaning every mission carried precise expectations and risk. He emphasized understanding enemy positions. Without that knowledge, the flare would be wasted and lives could be lost. Without hesitation, he called them forward. The new recruits would prove themselves now on the surface, under fire. Their senior barked the order harshly, daring anyone to back down or be labeled as weak. His words were sharp, pressing their pride. The implication was clear: refuse and you're nothing to them. Bruno whispered uneasily to Rikuto, realizing these upper ranks might view them as disposable tools, not teammates. Rikuto saw the truth. The new recruits were likely being tested or sacrificed for someone else's gain. Resolute, Rikuto stepped forward. If survival required action, he'd move first. Waiting would only invite more danger. Rikuto moved to the front confidently, drawing everyone's eyes as he volunteered to scout ahead. One name echoed in his mind: Fuyuse Ginko. The older boy stepped up beside him, unshaken. A teammate teased Ginko's bravery, implying he always took on difficult jobs without showing much emotion. Ginko explained it wasn't about courage. One mistake in scouting could doom everyone following behind them. Understanding the weight of that truth, Rikuto nodded. Without hesitation, another teammate stepped up to follow him. Rikuto stayed calm beside Ginko, silent but steady, preparing himself mentally before stepping into potential chaos. Ginko scoffed, teasing him sharply. He questioned if Rikuto thought he was playing some heroic role. Rikuto replied honestly it wasn't about ego. 2 scouts made sense for survival, not status or glory. He explained logically, if one scout failed, the second could adapt, distract, or complete the mission. Ginko blinked in surprise. This quiet kid had guts and a clear head most rookies didn't have. Rikuto made his decision clear: he would scout ahead, putting his logic into immediate action now. Nishi offered to join, worried for him. But Rikuto calmly refused, determined to handle it himself. He reassured everyone he wasn't planning to die. He'd return safely, this wasn't some suicide mission. Ginko nodded and took the lead. With a final glance back, Rikuto followed him without hesitation. 15 minutes into the surface operation, the scouts advanced carefully through narrow alleys and exposed streets. Ginko crouched suddenly, eyes locked on something small and green poking through the cracked pavement nearby. Curious, Rikuto approached and asked what Ginko was doing with such focus on a simple plant. Ginko explained, it was a mandrake. Pulling it could release a deadly scream at close range. Rikuto understood instantly. Even weeds here weren't normal. Every detail could be a danger disguised as scenery. And then, beneath the mandrake, the words "don't pull out" were scrawled clearly into the dirt. Rikuto realized this wasn't just rare flora. It matched dangerous plants from old warnings and survival texts. Ginko sighed in disbelief. Rikuto's lack of basic field knowledge left him genuinely concerned and annoyed. He called Rikuto out, accusing him of acting tough just to impress someone, which was reckless. But Rikuto corrected him. He wasn't seeking approval, he wanted to earn trust and prove his value. The group examined a ruined building, discussing how far they could safely move without losing protection. As long as the base was hidden nearby, they felt justified keeping things flexible and mobile. But some team members grew overconfident, laughing off caution and ignoring risks outside their small protected zone. Ginko muttered at their reasoning. It sounded logical, but too much logic could quickly turn to arrogance. Suddenly the air shifted. A violent strike hit the ground, sending leaves and bodies scattering instantly. Sensing incoming danger, Ginko instantly activated his ability. Purple energy flared as he prepared to engage. He launched forward with intense speed, closing the gap between him and the threat without hesitation. Even Rikuto, already on alert, was caught off guard by Ginko's acceleration and sudden forward motion. The force of Ginko's momentum cracked the air. He leapt over his teammates with flawless agility. In one motion, Ginko flipped above a rooftop, aiming straight for whatever had threatened their formation. Rikuto raised his weapon and leapt, ready to respond if another threat revealed itself nearby. He dashed with speed, matching Ginko's urgency, determined not to fall behind in this critical moment. He spotted a strange figure, metallic and human-like, but clearly lacking any sign of combat movement patterns. Though he could attack, Rikuto realized it wasn't hostile. He considered capturing it without starting conflict. Making his decision, Rikuto moved to flank it, choosing caution, not aggression, as his first real tactic. Without warning, Ginko struck Rikuto hard, knocking him off balance before he could react or respond. The force of the hit threw Rikuto backward through the air, caught off guard by Ginko's strength. He hit the ground hard. The pain stunned him, but more than that, the message stung deeper. Standing above him, Ginko coldly repeated himself, calling Rikuto weak, unfit to survive if he hesitated again. Rikuto stared upward in silence, absorbing the lesson as Ginko turned away and walked toward their mission. Without hesitation, Ginko jumped upward, his body twisting mid-air as he launched toward the nearest rooftop. His feet landed perfectly. Using the window frame, he kicked off again, leaping higher with fluid control. Rikuto watched from below as Ginkgo soared between buildings, his shadow growing smaller with every bound. Ginkgo's voice echoed down, sharp and dismissive. He warned Rikuto not to interfere or get involved, but Rikuto shouted after him, insisting teamwork mattered. Even strength meant nothing if it led to recklessness. Ginkgo smirked from above, mocking Rikuto's lecture. He clearly had no plans of backing down. With a dismissive wave, he launched himself off the rooftop again, his movements confident and unshaken. Rikuto shouted after him, voice edged with worry. But Ginkgo gave no sign of slowing. Rikuto stood alone, uncertain. He stared upward, torn between orders and the instinct to follow anyway. Meanwhile, Ginkgo scouted ahead, spotting 3 wyverns gathered on a nearby rooftop, their wings ready to strike. Ginkgo narrowed his eyes, scanning the horizon. With calm precision, he began locking in visual targets. The wyvern's size made them easy to spot. From high ground, even distant movement was visible. He knew their patrol range. Staying quiet and distant, he completed his task without alerting the enemy. With scouting done, Ginkgo leapt away. He planned to grab something extra before returning to report. As he soared, he reflected sending the rookie back had advantages beyond just keeping him safe. Ginkgo sprinted through the narrow streets, blade drawn and senses sharp for any signs of movement. He landed smoothly after another leap, adjusting his momentum to maintain speed and scan for threats. Spotting a shortcut, he made a sharp turn, planning to circle back toward the main road. Just as he entered the alley, something stirred. Ginkgo paused, his instincts warning of incoming danger. A red wyvern landed ahead of him, snarling and blocking the path with flaring wings and teeth. Ginkgo squared off against the wyvern, gripping his blade while trying to assess the unfamiliar species. Suddenly, he noticed several large, intact eggs nearby, something he hadn't expected to find in this area. His breath caught. If these were eggs, then he was standing inside a freshly established wyvern nest. A loud screech confirmed it. One of the wyverns reacted violently, charging straight toward him in fury. Realizing his mistake too late, Ginkgo clenched his jaw, eyes wide as he braced for the attack. Rikuto froze, eyes wide. As a sudden energy surge crackled behind him, something powerful had awakened. Ginkgo stood still as dust floated. He no longer expected rescue, he had accepted being alone. Screams exploded behind him. A monstrous beast tore through someone as Ginkgo barely dodged its lunging attack. She ran with heavy breaths, heart pounding. The hallway stretched endlessly, and the creature didn't stop. Everyone saw Ginkgo as strange pale hair, cold eyes, but none guessed what hid beneath his silence. The monster chased, but Ginkgo leapt. Muscles tightened, instincts sharpened. He moved far beyond normal human limits. Ginkgo landed hard. The monster's claws missed, but its roar echoed, shaking the glass around him. He whispered to himself, "Empty halls around him, there's no one on my side." Only silence answered. He kept running, lungs aching. There had never been anyone, never friends, never help. Just isolation. Once they mocked him in the courtyard, laughing loud, not caring if he saw or not. In class, they whispered cruel things behind his back. They thought he wouldn't hear. He always did. Ginkgo sat quietly, eyes on the window. No one noticed, and no one ever cared. Voices behind him talked loud. Someone named Rumiko. Gossip traveled faster than truth ever could in school. Laughter followed. From a window above, Ginkgo watched them point, mock, and insult without hesitation. Ginkgo approached the playground slowly. They stared as if he wasn't human. He carried their books anyway. They laughed harder. "Get lost," one boy said, pushing Ginkgo back like throwing away something unwanted. Ginkgo approached carefully, returning a dropped item. The girl panicked, reacting as if he meant harm. Whispers turned harsh. The crowd quickly labeled him a threat. Rumors grew stronger than anything he'd done. He stayed quiet, watching them walk away. It confirmed what experience had taught him again and again. Isolation became routine. Ginkgo stopped seeking kindness, turning away from places others gathered, accepting the silence. Atop the rooftop, Ginkgo rested alone. This distance felt safer than rejection. He never asked again. Ginkgo crouched beside the rooftop ledge, eyes empty. The sounds of destruction echoed from the streets. A memory surfaced, her voice gentle. She was the only one who treated him like a person. She had believed others would understand him someday, but no one ever tried. No one stayed. Now monsters flew overhead. Ginkgo didn't flinch. He had seen worse, wearing school uniforms and fake smiles. And staring at the beast, he smirked. Mom was so full of shit, he muttered bitterly. Rikuto arrived without hesitation. His timing was exact, just before the monster could strike a final blow. In one motion, Rikuto eliminated the threat. Ginkgo, still wounded, watched from the ground in disbelief. The scene didn't feel real. Ginkgo had never seen anyone confront danger on his behalf. And Rikuto stood tall, scanning the area. He moved with purpose, ignoring Ginkgo's startled expression entirely. He issued an order calmly. Ginkgo, overwhelmed but alert, obeyed as Rikuto stepped forward to assess threats. Rikuto stayed focused, analyzing the monster's behavior. He remained calm, unaffected by the creature's growing aggression. He grabbed a flare and ignited it instantly. The bright light cut through the midday sky. The flare glowed hot in his hand. Ginkgo realized Rakuto was more than he first appeared. Rakuto sprinted into the street, using the flare to redirect the monster's attention away from Ginkgo. Behind him, a beast paused. Ginkgo watched silently as Rakuto led the threat further from the rooftop. Ginkgo stood up cautiously. The monster didn't follow. He realized the flare had redirected their attention. Below, Rakuto ran with purpose. The creatures gave chase, fully focused on the burning flare he carried. Their deafening roars confirmed that they were baited successfully. Rakuto stayed calm, satisfied that the plan was working. He kept moving. Every step had meaning. He was buying time for others, not for himself. As one monster lunged, Rakuto dodged swiftly. The danger was far from over, but he didn't stop. Rakuto turned and swung the steel pipe. It connected hard, buying him a second to react. The hit wasn't enough. The creatures recovered quickly, still pressing toward him without hesitation or fear. He realized their speed matched his. He couldn't outrun them forever, not without a better plan. Still, he kept running. With the flare burning bright, he couldn't afford to stop or slow. Breathing hard, Rakuto glanced back. He was almost out of space and the monsters were gaining ground. Rakuto paused. Something felt wrong. The air shifted, and his instincts warned him before he looked up. Above, a new group of monsters soared in. Their numbers were growing, drawn by the flare. He watched silently as they circled lower. Their formation was deliberate. This wasn't random movement anymore. Rakuto understood. The flare had worked too well. Now reinforcements were coming in full force. Surrounded from above and behind, he prepared himself. The monsters shrieked, diving in fast without hesitation. Rakuto gripped the weapon tightly. His breathing slowed as he assessed escape routes and enemy positions. Elsewhere, Ginkgo collapsed behind a wall. He gasped for air, realizing the monsters had ignored him. He stared ahead, stunned. Rakuto had pulled them away on purpose. The danger was meant for him. Ginkgo's thoughts spiraled. That voice, that presence, none of it felt unfamiliar. A memory surfaced, sharp and clear. He looked up, trembling. Rakuto, are you serious? It was someone he never expected to see again. Dark creatures flew across the sky. Their shadows spread through the city as their numbers kept increasing. Rakuto saw the swarm descend. It wasn't birds, it was a coordinated attack headed straight for him. He ran faster, lungs burning. The monsters closed in, forcing him to choose every turn carefully. There's just a little more distance, Rakuto thought. He needed space just enough to redirect them once more. His body ached, but he pushed forward. He needed to keep moving before it was too late. Rakuto swung fast, but the monster moved quicker. Its claws raked across his side, drawing blood. He stumbled, pain shooting through his ribs. The street blurred as crimson streaked the concrete around him. With gritted teeth, he pushed forward. But each breath was harder, and each step lost power. His legs collapsed. Gasping, Rakuto questioned everything. Was this truly all he could manage in the end? Staring upward, trembling, he realized the monsters weren't slowing, and he was running out of options. Surrounded and cornered, Rakuto stood ready. Above, the creatures circled like predators, sensing the final moment. He forced his body to rise. Injured and winded, he knew he couldn't outrun them anymore. Rakuto assessed the situation. No weapons left, no backup coming. This was survival through will alone now. He muttered to himself, checkmate. There were no winning moves, only a final stand to delay defeat. With a last breath, he steadied his footing. The monsters dived in for the finishing blow. A massive shockwave erupted in the distance. Wind and debris swept between buildings, signaling something destructive arrived. Ginkgo sensed a shift in pressure. The monsters halted. Something stronger had taken command of attention. Driven by instinct, Ginkgo sprinted across the rooftop edge. His body moved before reason caught up. He lost balance mid-step. The sudden force from below cracked pavement and broke nearby glass panels. He paused, stunned. The power in the air wasn't natural. It was something overwhelming and completely unknown. Ginkgo sprinted through narrow streets. His surroundings blurred, but the force pulling him forward only grew stronger. He reached the corner and paused. Something up ahead felt unnatural, unnerving, like the air had shifted. From the rooftop, he spotted motionless bodies below. The alley was littered with collapsed monster corpses. He climbed down, walking slowly through the destruction. Not one of the creatures showed any movement. Their bodies were torn open, lifeless and still. Ginkgo stared, stunned. These monsters hadn't just fallen, they were killed. Ginkgo stepped toward Rakuto's body. The battle's aftermath was silent, only broken by wind and breath. Rakuto stirred faintly, injured but alive. Blood marked his uniform, his breathing uneven and slow from exertion. He had removed the device. Doing so meant death if the monster's scream reached him directly. Ginkgo stood frozen. Rakuto had sacrificed safety to act as a decoy. The choice wasn't logical. Rakuto staring at him, Ginkgo's thoughts narrowed. He couldn't understand why someone would trade pain for his life. Rakuto reacted to a sudden noise. His eyes narrowed, instincts warning him something was rapidly approaching. Both turned at once. An intense surge hit the alley, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Neither could speak, only confusion as they stared at the nearby wall where the sound originated. A scream echoed through the streets, distant but loud enough to jolt both of them alert. Ginkgo stepped forward, shaken. The sight before him challenged logic. Rikuto, somehow alive after all that damage. Blood trickled down Rikuto's ear. He had removed the earpiece, exposing himself to the monster's scream. Ginkgo realized what Rikuto had done. He hadn't just risked his life, he deliberately triggered danger. That moment was a gamble. Rikuto acted without certainty, choosing instinct over strategy to change everything. Before the scream struck, he launched forward. Pain flared, but the enemy faltered from his unpredictability. He grabbed one monster midair, using it as a shield. It worked, but at heavy cost. Using one monster as a barrier, Rikuto hurled it into another, blocking the incoming sound wave. The technique worked, but with a cost. His left eardrum ruptured from the intense shock pressure. Ginkgo stood frozen, processing what Rikuto had done. It wasn't bravery, it was reckless, calculated desperation. Rikuto touched his ear. Blood traced his jawline, but he didn't show regret or hesitation. Unable to hold it in, Ginkgo shouted. He didn't understand how anyone could risk that much. Ginkgo helped Rikuto walk. Their escape path was quiet now, but both carried deep internal damage. Rikuto spoke calmly, explaining the injury would heal. But his question hinted suspicion about Ginkgo's background. Ginkgo paused, caught off guard. He hadn't expected concern, especially from someone who risked everything moments earlier. Frustrated, he muttered about Rikuto's stubbornness. Despite his words, Ginkgo's grip didn't loosen. He didn't pull away. A thought surfaced. Ginkgo began to wonder if Rikuto, unlike others, could handle the full truth. The monsters were unnatural. Their arrival wasn't random. Something had triggered their emergence into this human world. Leaning on Rikuto, Ginkgo recalled what he knew. The cause wasn't unknown to him anymore. He considered telling Rikuto. For the first time, Ginkgo felt someone might understand without running away. He whispered one word, "Mom." It was the beginning of everything. Of monsters, screams, and human collapse. Far above them, the sky shimmered. Whatever was hidden behind this chaos was beginning to reveal itself. Rikuto stood outside the building as the young wyverns gang suddenly surrounded the main entrance. One of the smaller thugs whispered nervously, fearing the consequences if Ijima lost his patience again. Ijima lifted his bat and shouted, telling his men to stay quiet and stop acting foolishly. He realized the city would remain chaotic unless he forced everyone to follow his strict methods. Ijima praised Rikuto's courage, promising to remember this moment as he led them back downtown together. Rikuto stood calmly while his classmates approached, surprised by his new confidence and determined expression today. They spoke nervously. Realizing Rikuto's focus had shifted entirely, he ignored them, eyes fixed ahead silently. Weeks passed, Rikuto integrated with the group, learning survival tactics, fighting beside them against common threats. His choice to stand firm that day earned respect, changing their opinion and strengthening their unity. Now, united, they faced larger dangers, including monstrous wyverns, ready to protect their devastated city together. The group gathered supplies from abandoned streets, knowing survival required cooperation and constant awareness of danger. They marched forward together, weapons ready, never forgetting death waited around every corner without hesitation. Ijima led with determination, shouting orders that kept everyone focused and prepared for the next threat. Once timid, Ginkgo had become strong, standing beside Rikuto with a fierce will to survive. As dragons attacked, Rikuto and Ginkgo leapt forward, determined to protect their group from certain destruction. Two girls searched the rubble carefully, gathering supplies their group needed to keep everyone alive longer. Rikuto watched them work, knowing survival demanded endless effort, and each day tested their remaining strength. At night, everyone gathered around the fire, sharing food and quiet moments before danger returned again. Though they survived together, Rikuto felt uneasy, sensing something hidden that disturbed his thoughts each evening. Rumors spread about a traitor secretly taking resources, breaking trust and weakening their already fragile community bonds. Rikuto stood outside the tent, staring into darkness, wondering how long survival could really last. Time passed slowly as he walked the corridors, always alert for threats hiding in the shadows. His friend joined him, asking quietly if Rikuto's ears had finally healed after the recent explosion. Rikuto nodded, admitting hearing remained difficult, but he refused to let weakness stop his nightly patrols. Sighing, his friend wondered aloud how long this underground life would trap them in constant fear. Rikuto's friend noticed a commotion nearby and turned to see people arguing near the storage room. Ginkgo stood tense, refusing help, while someone insisted she accept food and medicine she clearly didn't want. Frustrated, Ginkgo yelled she didn't need anything, her voice sharp as she threw the bottle away. She trembled, shouting she was tired of their pity, never wanting to depend on anyone else. Angry tears fell as she declared no hunter could ever understand what her struggle really meant. Ginkgo walked away silently, leaving everyone unsure whether to follow or let her be alone again. One teammate tried to comfort her, but she insisted everything was fine and nothing needed further discussion. He hesitated, admitting he wouldn't pry, though her calm reply felt forced and hard to trust. Thinking back, he realized Ginkgo resembled Rakuto, always distant whenever someone asked about feelings or personal struggles. Nearby, Ijima's group laughed loudly, acting almost celebratory despite tension rising among the others in camp. Some groups whispered in corners, while others watched silently, waiting for something important to finally happen. Rakuto noticed the tense atmosphere, wondering why everyone seemed alert, like news might arrive at any moment. His friend explained it was time for bonuses, given to people who performed well in missions. They talked about Hizawa rewarding effort, but another topic seemed more urgent than just the extra supplies. Ginkgo stepped forward seriously, telling Rakuto she had been observing him closely for the past 2 weeks. Rakuto approached the rubble cautiously, checking if the injured girl's leg had finally healed completely. She nodded weakly, explaining the manager's supplies let her perform first aid and stop the bleeding. Her friend sighed in relief, remembering the moment she saw the wound and feared the worst. Nearby, a man watched them, muttering that heavy labor seemed too dangerous for untrained girls to attempt. Smiling coldly, he announced he'd reassign them from digging duty to kitchen work, effective immediately. Sakura lifted her arms in relief, feeling grateful her leg was no longer in pain. Her friend watched quietly, sensing something strange in the air but unable to name the feeling. They both noticed how the others stared, silent, with expressions that looked almost like hidden pity. Confused, she wondered why everyone's eyes held sadness, as if expecting them to fail eventually. Sakura urged her friend to return quickly, eager to leave the uneasy atmosphere behind them both. Rakuto looked up as Ginkgo welcomed them back, her tone serious despite the casual greeting. She called Rakuto forward, saying there was something important he needed to hear without any delay. Though she preferred privacy, she decided everyone should listen, knowing the truth would change their lives. Ginkgo asked if they wanted to learn the real cause behind the Great Calamity's sudden arrival. She explained calmly that she could reveal its true origin if they were ready to listen. Ginkgo took a breath, explaining this disaster likely started because one specific man became involved directly. Everyone listened closely as he revealed the shocking idea that a single person caused everything happening now. He spoke clearly, saying the man's name was someone they might have heard rumors about before. With a steady voice, he declared the culprit was Kurogen Serato, leaving everyone completely stunned silent. The name echoed in Rikuto's mind, heavy with memories he had tried hard to forget. Ginkgo looked at him seriously, saying no wonder he survived. They shared the same cursed bloodline. Rikuto confirmed Serato was his older brother, though he never imagined he'd cause such suffering. He insisted it didn't matter anymore, but Sakura stared quietly, unable to hide her unease and pity. Rikuto demanded Ginkgo explain exactly how Serato had started the great calamity that destroyed their peaceful world. Ginkgo's voice was steady, as she said she was certain Serato caused every terrible event. She clenched her hand, confessing that because of him, her mother lost everything she once cherished. Her mind drifted back, remembering fragments of life before the great calamity changed the world forever. A quiet house stood under clear skies, a place holding secrets no one had ever revealed. Inside, a young boy watched a screen, muttering about those guys appearing again to interfere. The battle raged as Rakuto observed every monster, quickly learning their patterns and their dangerous weaknesses. He knew slimes moved slowly, but could overwhelm careless fighters who underestimated their strange, shifting forms. Golems fell once struck on their foreheads, but reaching that weak point took skill and courage. Wyverns circled the battlefield endlessly, forcing Rakuto's group to move constantly or risk sudden, deadly ambushes. But this monstrous boss felt different, its size and power unmatched by anything they had fought before. Serato watched the screen with fascination as the huge monster attacked his tiny digital character again. He leaned back on the couch, wondering how to defeat it without using all remaining resources. Smiling, he thought this game his mother programmed was truly challenging and surprisingly fun to play. The balanced difficulty felt rewarding, each victory delivering a rush of satisfaction he rarely experienced otherwise. Hearing the clock chime, he sighed, deciding it was time to leave and head out. The hospital stood quiet under the sun, holding memories Serato wished he could easily forget forever. He walked the hall, repeating his mother's room number in his mind to stay focused. Pushing the door open, he paused, surprised to see an unexpected visitor already waiting inside calmly. He recognized Yukina, who seemed annoyed and uninterested in any polite conversation about Serato's sudden visit. Serato reminded him he was the largest shareholder, daring Yukina to keep refusing his formal invitation again. Yukina looked up slowly, recognizing Serato's voice, feeling both dread and anger fill his tired thoughts. He reminded Serato he had resigned, insisting he was only a dying man needing quiet now. Serato laughed coldly, mocking Yukina as the genius everyone admired, but who wasted potential on nothing important. He praised Yukina's myth summon system, calling it the company's greatest achievement ever built by human hands. Smiling, Serato demanded Yukina spend his final days helping finish the project he valued more than life. Serato sighed, annoyed by Yukina's silence, deciding it was pointless to keep pleading any longer now. He admitted he'd only visited because Yukina was dying, hoping to get clear approval before proceeding. Instead, Serato declared the company records were enough, promising he'd reshape the world using Yukina's knowledge. Before leaving, he warned Yukina not to regret refusing him, his eyes cold and unfeeling again. Yukina watched silently as Serato walked away, a bitter smile forming despite the darkness spreading inside. Yukina sighed, noticing Ginko arrive quietly, pretending not to care about Serato's earlier visit to him. Ginko tried to ask questions, but Yukina dismissed it, insisting Serato was nothing worth discussing again. Instead, Yukina focused on Ginko, reminding him it was a school day he shouldn't be skipping. Ginko looked away nervously, mumbling that he hadn't gone because he simply didn't feel like attending. He crossed his arms, complaining his classmates were boring idiots, making school feel pointless every single day. Yukina watched Ginko sulk, then gently urged him to smile because smiles always connected people together. Ginko flinched, annoyed, insisting forced cheerfulness was meaningless and he didn't need anyone's sympathy to survive. Crossing his arms, he declared he could live alone without help, proving he wasn't truly dependent. Yukina asked quietly why Ginko always stepped in to help strangers if he really felt that way. Smiling softly, Yukina reassured him it was okay, because he simply had a genuinely kind heart. Ginko turned to the window, feeling awkward after Yukina's kind words he didn't know how to answer. Yukina suggested they change topics, hoping to talk about something more cheerful to lighten the mood. Ginko mentioned the old game Yukina created, proudly explaining he finally defeated the tough North District boss. Yukina was impressed, admitting he'd designed that area to be a serious test for experienced players. Ginko agreed, adding that the game stayed exciting since monsters kept adapting new unpredictable attack patterns. Morning sunlight touched the hospital, while Ginko kept thinking about the game that never reached completion. He teased Yukina, claiming the main character Silvio was obviously based on him in every detail. Yukina only laughed softly, admitting it was possible, but he'd never actually confirmed the connection aloud. Ginko sighed, saying the game would be famous if Yukina had released it like everyone hoped. When asked about the ending, Yukina smiled mysteriously and called it an unspoken secret he'd keep. Ginko clutched the memories tightly, wishing every hour with Yukina could last far longer. Somehow, he never expected everything would collapse so suddenly, the last grains of time slipping away forever. Standing frozen, he faced an army of monsters that appeared as the world began to end. His voice shook as he asked what this nightmare was, fear crawling up his spine slowly. Flames swallowed the city skyline as Kurogane stared, unable to believe everything was truly collapsing forever now. Screams and monstrous roars exploded while survivors fought desperately, blades clashing with claws under the burning red sky. Blood spattered across broken concrete where dozens of terrified people were slaughtered, their cries echoing without any answer. He watched helplessly as strangers ran past, screaming for help, their faces twisted in pure hopeless terror. Standing alone amid shattered bricks, he realized something was wrong, his body trembling with unfamiliar dreadful anticipation. His eyes locked on the cracked phone, realization forming as monsters flooded out from every screen. He whispered shakily, monsters came alive from smartphones, murdering people without mercy, shattering every normal thing known. Turning slowly, he listed them aloud, lizardmen, black dog, and even a harpy from old nightmares. They were exact copies of creatures designed in that game he once played obsessively for countless nights. He gasped in horror, remembering his mother, the programmer who created that game's world and enemies. He stumbled back, heart racing, shouting that now was not the time to remember anything painful. Determined, he turned away quickly, whispering he must go find his mother before everything was lost. He stopped when he heard weak cries for help from a woman pinned by monsters. She screamed at him to stay away, calling him a freak as her eyes widened. Swallowing guilt, he ran into the burning street, leaving her behind to escape the chaos. He clenched his teeth, recalling his mother's gentle smile before everything descended into violent chaos around him. A monster turned, noticing his movement, its eyes locking onto him with a chilling, hungry glare. He dove behind wooden crates as the creature lunged, claws raking the air where he stood. Heart pounding, he thought this killing intent was nothing like playing the safe game before. Breathing hard, he whispered it was all right, forcing himself to stand as terror filled him. Ginko saw a creature crushing a girl, her weak cries blending into the city's burning noise. He struck fast, knocking the monster aside, giving her a moment to crawl away and breathe. As the monster stumbled, Ginko knew it would recover soon and attack him without hesitation again. He noticed their physical strength was extreme, but their stamina seemed limited, almost equal to human endurance. Thinking quickly, Ginko decided he'd survive by running. Avoiding battles unless escape was absolutely impossible. One monster screeched, lunging forward again, its claws scraping the floor as it charged at Ginko. Ginko braced himself, but the creature leapt onto him, pinning his shoulders with unexpected brutal force. Struggling, he twisted hard, managing to shove the monster aside before it could bite his neck. Breathing raggedly, Ginkgo stood still, watching the creature collapse lifeless after exhausting its strength completely. Without wasting a second, Ginkgo turned and ran again, determined to survive whatever happened next outside. Ginkgo stared at the dying woman, her hand weakly outstretched toward him in silent pleading. Trembling, Ginkgo whispered an apology, feeling guilt crush his chest like a weight he couldn't bear. He reached down, taking her bloodied hand for a moment before releasing it with shaking fingers. Without looking back, Ginkgo ran forward, forcing himself not to hesitate again or break completely apart. Everywhere he turned, brutal scenes unfolded. Monsters tearing people apart in streets lit by spreading fires. Bats circled the hospital tower as Ginkgo approached, praying he'd find his mother still alive inside. He fought desperately, slashing at monsters that lunged from dark corners, his breathing ragged with fear. Ginkgo staggered back, realizing the hospital halls were overrun, no safe path left to move through. Panic growing, he whispered his mother's name over and over, forcing himself to keep searching. Heart hammering, Ginkgo screamed for her, voice echoing down the corridor filled with blood and shadows. Ginkgo stepped carefully into the room, noticing how strangely clean and untouched everything looked around him. He whispered that there were no corpses or blood, confusion tightening his chest like a vice. Ginkgo wondered if she had escaped, his mind racing through every possibility he could think of. He called out, voice cracking, before falling silent when no answer came from the empty shadows. Realization struck. He had wasted precious time, and he clenched his fists, swearing to keep searching harder. Ginkgo spotted his mother sitting against the wall, typing frantically with a determined look in her eyes. She muttered that if her predictions were right, everything happening now followed the game's original design. Her voice trembled as she admitted the only comfort was having her son still alive nearby. Ginkgo cried out, relieved to see her safe, and reached down to pull her up. When she didn't respond, Ginkgo froze, confusion filling him as he whispered her name again softly. Ginkgo's mother looked up, her eyes wide, whispering everything happening was somehow all because of her. He insisted they had to leave, admitting he didn't fully understand but knew staying was dangerous. Pulling her close, Ginkgo pleaded, reminding her they would die if they remained trapped in hiding. She finally nodded weakly, agreeing she couldn't die yet, her voice steadying as she stood up. Suddenly, a monstrous shape rushed toward them, claws slashing the air as it closed the distance. Ginkgo froze, staring in shock as the massive creature's shadow loomed over him and his mother. A giant scorpion charged forward, its claws smashing furniture as it shrieked with terrifying inhuman rage. Ginkgo recognized it immediately, a mid-boss monster meant for later stages, now appearing far too soon. The monster's claw destroyed the computer, and Ginkgo yelled for his mother to move back quickly. They braced themselves as the scorpion advanced, its deadly pincers snapping loudly with each heavy step. Ginkgo stood protectively in front of his mother, gripping a weapon, eyes locked on approaching danger. The giant scorpion stomped closer, its legs crushing debris, as Ginkgo shielded his terrified mother carefully. He glanced back at her shaking form, promising he would protect her no matter what happened. Studying the creature, Ginkgo remembered how its armored body moved quickly, even with such a size. He knew these monsters had killed him countless times in the game, but knowledge was power. Ginkgo focused on the scorpion's head, recalling the vulnerable orange spot that marked its hidden weakness. Ginkgo's thoughts raced, replaying every memory of fighting this monster during countless hours inside the game. He questioned why he alone retained this knowledge, wondering if any of it truly mattered now. His mother coughed weakly, apologizing through gasps, unable to stand or flee no matter how hard she tried. Ginkgo clenched his fists, realizing he could run alone but she would never be able to. Determined, he launched forward toward the scorpion, knowing he had no choice but to attack first. Ginkgo sprinted around the scorpion, heart racing as he searched for a clear opening to strike. The monster shrieked, thrashing its claws wildly, trying to crush him before he could close in. Ginkgo waited, watching its movements carefully, knowing he had only one chance to land a blow. He lunged forward, confident his timing was perfect, ready to hit the weak spot he memorized. A sudden impact hit his side, knocking him off balance before he realized what was happening. Ginkgo struggled to regain balance, feeling pain shoot through his body as the scorpion loomed closer. He jumped aside just in time, the creature's claw smashing down where he'd stood seconds earlier. Ginkgo cursed under his breath, realizing his perfect opportunity to strike had been completely thrown off track. He gasped, twisting his body as another attack came, narrowly avoiding the deadly armored stinger sweeping past. Breathing heavily, Ginkgo braced himself again as the scorpion advanced, determined not to let him escape. Ginkgo steadied his breath, tightening his grip as he prepared himself for one final desperate attempt. With a shout, he charged forward, aiming straight for the glowing weak spot he had studied. He felt hopelessness rising, convinced it was over as the scorpion's claws swung down in unison. Blood splattered through the air, but Ginkgo stayed standing, heart pounding as he waited for pain. Blinking in confusion, he turned to see his mother whispering his name with a trembling voice. Ginkgo froze in horror as he saw his mother shielding him, impaled by the scorpion's claw. She gasped, blood dripping down, as Ginkgo's mind went blank watching her collapse against the monster. His lips trembled. He could barely speak as the reality of her sacrifice overwhelmed his thoughts. With a cry, Ginkgo sprang forward, grief and rage pushing him beyond his own physical limits. He attacked fiercely, driving his weapon into the scorpion's weak point with all his remaining strength. Ginkgo's strike pierced deep into the monster's head, a spray of black fluid bursting everywhere. Instantly, the scorpion recoiled, its massive legs thrashing as it tried to shake Ginkgo free from its back. Screaming, Ginkgo clung tight, driving the weapon deeper, while adrenaline drowned out every other feeling inside him. Outside, the hospital loomed silent as more monsters gathered, drawn by the echoing roars and screams. Ginkgo gasped for breath, watching the scorpion slump, its body finally collapsing under its own weight. Ginkgo rushed to his mother's side, holding her upright as she coughed weakly, voice trembling. She rasped that he needed an antidote, but none existed in the game she created herself. He insisted the wound looked too severe, feeling panic rise as her breathing grew more unsteady. Her hand reached for his cheek, whispering she was proud and grateful for everything he had done. Ginkgo held her close, tears falling as he struggled to accept she might be leaving him. Voices echoed around Ginkgo, blaming him for everything. But he shook his head in confusion. His mother's hand reached toward him, her voice fading as she tried to say something important. Ginkgo watched her trembling fingers, wondering what she was pointing at through the dust and darkness. She whispered that hope still existed, hidden in the trail of data they had once created. Her breath shallow, she begged him to reach the research center, to save everyone and survive. Ginkgo remembered his father's words, warning him never to let darkness consume everything he loved dearly. His mother's voice broke through, calling his name softly, grounding him in the moment of pain. Ginkgo looked into her eyes, stunned as she whispered she had always loved him completely. Her words filled him with warmth, even as her strength faded and tears welled in his eyes. Shaking, Ginkgo promised he would survive and honor her, no matter what horrors still awaited outside. Ginkgo screamed until his voice broke, grief pouring out into the darkness of that ruined building. In a quiet room later, Ginkgo explained everything to the others, his expression distant and tired. One boy asked carefully if all of it truly began inside Manashima City like he described. Another student speculated there must be a castle and source hidden somewhere in that location. Ginkgo turned away, voice low, saying they could believe him or not. It didn't matter anymore. Rikuto stepped forward confidently, his voice calm as he promised they would face everything together now. He said they should travel to Manashima City as a group, without leaving Ginkgo behind again. Ginkgo stared at Rikuto's hand, surprised anyone could still trust or stand beside him after everything. With a tired sigh, Ginkgo admitted Rikuto was truly a soft-hearted kid who never gave up. Somewhere far away, hidden documents waited, containing secrets about the outbreak no one fully understood yet. One man closed the folder calmly while his colleague watched, curiosity sparking in his narrowed eyes. The red-haired man announced everyone would finally be rewarded for their hard work during the month. Smiling sharply, he declared it was bonus time, his voice echoing with unsettling satisfaction and finality. Rikuto and his colleague quietly carried boxes through the dim office, tension growing between them silently. Nearby workers chatted excitedly about upcoming bonuses, unaware of the uneasy glances exchanged behind their backs. Rikuto noticed their laughter and felt the difference. They seemed distant, part of another world entirely. He pitied those dreaming of bonuses, knowing monsters outside would crush their hopes without any mercy. While others laughed, Rikuto clenched his fists, determined to survive as chaos and destruction approached fast. Rikuto stood apart, observing coworkers enjoying themselves, their laughter echoing while he remained silent and watchful. He sensed the invisible line separating those clinging to comfort and those aware of coming chaos. Some still believed tomorrow would bring hope, but Rikuto knew disaster would reach them without warning. Doubt gripped him. He wondered if searching for answers was better than pretending everything was fine. Suddenly, shards of energy burst forth, shocking everyone. Rikuto remained calm, focused on what must happen. Rikuto heard harsh laughter behind him, noticing shadows gathering, as danger crept closer without pause. His colleague urged, "Rikuto, let's go help." Sensing something was wrong and needing to act quickly, Rikuto agreed quietly, determined to step forward, unwilling to ignore those in trouble this time. The bully shouted angrily, telling Rikuto and his friend to stay out of things, tension rising fast. Rikuto froze, facing a hooded figure. Realizing this was no ordinary threat, but something far worse, Rikuto stepped between them, watching the argument escalate. As the others glared at him with annoyance, Yoneda ordered them sternly to stop, reminding everyone not to disturb order or cause unnecessary problems here. The bully complained, claiming Rikuto was always interfering, while the girl lowered her head in quiet relief. She felt embarrassed by the attention, clutching her hands tightly, trying not to draw any more notice. Yoneda turned away calmly, telling everyone to move elsewhere, hoping to keep tensions from growing any worse. The hooded figure watched silently while the group shifted nervously, unsure what it planned to do. Rikuto approached the girl, kneeling down carefully, asking if she was okay or needed help. She gasped in surprise, startled by his kindness, unsure how to react to his sudden concern. Suddenly, the bully lunged forward, shouting angrily, ordering Rikuto to step away from the frightened girl immediately. Rikuto turned around quickly, confusion rising as his friends shouted his name, sensing danger approaching too fast. The girl called out nervously, her voice trembling as she addressed the man standing before Rikuto. Rikuto turned to her, surprised, realizing the angry man shouting was actually the frightened girl's father. The father stepped closer, declaring he would protect his daughter, no matter what danger approached them now. Rikuto tried to speak calmly, but the father interrupted, eyes wide with anger and something unspoken. He demanded answers, shouting at Rikuto, desperate to understand why his family was being targeted so suddenly. The father pulled his daughter close, shielding her as he glared at Rikuto with guarded suspicion. She clung to him, trembling, whispering apologies for everything that had happened to them that night. Rikuto watched silently, understanding their pain, then lowered his head as they prepared to leave together. He turned away slowly, agreeing it was time to move, though the air still felt heavy. Nearby, another man sat alone, clutching his head, whispering he hated this world more than anything. The young man buried his face in his hands, overwhelmed by frustration and a growing despair. A calm girl approached slowly, asking if he was all right. Noticing how pale and shaken he looked, he lifted his head slightly, startled by her gentle voice, unable to find any words to answer. He stammered out a denial, insisting he was fine, though his voice trembled with obvious uncertainty. She smiled softly, promising to leave food nearby, while he tried to thank her through embarrassment. She asked if he had officially joined their group, her expression calm under the dim lighting. He nodded hesitantly, explaining he had become a member that day, still unsure about everything happening. Trying to sound confident, he promised to do his best since there was no other option. Another girl called her away, saying the others had returned, and she quickly turned to leave. Left alone again, he mumbled nervously. Realizing this was the first time he'd felt so included, the storage room remained silent as a heavy feeling settled over everyone sitting under the dim lights. One student spoke, saying it felt strange they had survived here together for almost an entire month. He confessed it sometimes felt like a game designed to wear down everyone's will to resist. Another boy agreed, admitting it was easiest to follow instructions, though doubts always lingered in his thoughts. Rikuto stayed quiet, staring ahead, wondering why no one could explain what this place truly was. Two girls carried trays into the room, smiling and greeting everyone warmly after another long day surviving. One of the boys thanked them eagerly, his voice shaky as hunger and exhaustion mixed inside him. A pale student glared, demanding to know why they were the ones serving all the food. The girl explained quietly she had injured her leg, so they were assigned to kitchen duties instead. She apologized nervously, unsure why her explanation upset him, while her friend watched with a concerned expression. Two boys stood nearby, smirking quietly, watching the tension rise without offering any help or comment. The frustrated student clenched his fists, fury building as he blamed Hizaki for all his struggles. Without warning, he turned sharply and stormed away, leaving the others surprised by his sudden outburst. The girls called after him, but he ran faster, determined to act before doubts could stop him.